Chapter 151, Notice. Hey degenerates! It's ya boy Zenon, clawing my way out of the writing pit for a hot second to say something halfway reasonable for once. This is not a chapter, obviously, unless you think mental breakdowns count as plot development, in which case please log off. So here's the deal, starting next week, I'm taking one day off every week. And no, you can't stop me unless you're willing to ghostwrite in my sleep and feed me some sweets intravenously. For me, that day will be Saturday night. For some of you, that'll be Friday morning or Sunday afternoon or whatever distorted nonsense the universe throws at us. I don't know. I don't care. The point is, on that one sacred day, I will not be squeezing words out of my exhausted brain like it's a toothpaste tube made of trauma. Since I started doing this whole Power Stone goal thing, which, yes, thank you for always breaking because clearly you all live to push me closer to the sun, I've had to churn out 14 chapters per week. That's right. 14. 14. That's almost 2 chapters a day, which means I'm dangerously close to identifying as a sentient keyboard. It's been taxing emotionally, spiritually, physically, and probably metaphysically. So to avoid spontaneous combustion or waking up speaking only in Ren quotes, I'm taking one day to not write. Just one. That still leaves you with 12 chapters a week, which is more than most authors give unless they're being held hostage by a government project. So yeah, no chapter on that one day per week. But every other day, I'm still here, typing for my life. That's it. That's the announcement. Bye. Unless I die first. Chapter 152, Ren reacts to generational tragedy like it's mildly inconvenient. Tsunade lowered her head, her chakra receding like a tide after a storm. Before her, Ren stirred. His eyes opened slowly, then squinted, not from light, but from the overwhelming clarity. Everything felt layered. The world moved as if slowed by thick oil, revealing the substructure beneath every motion. So this is perfected hyperfocus, he thought, blinking slowly. No wonder Yoro was always able to react to everything. If you see all this and still get caught off guard, you're just trash. Seriously. He turned his head and saw Tsunade sitting beside him. Her face was passive, but he noticed the subtle signs, the faint trace of tiredness shadowing her eyes, the stiffness in her shoulders, and the way her fingers twitched, as though holding herself back from acting on emotion. His gaze shifted to Cho, the butterfly hovering nearby. With every flap of her wings, he could see how the air bent and recoiled, delicate currents forming and dispersing in complex patterns. Despite the depth of sensory input, his mind remained calm, stable. This wasn't like before, no threat of overload. It was all just natural. He sat up. The airflow brushed past his skin, and in that moment, he realized something even more ridiculous. If he so much as twisted his body slightly, he could feel exactly how that would change the movement of air around him. Damn. Perfected hyperfocus is so overpowered, he thought with awe. No wonder Minato could react to Night Guy at that speed. He glanced at Tsunade again. She, too, was surrounded by those threads of air, countless strands, each one a different path waiting to be chosen. He turned inward, channeling his chakra, and immediately felt the precise movement of it through his system. Every microscopic flow, every current. His chakra control would skyrocket at this rate. Then, the air behind them shifted, so subtly it would have gone unnoticed before. But not now. Kimura arrived with a flicker. I really need to test this properly, Ren mused. If I can feel the air shift before a flicker, then this might be even more busted than I thought. Kimura gave Ren a brief glance, then looked at Tsunade. Ms. Shizun has finished the treatment. They're about to come out. Tsunade nodded, then turned to Ren. Change your clothes. The Raikage shouldn't see you in this state. Ren stretched his limbs, casually replacing his torn and bloodied clothes. I'm in a great state, he muttered. Just so you know, I've never felt better. Tsunade's eyes narrowed slightly. It's good that your condition is stable, she said. But your combat ability is weakened right now. Until you've adjusted to what you've gained, you won't be able to use it properly. Though Tsunade didn't understand the flow, she knew it was something that came after the perfected hyperfocus and that she knew, so she understood that Ren must be facing some changes in his sense of perception which might take some time to adjust. He nodded in agreement. She was right. Even if he had perfected hyperfocus, he had yet to learn how to wield it as instinctively as he did his fists. A few minutes passed. The Raikage arrived, flanked by his subordinates and Shizun. He spared only a glance at Ren, then addressed Tsunade directly. Though you didn't do much, thanks for saving my subordinate, he said, tone gruff but not dismissive. Must be tough being the best medic in the world with your condition. Tsunade's expression turned neutral, her gaze unreadable. The Raikage gave her a slight nod and flickered away. His men offered brief thanks to her before disappearing after him. Ren watched the exchange with a curious expression. So, she's the one who healed me, he thought. That means she's not afraid of blood anymore. But the Raikage mentioned a condition. He tilted his head. Is she faking hemophobia for appearances, just like in those fanfics? It felt strange. In the original timeline, Tsunade's hemophobia stemmed from her helplessness, her inability to save her loved ones. That made sense. But if she had no trauma, no failure to weigh on her, it'd be like undermining her past, her tragedies. He frowned slightly. Then again, I don't think she's someone who needs pity. I better not bring it up. With her temperament, it'll just raise suspicions or piss her off. Despite the way they clashed often, he respected her. Their exchanges were sharp, sometimes heated, but never hateful. If anything, he'd call their relationship good, in a dysfunctional sort of way. As the others vanished, Shizun approached Tsunade with a sheepish look. I'm sorry, Lady Tsunade, she said quietly. They just kept talking about how you weren't the best medic anymore and I couldn't hold myself back. Tsunade shook her head. Don't worry, she said, voice cool and composed. Let's head back to the inn. This isn't a place to talk. With that, she flickered away, leaving only the barest echo of her chakra in the air. Ren, Kimura, and Shizun followed after her. Once they reached the inn where Ren had been staying, he looked around at the group that had followed him in and raised an eyebrow. So, why are we all in my room? Didn't you all have a place to stay before? Tsunade waved him off like he was a nuisance. You should learn to share, you brat. You've got such a nice room, and you were thinking of hogging it all to yourself? How shameless. With that, she collapsed onto the bed, arms behind her head like she owned the place. And what the hell were you thinking, fighting off the Nakazaru group on your own? Didn't it occur to you they even managed to poison the rakeage? Ren shrugged, nonchalant, as he sat cross-legged on the floor. I already confirmed who the insect user was, so I killed him first. The rest of them were interesting, real nasty stealth techniques. He leaned forward slightly, animated now. One of them could slip through fire, another through water. One had shadow control, like a Nara, and the last one was completely invisible. It's like they scoured the 5 great nations, stitched abilities together, and made some Chimera-style ninja. As he continued explaining the fight with detail and some enthusiasm, Tsunade's eye twitched. Shut up? Why do you talk so damn much? It's so annoying. Ren spoke. Must be painful for the ears of an old granny like you, huh? Tsunade scowled at that. You should call me big sister, you brat. He scoffed. Though your appearance might suggest that, don't you know your actual age makes you my grandma? Her eye twitched harder. You should call me big sister not because of my appearance, idiot, but because our grandfathers were brothers. Ren blinked. Huh, didn't know that. So my grandfather was the second Hokage. Tsunade nodded. Ren leaned back, nodding appreciatively. Cool. Did he leave some kind of special jutsu scroll for me? Before she could answer, Shizun gasped. What? He's the grandson of Lord Second. Tsunade casually pointed at her. See, that's the kind of reaction I was expecting. Why are you so calm? Ren shrugged again. Does it really matter? It's not like I'm getting some special benefit just for being his grandson. I mean, look at you. He motioned to Tsunade, eyes half-lidded. You're the granddaughter of the first, and you look like someone carrying unhealed trauma and mental instability because you're still not married. Tsunade's expression turned flat. The hell is your problem with me not being married? I mean, Ren leaned forward, hands gesturing. It's a bad example, right? All 3 Sunin, unmarried. The third was a widower. Most strong shinobi don't seem to have a happy love life. It's like strong people are cursed when it comes to romance. I want a happy romance. He stressed out the last part really hard. He suddenly got on one knee, dramatically pointing at her like a stage performer. The leaf wants to know, why are strong people not married? Tsunade just stared at him then sighed. Alright, enough with the theatrics. There's something you need to know. Her tone shifted, the room turning quieter by the second. She began to explain everything, his birth, the details of the flow, what Psycho had said, Sayaka's last wishes, and the political web that kept his existence hidden. Every word came slower than the last, and by the end, even Shizun had fallen into a quiet hush. Ren's expression turned serious as the information sank in. His fingers curled lightly against his knees. He didn't care about Hiruzen or Danzo, at least, not right now. What pulled at him most was the seal. The pressure of the world itself. The idea that just existing at full potential would draw the wrath of nature. He exhaled. I guess, that's what happens when you're too awesome, right? Tsunade sighed and facepalmed at the ridiculousness of the statement. Then, Ren looked at her and asked, almost experimentally, so, big sister Tsunade. The words hung awkwardly in the air. Ren shivered. Ugh, no way, that sounds weird. But when he looked back up, he paused because Tsunade was crying, quiet tears slipping down her cheeks as she looked at him. No words, just quiet staring. Ren blinked, confused for a beat. Then realization hit him. It must be the first time someone called her big sister since Noeka died. He sighed softly and scratched the back of his neck, awkward but sincere, before scooting closer and giving her a light, clumsy pat on the shoulder. Ren kept patting Tsunade's shoulder with a stiff hand, unsure of what else to do. There. It must have been hard for you. His voice was casual, but not flippant. It was just enough to be comforting without making it awkward. He added, I can't imagine what it must be like for you, but let me be honest, I don't really know how to feel about suddenly gaining a sister. So it might take some time to get used to it. Okay. Tsunade gave a small nod. She didn't speak, didn't raise her head, but she acknowledged his words silently. Ren continued, more relaxed now that the tension had dropped, but there's something I don't understand. Why didn't my mother want me to know that the second Hokage was my grandfather? Tsunade raised her eyes, her voice quiet but steady. Sayaka might have seemed like an idiot to most people, but in truth, she was very smart. Smarter than people gave her credit for. She inherited more from granduncle than from grandaunt. That gave her clarity enough to understand that just the two of us wouldn't be able to protect the Senju lineage. So she understood that if you grew freely as a Senju heir, then it might create problems. She paused, her voice gaining a bit more weight as she continued. That's also why she acted like a harmless idiot most of the time, so people wouldn't see her as a threat. She kept behaving like a kid even after she grew up. And eventually, she even stopped training so her strength plateaued. Ren blinked, a bit surprised. She really was smart, huh? She understood there were too many people in the village who couldn't allow the Senjo to keep producing exceptional shinobi, so while you kept rising and becoming one of the Sunin, she stayed back, held herself down. He tilted his head. But that still doesn't make sense. If she had just kept training, couldn't she have gotten strong enough to protect herself before anyone acted against her? Tsunade slowly shook her head. No, she had potential, but not the kind we did. Her ceiling was different. She looked Ren straight in the eye. At most, her potential could have broken through into S rank, but that's it. That's where she would have stopped. And reaching S rank only to be the weakest among them? That's an even more dangerous position. It invites predators. So instead, she chose to become the strongest among the elite Jonin. That way, people viewed her as stable, manageable. Ren made a low sound of understanding. So that way, she stood on par with some of the clan heads. And they were content with that fake sense of stability. He narrowed his eyes. Let me guess, the Hyuga were the ones who created the most trouble, weren't they? Tsunade's brow lifted slightly at his accuracy, but she nodded. Yeah, the Hyuga constantly provoked us. More than the Uchiha, even. When the Senju began merging with the civilian population under grandmother's orders, the Hyuga were the first to act. She exhaled in distaste. They forced several of their civilian branch members into marriages with Senju. They even proposed a marriage for Sayaka with their clan head. But thankfully, she had deterrence of me, and Jiraiya, who was your father's teacher. With that protection, she stayed free. Her tone hardened slightly as she added, but they never missed a chance to put her down. Subtle things. Whispered words. They made sure she was never seen as truly belonging. Ren's lips thinned. Surprisingly, Tsunade continued, the Uchiha were actually helpful during that time. They always sided with us during public conflicts or votes. They didn't support the Hyuga's proposals or provocations. Her voice darkened just a little more. But something happened after that. Something that forced the Uchiha and us to act like mortal enemies again. Chapter 153, Not a hero, just here to punch Danzo, what a dream for all of us. Make sure you read the notes at the end. Tsunade began, her voice steady and grim. Sayaka was attacked, right after she got pregnant with you. Fortunately, your father's team was with her at the time. If they hadn't been there, no one knows what might have happened. She paused, eyes narrowing slightly. However, that wasn't even the main concern. What mattered more was what came after. The village took charge of the investigation to find the attackers, and all evidence pointed to the Uchiha. Ren completed for her, his tone dry. Tsunade nodded. Yes, that's what the village believed. But Sayaka, she noticed too many things that didn't add up. Before the situation could escalate, she arranged a secret meeting with the then Uchiha clan leader. He agreed. She looked off toward the window, as if replaying the memory. There was a lot of back and forth between me and him during that meeting. But one thing was clear, he didn't order the attack. The Uchiha didn't do it. In fact, there was evidence that could have proven their innocence. Her lips curled into a bitter scoff. But the very next morning, the entire village was buzzing with one headline, the Uchiha attacked a Senju princess, who was also pregnant. That news was never supposed to come out. It was classified, locked down. But somehow, everyone knew. Ren's eyes hardened. Danzo. Tsunade gave a sharp nod. Most likely. Though, after what I've learned today, there's a chance Sensei was involved too. Her voice cracked just slightly at that word. She exhaled slowly, then continued, both our clans understood what was going on. The idea of the Uchiha supporting Sayaka, that wasn't something the village's higher UPS could tolerate. So, we had to put on a show. Act like enemies. The alternative was political death or worse. Ren crossed his arms. That's surprising. I didn't think there were any peace-loving Uchiha back then. There were, Tsunade said softly. A few. Enough that Sayaka tried to keep the door open. But it didn't matter in the end. Ren leaned back against the wall, brows drawn. So it was all theater, to protect her. Tsunade nodded. After that, things quieted down, somewhat. But the damage was done. The Uchiha started getting marginalized. And it wasn't just because of Sayaka's incident. Some of the more cancerous elements within their own clan fanned the flames. They refused to accept that the Senju and Uchiha could ever exist in peace. Ren's gaze turned sharp. Still, it reeks of Danzo. And probably the third too. Ren continued speaking. You've been away from the village for a long time. You don't know how bad it's gotten. Ren added slowly. I've seen it. I've felt it. The civilians hate the Uchiha. Even the ones who don't say it out loud treat them like they're always a second away from going rogue. And to be fair, the Uchiha are arrogant. There are many radicals among them, but not to the point where every single one of them deserve this level of hate. Tsunade watched him for a moment, then said, You're under Yoru's supervision. So I'm sure you've heard things. But let me make this absolutely clear. Her voice dropped low. The Uchiha are planning a revolt. At that, Shizun, who had been silent all this time, gasped audibly. But Tsunade simply glanced at her. That look alone was enough to keep Shizun quiet. Ren didn't even flinch. He simply nodded. I had my suspicions. The commander has been meeting with the Jonin commander, the Uchiha leader, and Udakata sensei. They must have been planning something. He tapped his chin thoughtfully. Though what Commander told me was that they were going to deal with Danzo Shimura. Tsunade exhaled, as if that had been the answer she expected. It's not that simple. She looked directly at him now, her eyes heavy with the weight of history. Dealing with Danzo is the end goal, yes. But there's another priority, cleaning up the Uchiha's own rebellious elements. The village can't survive with Danzo alive. But it also can't survive if that deep-rooted Uchiha resentment is allowed to fester. She closed her eyes for a second. In the end, neither Danzo's camp nor the Uchiha's radical faction can be allowed to win. Both have to lose. That's the only way for the village to truly come out as the victor. Ren leaned back against the wall, fingers interlaced behind his head, voice casual but eyes sharp. That goal is way too high, he muttered. Someone wants to clean up Danzo and the Uchiha at the same time? That's either suicidal or monstrous. Tsunade answered plainly, folding her arms. It's Yoro. He's the one planning everything, with the help of the Nara clan leader. Their brains are not something we can comprehend. Ren scoffed, you should speak for yourself. I'm smart enough to guess what they might be planning. Tsunade arched a brow. Oh, then do tell. Ren straightened a little, adopting a mock theorist tone. Corner the third into not acting, maybe even force him to stand down quietly with you and a few others. Let the Uchiha actually revolt, just enough to satisfy the radicals. But the ones they'll be fighting will most likely be Danzo and his cronies. Then, once the dust settles, appoint a figurehead. Someone the public can rally behind as a symbol of victory and peace. Tsunade tilted her head, intrigued. And who do you think they're planning to make the figurehead? Ren met her gaze flatly. Not me. I've already told Commander Yoro, I only want to kill Danzo for the fun of it. He can handle the rest. Tsunade smiled knowingly. At least sound more convinced that you won't be the figurehead. Ren clicked his tongue and groaned. It's too much work. And way too bothersome. I'm already sick of all the finger-pointing I got after the Chunin exams. I don't need more. He paused, then added dryly, let's just make the Uchiha leader the Hokage. That'd be refreshing. I've only met him once, but he seems fun to mess with. Tsunade gave a tired sigh. The Uchiha have done enough over the years to make the village unwilling to accept one of them as Hokage. Ren shrugged. You do realize that even if I do become the figurehead, they'll end up forcing the actual Hokage seat onto you, right? He shot her a wry look. My strength isn't enough to become Hokage. Not yet. Or even within a year. Probably he added the last part under his breath. Tsunade chuckled and waved a hand lazily. Let's leave all that to Yoro and the others. It's better to be the brawn than the brains. That way, you get to avoid most of the paperwork. Ren let out a bark of laughter. Is that why they've never offered you the Hokage position? Tsunade cracked her knuckles, her grin turning dangerous. Looks like you've gotten bolder ever since learning I'm your sister. Is that what makes you so brave? Ren tilted his head innocently. So you mean to say that calling you an unmarried elder woman wasn't bold, but calling you stupid is? He smirked. How stupid? The air cracked. By the time Tsunade's hand whipped out toward his face, Ren had already moved, vanishing from his spot and appearing beside the window, 1 foot already on the ledge. He gave her a final grin. Hope you get your romance soon, unmarried elder sister. Maybe pervy sage would be a good option, right? With a laugh, he jumped down through the window, disappearing into the street below. Tsunade stood frozen for a moment, face red not from anger but sheer embarrassment. Shizun, watching the entire scene with barely hidden amusement, let out a long, exhausted sigh. In the streets of Tanzukugai, Ren strolled casually, hands laced behind his head as his mind wandered. It feels weird knowing I'm the grandson of the second Hokage, he mused, snickering a little. I'm not a racist though. He paused as another thought came to him, maybe a little towards those losers, not Itaka though. He's cool. His amusement faded as a more serious thought settled in. Hey, system. Is that seal thing real? And what kind of higher power are you, exactly? A familiar digital chime echoed in his mind, followed by the mechanical voice of the system. There was indeed a seal placed by this world's law on your body at the time of birth. That seal successfully killed the consciousness of the original Ren Senju. It was also at that time that your soul was brought into this world after you filled the transmigration form. However, your memories were only recovered after you turned 6 years old and the system activated. Ren's eyebrow rose. So that means I didn't do the usual body snatching thing. It was more like a normal rebirth. I was here since the beginning, just without memories. Only after I turned 6 did I remember anything from my past life. His expression darkened slightly as another realization struck. Doesn't that mean I don't actually have a cheat? The system's just been unlocking my real, inborn powers little by little, like reward packages from a delivery service. But before he could sink further into that line of thought, another system notification rang. Please note that system is actually a cheat. Without this system, you would not have survived until this date, as the seal of the world would have forced you to die the moment you turned 6 years old. Cool down, man, Ren thought with a dry chuckle. I was just kidding. I do know you're my real cheat. Technically, I wasn't born with any of the cool abilities, the original Ren was. But after he died and I took over the body, the seal stopped me from using them until you started removing those restrictions. So yeah, credit where it's due. He paused, eyes scanning the lively street without really seeing it, then asked again, so, can you tell me anything more about my transmigration to this world? Negative. The host's power is not enough. Ren sighed inwardly. Figures. Still, he bounced back quickly, turning his thoughts to something more exciting. Alright then. Show me my rewards. The system responded instantly with its usual celebratory chime. Congratulations, user. You have changed the future, eliminated the Nakazura group. Rewards. Water affinity, unlocked. New special stat unlocked, perception, per. Current per stat, 93. Note, special stats cannot be increased using stat points. They increase naturally as the user's inherent ability evolves. As Ren glanced at the system rewards, a subtle frown tugged at his brow. The system's rewards are really weird. I fought the whole Nakazura group, nearly died, and all I got was the water affinity. He clicked his tongue lightly. Is it because I already had the rest? I don't have that shadow manipulation ability though. His eyes narrowed slightly. Not that I need it. I wouldn't even use it if I had it. Still, it's a weird way of handing out rewards. It's probably related to what original Ren had and some others, I guess. He rolled his shoulders and sighed. But whatever. It's good that I finally have water affinity now. I already assigned a clone to work on water mastery, but it's been going very slowly. Hopefully this will give it a boost. Then his attention shifted to the newly unlocked stat. Curious, he opened its description. Perception. Perception reflects the user's alertness and awareness of his surroundings, and how the user utilizes their senses to gather and react to information. Current per. 93. Just like in games, huh? Ren mused. This is my highest stat to date. Though I guess it's not surprising. With how heightened my perception has become, it's like I can see the dim air shifting around me. He stood there for a moment, letting the wind pass by, his senses attuned to every flicker of movement, every ripple of chakra, every layered interaction between motion and silence. Alright, now that the rewards are settled, time to deal with the other thing. With that thought, he made his way to a quiet, empty patch of ground near the edge of Tanzakugai, a narrow clearing lined with sparse trees and old wooden fencing. No one around. Perfect. Ren took a breath and called out softly. Kimura. Chapter 154, Yes, I'm strong. No, I'm not interested in leadership. I have ice cream. The air shifted faintly, and in front of Ren appeared Kimura, kneeling on one knee. Ren coughed awkwardly. Honestly, he hadn't expected the one person he spared on a whim, out of momentary interest, to turn out to be his own shadow guard. It wasn't strange for a Senjo to have a personal shadow assigned from birth, but to encounter his own like this? After leaving him alive during a mission? And then, suddenly, the guy unlocked sealed memories and declared lifelong loyalty? The whole thing reeked of a setup. Too much coincidence. Too many dots aligning perfectly. Was this one of Yoru's plans too? Ren wondered silently. Did he send Kimura to keep an eye on me because he knew this? Even anticipate that I'd spare him? Could he really plan this far ahead? Can he really? He'd always had doubts about the scope of his commander's power, but this was approaching ridiculous. Still, Ren knew from experience that asking Yoru directly wouldn't yield answers. At best, you'd get a mission. At worst, a blank stare. For now, he shelved the thought. Kimura came first. Clearing his throat, Ren finally spoke. So, what a coincidence, huh? You coming to kill me, me leaving you alive, and you turning out to be my shadow. Feels like someone's playing around with fate, doesn't it? Kimura didn't argue. Though I still don't understand the whole situation, or why someone would go through so much trouble, one thing is clear, someone deliberately kept me away from you for 11 years. That alone is grounds for death. There was a flash of killing intent in Kimura's eyes, sharp and cold like a drawn blade. But Ren waved him off casually. It was probably Danzo and Hiruzen. They're not really your opponents. He grinned darkly. I plan to kill Danzo for fun, but if you want your revenge, you can join in. You're weak right now though, so you'll need training. Kimura agreed readily. Yes. I should have been trained from the moment you enrolled in the academy. That's the rule for shadows. But I was inducted into Root, then Umbu constant missions left no time for training. Ren nodded. That was true for nearly every shinobi in the world. Once you became a Chunin, you were sent on mission after mission. Few had the time or luxury to actually train. Fortunately for Ren, he had the system. Rewards from completed missions had bolstered his physical stats. Without it, he figured his body would be stuck at mid-jonin level at best. Though the system claimed it was merely unlocking the abilities of the original Ren Senju through rewards, Ren suspected stats weren't part of that. Chakra, perhaps. He had earlier assumed his chakra reserves increased due to high spiritual energy, something commonly seen in transmigrators. But upon further reflection, it wasn't just that. It probably factors in my Senju bloodline too, he thought. Senju always had naturally high chakra. So increased spiritual energy just amplifies the rate of growth. For me, maybe 3 or 4 points of vitality equals 1 point of chakra. But for others, like Karema clan members who are born with naturally high spiritual energy, it might take 8 or 10 points just to equal 1. It was confusing, but understandable. If the Senju and Uzumaki blood were born with naturally high spiritual energy added with their vitality, then their chakra would grow exponentially with age, far faster than that of people with common blood. He shook his head. No point diving too deep into theory. He turned back to Kimura. Alright, tell me everything that happened after I fainted. Kimura nodded and began. He explained in detail everything that happened after Ren lost consciousness, how Tsunade reacted, Saiko's presence, and most curiously, Tsunade's apparent hemophobia. Kimura had picked up on Tsunade's trauma from her interactions with Saiko and deduced that her phobia had been real. He even described how Tsunade overcame it and performed the surgery herself. Ren had a strange expression on his face as he listened. Wait, so she really did have hemophobia, but got cured because of me? And I didn't even do anything. He blinked. Man, all those senior transmigrators trying to cure Tsunade's trauma so they could take her as a waifu must be rolling in their graves. He snorted. I literally slept through the cure. I didn't even speak. Just lay there unconscious, bleeding out and boom, trauma healed. I am indeed the chosen one. Shaking his head, he turned serious again. Well, what's done is done. Let's focus on what's next. He stretched a bit. I suspect the commander will start sending squads to me for leadership experience and clout building or whatever. It was something he regretted. With the incoming responsibilities, rogue hunting, which had become his favorite activity in the past 2 months, would be taking a backseat. But there wasn't much he could do about it right now. We'll rest for 2 more days, he continued. If no squads arrive, we'll leave and wait for the commander's signal. Kimura nodded once, then vanished into the shadows like a ghost. Ren resumed strolling the streets of Tanzikugai. As he walked, he dispelled the 10 shadow clones he had created before the Nakazero fight. He knew that going into the fight he might get seriously injured since he wanted to perfect hyperfocus. All of them had been positioned as silent observers, just for the time that things went sideways. He couldn't bank on the fact that Tsunade might not be homophobic. He wasn't someone who takes such risks, and from the memories they relayed, Ren confirmed what Kimura had said. Tsunade really had healed him. On her own, and everything else was true too. That made 3 confirmations. Tsunade, Kimura, and his own clones point 3 different sources but the same truth. He finally became satisfied because this was a very serious matter. Ren finally allowed himself to relax. He made his way to a small vendor and bought a butterscotch ice cream. As he walked down the bustling streets, licking the cone, he hummed the tune of Black Clover's opening theme. Because honestly, nothing beats that. Since there was still some time before he planned to leave Tanzikugai, Ren found a secluded clearing nestled between narrow hills behind the town, quiet, wind-swept, and perfect for testing. He wanted to explore his newly gained abilities, perfected hyperfocus, and the even more elusive and mysterious flow. He started simple. Standing still, he slowly moved his hand in an exaggerated arc through the air, almost painfully slow. His eyes narrowed, not just watching, but observing. Every swirl of wind, every flutter of his sleeve, the subtle push of air along his palm, it was all visible. Not in a visual sense alone, but in an all-encompassing awareness. He could feel the slight resistance of the air and predict how it would scatter. He repeated the test a few times, first with small stones, then shuriken, thrown one by one in precise arcs. The conclusion came to him easily. No, this is still within the realm of hyperfocus. Even without thinking, he could tell. With hyperfocus in its earlier form, I could already see movement somewhat. But this perfected version, it's right on the verge of precognition. His mind flicked through references from his past life. It's like observation haki, basic and advanced both, but toned down. More grounded. Less divine revelation, more refined instinct sharpened by technique. Every motion, every interaction had layers now, dozens of them. Each movement in the world split into its component parts, all visible in tandem, like watching parallel threads of reality braid themselves into an outcome. Hyperfocus didn't just enhance his senses, it refined his decision-making speed, cut down on wasted motion, and made his awareness brutally efficient. The perfected version showed possible futures, but only a flicker, mere moments. But in a world where a single moment decided life and death, that was enough. More than enough. But then, flow. Ren straightened and exhaled slowly, the playful gleam in his eyes dimming as he shifted focus. Flow was a different beast entirely. Unlike hyperfocus, which he had studied and grown into, flow offered no roadmap. Which meant, he had no guidance, so all he could do was work around it with trial and error. He closed his eyes and stilled his breath. Think. What was flow? It wasn't chakra. It wasn't sensing with chakra either. It's something deeper. More primal. He reached back into every manga and anime he had consumed. The concept came closest not to observation haki or nen, but to something like Tanjiro's transparent world in Demon Slayer. That strange, layered realm where every breath, heartbeat, and muscle twitch could be read with crystal clarity. But even that fell short. Tanjiro could perceive the world. But Ren knew, he could eventually control it. Not now, not yet. But in the future control was possible. Taking another breath, he cleared his mind, emptied it of thoughts, and reached outward, not with chakra, not with divine sense, but simply as himself. A body, a being, a creature alive in a breathing world. He felt the brush of wind on his skin, the way it curled around his limbs, the subtle drag of air past his sleeve, like countless invisible threads tugging at him. It was all there. But it was not visual, neither was it audible, but it was still felt. He moved with just a shift of his arm, and the moment he did, his concentration shattered. The fragile sensation of flow disappeared like mist in the sun. But instead of disappointment, a spark of clarity ignited in his eyes. Why didn't I think of this earlier? Flow of the world. Rhythm of nature. The invisible current that guided motion and momentum. It was literally nature energy. His thoughts clicked together like puzzle pieces. Of course, if I want to use flow, not just read it, I have to align with nature itself. Senjutsu. Sage mode. It wasn't just a power-up. It was the key. Even though he didn't understand the whole picture yet, he knew this much: Sage mode would let him interact with the flow directly. If hyperfocus was the mind and body sharpened to a blade, then flow was the invisible stream around the blade, and with senjutsu, he could start manipulating that stream. Control would take time. A long time. But for the first time, he had a direction. He breathed out slowly and opened his eyes. This wasn't just a new level of power. It was the beginning of something entirely different. The 2 days passed quickly, and no squad came to meet Ren. No messenger. No mission scroll. Nothing. So, he didn't wait any longer. He had already made up his mind. He'd get more results clearing out rogue groups than sitting around waiting for assignments. Right now, he stood at the gates of Tanzakugai, backpack slung over his shoulder, cloak fluttering faintly in the breeze. Opposite him stood Tsunade, arms crossed, and just behind her was Shizun, holding Tauntaun, the walking pork dish in the making. Tsunade studied him quietly for a moment, then asked, "I thought you were waiting for Yora's instructions." Ren nodded. "I was. Thought he might send a squad or at least a message about the next move. But since nothing came, I'm off. Might as well use this time to wipe out more rogue camps." He spoke like he was about to head off on a vacation instead of actively hunting criminals. There was even a bounce in his step. Tsunade gave him a flat look. "Did you inform him of your location?" Ren paused for a second, then casually waved his hand. "Nah, he likes to act like he knows everything, right? So I'll let him keep playing that part. Besides, I'm doing his job right now." Tsunade sighed. She reached out and ruffled his hair with a touch both affectionate and exasperated. "All right, go on then. But be careful." Ren's grin widened slightly as he rubbed his nose, a little awkward. He wasn't used to anyone else doing that. His father had always been the one to ruffle his hair like that. But now, it seemed his newly acquired sister had picked up the habit too. "Don't worry," he said. "Right now, I'd rather face more attacks. Bring on the ambushes. Honestly, I hope a few S-rankers come after me. I mean, I put a bounty on my head, should be around 42 million by now. If they still don't come, I'll just go find them myself." He sighed dramatically at the end, as if lamenting missed business opportunities. Tsunade stared at him in disbelief, while Shizun gasped. "You placed a bounty on yourself." Ren raised a peace sign with a grin. "Yep. Even invested 30 million into it. Figured if people won't come to me, I might as well create some demand." Suddenly, his shoulders were grabbed in an iron grip. "Oi!" Tsunade snapped, eyes wide. "How much money do you have?" Ren blinked at her suspiciously. Her eyes sparkled, not with worry, but with the unmistakable gleam of someone thinking about bank ledgers and gambling debts. Instantly, he slipped free and turned to bolt, laughing over his shoulder as he sprinted off down the road, cloak fluttering like a banner behind him as he yelled, "I'm not giving you a single ryo until you get married." Chapter 155, Welcome to the Menacing Society. First rule is don't die. You guys somehow completed the 300 stones goal, so good for you. IG. Left alone at the gate, Tsunade let out a low growl. "He reminds me more of those clan elders who kept nagging me to get married than a younger brother," she muttered under her breath. Shizun, standing quietly beside her, glanced at her with hesitant eyes. "Lady Tsunade," she asked cautiously, "why did you accept him as your brother so easily? I mean, it must be difficult, right? The brother you believed to be dead all these years suddenly being alive." Her voice trailed off, clearly uncertain, but the question hung heavy in the air. Tsunade didn't answer at first. She kept her gaze fixed in the direction Ren had vanished, silent and still. Then, after a long pause, she spoke softly, her tone unusually calm. "To be honest with you, Shizun, it was all an act." Shizun's eyes widened. "Huh? What do you mean, Lady Tsunade? Could it be dash?" Tsunade turned toward her with a teasing smile, cutting her off. "Is that what you wanted to hear?" Shizun crouched where she stood and groaned. "Please don't do this, Lady Tsunade. I've had enough surprises already." Tsunade chuckled lightly, her voice warm. "The real reason I accepted it so easily is because I already had my suspicions. From the first time we met in the forest." Shizun blinked. "You did?" Tsunade nodded. "When I examined his body before the fight back then, I knew he had Senju blood in him. That vitality, even though diminished, was unmistakable. That kind of body, it can't be forged. It's only found in someone from the royal Senju lineage." Shizun whispered, barely audible, "Sayaka-san's son." "Exactly," Tsunade said. "Aside from me, the only one who could have inherited that kind of bloodline was Sayaka's child. At that time, I barely managed to contain myself. I didn't even tell Jiraiya. If I had, Sensei might have caught wind of it too, and, well, he might have done something that could have ruined the fake balance we have maintaining till now, but fortunately he didn't." Her expression turned more solemn. "But this time, when I saw Psycho and Cho appear on his body, I knew. I finally knew. And at that moment, I couldn't hold back anymore. I cried. I don't even know if it was from relief, or from joy, or just the overwhelming fact that someone from my family still existed. That Ren was alive." She exhaled deeply, the smile that followed was small but genuine. "I think that realization also helped me overcome my fear." Shizun's eyes lit up. "Does that mean?" Tsunade nodded silently. Shizun's joy was obvious, but Tsunade raised a hand to temper it. "But," she continued, "we're keeping this fact to ourselves for now. Nobody knows about it except Ren's shadow. Danzo may know about my condition through Sensei, but he won't have a clue that I've recovered." Her expression darkened slightly. "I hope he does something stupid. Something so incredibly stupid that I get to kill him outright." With that, she turned on her heel, her Haori fluttering behind her. Let's go, Shizun. I need to inform Yora that I'm in. Shizun fell in step behind her. Lady Tsunade, who is this Yora you keep mentioning? Ren said his name too. Tsunade didn't slow down, her voice firm as she replied. He's the one trying to keep the leaf-sinking boat afloat. He's doing his duty and I'm not going to shy away from mine any longer. A little distance away from Tanzikugai, Ren was sprinting at full speed, branches blurring beneath his feet. Behind him, Kimura struggled to keep pace, his breath coming in sharp gasps. Eventually, Ren stopped abruptly on a tall branch, turning back with a frown. Kimura, he called, arms crossed, you really need some serious training. If you can't even keep up with me, what's the point of having a shadow at all? Kimura halted just behind him, hunched slightly, panting hard. I promise not to slow you down, he said between breaths. I'll follow you even if it kills me. Ren looked at him for a moment, a strange expression passing over his face. There was something about Kimura's unwavering loyalty that felt off, not in a suspicious way, but in its intensity. Thanks to hyperfocus, Ren could tell the man wasn't lying. The loyalty was real. Absolute. He must be desperate for approval, Ren thought to himself, eyes narrowing slightly, probably blames himself for not being there all these years. Oh well, he might actually be useful. He shrugged the thought. He remembered the seal that had been placed on Kimura, it was a double-layered mechanism. Yora's seal was sophisticated but relatively safe, more of a limiter than anything dangerous. But Danzo's was a different story. A lethal failsafe. If Ren so much as tried to tamper with it, Kimura would die on the spot. For now, that meant restraint. Ren stepped forward, placing a hand over Kimura's chest. Hold still. Kimura straightened slightly, but didn't resist. A warm glow pulsed from Ren's hand as he began healing the strain in Kimura's body, even weaving in subtle threads of yang chakra to reinforce his muscles. There, Ren said after a moment, withdrawing his hand. You're good to go. From now on, we're doing this regularly, you run until you're on the verge of death, and when you fall, I'll heal you. Rinse and repeat. Your body will grow at an exponential rate. Kimura blinked in surprise, but nodded without hesitation. His voice was resolute. Understood. Ren grinned. Once your body's strong enough, I'll teach you the 8 gates technique. Kimura didn't flinch. He knew what the 8 gates meant, suicidal power, earned through torturous training, but he didn't waver. If this was the only way to stay by Ren's side, then so be it. Anything less would make him unworthy of the title Senju Shadow. Watching him, Ren smiled in satisfaction. He was still wary. He didn't know what fail-safes Danzo might have embedded in Kimura, or what other influence the man might exert later. So he wasn't planning to teach Kimura everything just yet. But if this method worked, repetitive healing and reinforcement through training, then he might have stumbled onto something far more dangerous. What if I could build an army of 8 gates users? The idea thrilled him. If he could condition them properly, train them from scratch, reinforce their bodies with yang chakra, there was real potential there. Once he confirmed Kimura was truly loyal and safe from any outside control, he'd let him train others. A small force which was truly devastating. Though something had to be done about loyalty. A grin broke out across his face. Yeah, I'll call it the Menacing Society, he chuckled to himself. Then, with a laugh, Ren turned and vanished into the trees. Kimura blinked, confused by the sudden outburst, but didn't question it. He simply leapt after Ren without another word, unaware that he had just become the test subject for something far larger. Not that it mattered to him. Even if he knew, he would have agreed anyway. Almost a week had passed with still no word from Yoru. No messages, no missions, nothing. So, Ren did what he did best, he kept hunting and clearing out rogue shinobi. In that time, he'd eliminated 1 more rogue camp and taken down 3 individual rogue ninja. Now, seated on a thick branch deep in the forest, Ren chewed absent-mindedly on skewered meat while flicking through his stats, projected in front of him. Name, Ren Takahashi. Level, 75, 69 75. Attributes. Strength, 75, 69 75. Agility, 79, 75 79. Intelligence, 77, 73 77. Vitality, 85. Chakra, 80. Available stat points. Talents. Improved chakra control. Enhanced reflexes, X. Genjutsu resistance, S+. Fuinjutsu, minor Uzumaki. Space release talent, X. Mastery panel. Chakra control, 87%, 86 87. Advanced. Shadow clone mastery, 90%, advanced. Fuinjutsu mastery, 69%, 59 69, intermediate. Yang release mastery, 84%, advanced. Yin release mastery, 41%, basic. Wind style mastery, 79%, 68 79, advanced. Earth style mastery, 81%, 79 81, advanced. Fire release mastery, 69%, 59 69, intermediate. Lightning release mastery, 40%, 25 40, basic. Water release mastery, 18%, beginner. Space release mastery, 46%, 37 46, basic. Iryujutsu mastery, 66%, 60 66, intermediate. Bukaijutsu, weaponry, 72%, 38 72, intermediate. Mastery points, 8 intermediate level points, 7 + 1. 2 advanced level points. 4 master level points, 2 to 1 plus 3. Ninja panel. Ninjutsu, 77/100, 6777. Taijutsu, 81/100, 6981. Genjutsu, 66/100, 5066. Fuinjutsu, 69/100, 5969. Special stats. Charisma, 55. Perception, 93. The stat that caught his eye immediately was Taijutsu, 81. He had officially broken the 80-point threshold. S rank level. That meant his Taijutsu could now go head-to-head with top-tier shinobi in the world. And he wasn't even done yet. Ren grinned to himself, biting off a piece of meat as he thought, if I get into a few more tough fights and keep pushing my limits with perfected hyperfocus, this might rise even more. There was also the major milestone he'd achieved. He finally had all 7 major affinities in the Naruto world. Every elemental nature, as well as both yin and yang. Not many could claim that. Their growth rate was steady too, thanks to his shadow clones. With the restoration skill allowing for 24/7 training over the last 2 months, progress was inevitable. Chakra control, for example, had increased by 1% this week alone. That might not sound like much to an outsider, but to Ren, it was massive. It had plateaued for ages, only recently did perfected hyperfocus push it forward again. His space release mastery was also nearing intermediate level, while yin release, facilitated through advanced genjutsu training, was finally climbing at a decent pace. The rest of his masteries were growing as expected, if a little slowly. That was understandable though. At his current mastery levels, growth was naturally going to taper off. Even so, 2 months of continuous clone training was still showing clear, consistent progress. As Ren reviewed his stats, something overhead caught his eye, an eagle soaring through the night sky. He let out a sharp whistle. The bird circled once, then swooped down gracefully, landing on the branch in front of him. Ren tossed it a jerky, which the eagle took gladly before raising its claw. A sealed message was tied to it. Ren unrolled the scroll and grinned as he stretched his arms and shoulders. Finally. I thought I might have to wait longer, maybe stir up more trouble to get some attention. Good thing this is an A-rank mission too, otherwise I would have had to visit Commander in person to complain. He chuckled to himself. Actually, maybe I still should. If I go in person, he might just throw an S rank at me out of spite. He glanced up and called out casually, Kimura. A squad's finally coming for me to lead. Think they'll survive? In a soft shuffle of leaves, Kimura appeared at his side and spoke with his usual deadpan tone. You shouldn't torture them. They'll be your future subordinates. If they grow resentful, I might have to kill them, lest they develop a rebellious mentality. Ren cringed. Dude, stop being so corny. Kimura didn't reply, simply blinking as if confused by the idea that what he'd said might not be perfectly normal. Ren sighed and continued walking, delivering a long-winded lecture about sarcasm, tone, and what he called social awareness, all while Kimura listened like a sponge absorbing water while washing dishes. And so, the night passed, under a sky full of stars, with Ren grumbling and Kimura following faithfully behind, as they prepared to meet the squad that would soon be under Ren's command. Chapter 156, You wish your leadership was this chill and ruthless. The morning sun filtered through the trees as Ren stood near a quiet body of water, his reflection still and steady on the surface. Dressed in his standard Umbu uniform with the 5-star numbers mask securely in place, he waited for the squad assigned to him. Somewhere in the surrounding foliage, Kimura lingered in the shadows, completely undetectable, even to seasoned jonin, so Ren trusted him to follow unnoticed. Since Yoru had already briefed him on the mission, Ren had dispatched his butterfly summons in advance to gather intel. Now, the only thing left to decide was how to present himself to the squad. Should he act distant and cold? Aggressively commanding? Or maybe go with the approachable, confident leader vibe? He tested out different personas under his breath, switching tone and posture like an actor preparing backstage. Meanwhile, some distance away, 4 masked shinobi moved swiftly through the forest. An Umbu squad, led by a man in a lion mask, followed the tree lines at high speed. Behind him ran 3 more operatives, each wearing rat, camel, and moth masks respectively. As they moved, Rat broke the silence. Captain, the mission intel was vague. All we know is we're supposed to rescue a kidnapped noble's son and return him to the fire capital. No layout, no route, no threats listed. Are we really going in blind? Lion didn't slow down as he replied, We're not going in blind. One of the numbers is taking point on this mission. We're to meet him at the designated location and follow his lead. That single statement shifted the mood among the 3 trailing operatives. A number? That wasn't someone you second-guessed. Soon, they arrived at the rendezvous point. As they landed on the clearing, Lion took a step forward, but before he could say anything, a childish voice echoed from around them. You're early. I thought I'd be waiting a while longer. A small spiral of leaves gathered ahead of them, swirling into a tight vortex. When it dissipated, the figure of Ren stood there in full Umbu gear, his 5-star numbers mask gleaming in the morning light. Lion and the others stiffened slightly. Despite the youthfulness in the voice, the pressure that radiated from Ren was undeniable. Even behind their masks, each of them felt it, that invisible weight that only came from truly dangerous people. The silent tension did more than any bluster could. Ren could sense their assessment, but he didn't care. He had already decided the best way to avoid the cliché of being underestimated was simple, dominate the room from the start. Lion stepped forward again, his tone formal. Greetings. We were informed that you'd be handling the operation, but I'll need to see proof of mission authorization. Without a word, Ren pulled out the same mission detail scroll that Lion had. Both had identical chakra signatures woven into the parchment. It was a crude but effective validation method. Once confirmed, they put them away. Ren immediately got to business. I've already located the mercenary convoy that kidnapped the target. They're disguised as a merchant caravan, blending in with ordinary civilians to avoid detection. It's sloppy, but it works on most patrol units. He unrolled a map on a nearby rock, weighing it down with 3 shuriken, and pointed at key areas. They're following the Kiminawa River's route, which takes them from the land of fire through the land of waterfall, straight toward the land of earth. That's likely their final destination. We'll intercept them before they leave our borders to avoid any diplomatic issues. Ren tapped a point near the border, just before a narrow choke between 2 hills. We'll reach the intercept point before them. Once they pass through this valley, we ambush and eliminate them in one clean strike. No escapees. No unnecessary casualties. Civilians will be separated and secured immediately after engagement begins. Lion and the rest of the squad listened in silence, processing everything. When he finished, they gave crisp nods of no objections. It was a solid plan. Ren rolled up the map and gave the final word. Let's move. With that, he flickered out of sight in an instant. The 4 Umbu followed immediately, their figures vanishing into the trees behind him, the mission now fully in motion. Since the mission site was a considerable distance from their starting point, the group had to travel for nearly a full day before they finally reached it. During the journey, Ren initially considered implementing the braking pattern that the numbers typically followed with their animal squads, with brief high-intensity travel followed by minimal breaks to conserve energy without losing momentum. But it quickly became clear that this team wouldn't hold up to that level of performance. Even Lion, the squad's appointed captain, was only level 65. The gap between them and Ren was too wide to ignore. So, Ren adjusted. He increased the number of breaks, masked them as tactical rests, and controlled the pace without complaint, not because he was tired, but because he was the leader, and it was his responsibility to get the squad to the mission alive and capable. Thankfully, taking the lead wasn't difficult. Lion didn't interfere with any of his calls. That was partly due to Ren's identity as one of the numbers, but also thanks to the pressure and strength he'd displayed during the initial meeting. Ren found himself silently relieved that he'd chosen to show off a little in the beginning. It had prevented a host of unnecessary problems, especially from Rat. Something about him gave Ren an unpleasant vibe. Not dangerous, not treacherous, but unsettling. Ren had already used Observe Chain on him. No signs of root ties. No hidden allegiances. Just a man with bad energy. Ren mentally filed it under Avoid unless necessary. By the time they reached the designated ambush point, which was just past the hills leading into a forest valley, the sun was already inching toward late morning. The terrain was perfect. A narrow road, gently sloping downward, with thick foliage on both sides and a rocky incline behind. Ren wasted no time and began issuing orders. The convoy should arrive here in approximately 5 hours. I've already contacted the border patrol in the area and informed them that a skirmish will occur, so they won't interfere. He gestured to the slope and valley ahead. We won't be laying traps, at least not the explosive kind. They have civilians in front, and we can't risk unnecessary casualties. I'll handle the enemies in problematic positions silently before the ambush begins. He turned to Lion. Lion, your only job is to extract the target. You move the moment you see an opening. Make it clean. The fighting doesn't start until the boy is secure, but make changes as needed. Lion gave a short nod. Camel, you'll handle civilian containment. If anyone among them turns out to be working with the enemy, then deal with it on the spot. Don't hesitate. Letting them go will create more problems later. Camel simply raised a hand in silent agreement. Rat and Moth, you're our main assault force. The group only has 1 low Jonin level enemy. The rest are Chunin tier, about 9 in total. I'll take out a few before the clash, so it should be easy enough. If anything unexpected happens, I'll jump in. They all nodded. Ren's tone stayed calm and clinical throughout the briefing, but there was no doubt in anyone's mind. This wasn't a suggestion. This was a command. Detailed, deliberate, and absolutely firm. After confirming there were no questions, the squad dispersed. Each flickered away into the trees and brush, fading into silence. Ren remained behind for a moment longer, surveying the area from atop a tree branch. This was his first time leading an official, and although he wasn't worried about the mission itself, as it was a joke by his standards, he still wanted to make sure things went smoothly. Explaining everything in detail might have seemed unnecessary to some, but he'd learned that most casualties happened because some idiot misunderstood or misinterpreted an order, and Ren hated losing things unnecessarily. Once satisfied, he too flickered away from sight. He didn't intend to spend the next 5 hours doing nothing. Perfected hyperfocus still needed refining. If others wanted to sit and waste the time, that was their problem. He would train. Ren dropped down into a quiet clearing and began running slow drills, gradually shifting into hyperfocus. His mind sharpened as time slowed, every leaf's flutter and breeze pull sharpening into defined layers of motion. Practicing this state without opponents wasn't ideal, but even passive drilling had benefits. No wonder most Umbu's strength remained stuck once they hit a plateau. They treated downtime like leisure. If Ren had to spend hours doing nothing, he'd go insane. Better to turn waiting time into growth. On the other end of the valley, where Ren and his team were lying in ambush, a merchant convoy was making its way into the pass. At first glance, everything seemed completely normal, too normal. Merchants chatted casually, guards patrolled with relaxed vigilance, and the convoy rolled forward without a hint of deceit. As the convoy reached the far side of the valley and the last person stepped out, the atmosphere shifted. A massive boulder dropped, sealing off the exit in an instant. Startled cries erupted, but before the civilians could react properly, 5 people suddenly collapsed. A guard instantly leapt onto the main carriage, shouting, "Enemy attack!" 4 others responded immediately, rushing toward the carriage and securing a corner each. Chaos spread quickly. The previously calm atmosphere shattered. Civilians huddled together, confused and afraid, while the guards tensed, forming a defensive ring. Then came the next act. A small sphere rolled beneath the carriage and detonated into a dense smokescreen. From his vantage point, hidden in the forest shadows, Ren watched silently. He had already eliminated 5 of the Chunin-level fighters before the fight began. If the rest of the squad couldn't handle the leftovers, then frankly, they deserved what came to them. He began channeling chakra into his eyes and the smoke became transparent, layers peeling away like mist. Rat had already engaged the Jonin standing atop the carriage, forcing him off. The moment the Jonin hit the ground, Lion moved. He burst straight through the carriage roof, snatched the boy inside, and leapt clear. Meanwhile, Camel, a Yamanaka, was already among the civilians. With swift mental probes, he pinpointed the 2 working with the mercenaries. They were eliminated immediately, and the rest were knocked unconscious. In a shinobi battle, only knocked out civilians were safe civilians. Moth, handling the other front, had pinned down the remaining 4 Chunin. As a Jonin himself, he made quick work of them. Nearly simultaneously, Rat finished off the enemy Jonin. Within moments, all enemies had been dealt with. Lion returned to the clearing and formed a string of hand seals. A gust of wind erupted from his mouth, clearing away the lingering smoke. The squad regrouped around the child, who lay unconscious but unharmed. They moved to wake the boy to confirm the identity when Ren's voice cut through the clearing like a whip. "Stop." Everyone froze. Ren flickered into position, appearing directly in front of the boy, who stood just a head shorter than him. He placed a hand on the boy's shirt. Faint seals glowed across the fabric, and with a flick of his wrist, Ren tore the shirt off and tossed it into the air. It exploded mid-air, startling the others. Ren casually pulled a spare shirt from his pack and helped the boy into it. Then he handed the child to Lion and spoke calmly. There was an advanced seal on him. That means whoever orchestrated this kidnapping has ties with another village or high-level rouges. Make sure your report includes this. Also inform the noble. Lion gave a sharp nod, his expression grim. Camel stepped forward and added, there were only 2 infiltrators among the civilians. Their job was to capture civilians to act as shields if the mercenaries needed cover. Ren nodded. He already knew that, thanks to his butterfly summons, who had traced the culprit's movements the moment the operation began. If this mission had taught him anything, it was the sheer value of a reliable intel network. Let's drop the civilians with the border patrol first, Ren instructed. The cleanup squads can handle the rest. After that, you guys can return. Everyone nodded. Each member took 2 or 3 civilians, and after the necessary procedures, most of which Ren handled himself due to his leadership status, they escorted them to the patrol camp. With the civilians handed off and reports submitted, Lion's squad headed toward the fire capital, where they would deliver the rescued boy to the noble. Ren, however, stayed back. Yoru had already informed him that he would be receiving continuous squad assignments for a while, so there was no point in returning. He began walking through the forest trails, casually stretching his limbs. Kimura emerged from behind him, falling into step as usual. That went easier than expected, Ren said, cracking his neck. Kimura nodded. It was to be expected. Right now, your age and official rank aren't enough to command respect. The only way to make them listen is to subdue them with strength. Once you grow older, other methods will work. Ren agreed. He wasn't oblivious to the reality of the shinobi world. In this world, charisma didn't come from words alone, of course, unless you were Naruto Uzumaki. Words rarely held power on their own. Charisma, it came from power, and Ren had that in abundance. That said, even this little operation had increased his charisma stat by 2 points. A solid gain. Before Ren could follow the thought further, a sharp screech echoed overhead. An eagle swooped down toward them, its wings slicing through the sky. Ren looked up at it, then turned to Kimura with a smirk. No rest for the best, I guess. Chapter 157, back from rogue hunting and ready to bait the boss. The rest of the month passed by in a fast-paced blur. During this time, Ren barely had a moment to spare for clearing out rogue groups, but thanks to Yoru's continuous stream of missions, he was still able to complete numerous A-rank assignments. Over the course of the month, he successfully led and completed 13 A-rank missions with various squads, not only from Umbu, but even from the regular shinobi forces. Not all the squads were as cooperative as the first one. The biggest issue came from the older clan shinobi in regular Jonin squads. They were prideful, stubborn, and clearly unhappy being led by someone younger. The rest of the shinobi were easier to manage, some simple words and a slight display of strength usually got the point across. But with the clan veterans, Ren had to listen to their complaints, ignore them entirely, and then suppress them so thoroughly in combat that they were left with no choice but to follow him willingly. Aside from these squad missions, he also managed to clear out 2 rogue camps and eliminate 24 individual rogues. Since rogue camps required considerable time and effort to dismantle, Ren had shifted his focus more toward individual targets. Even those, however, were becoming scarce. The area he operated in was frequently patrolled by Leaf Shinobi, which meant rogues had long since learned to avoid it. Still, he made the best of what was available. In total, his achievements this month yielded 3 Jonin level points. He invested one of them into strength, raising it to 76, and kept the other 2 in reserve for intelligence. Now, it was time to return to the village. His clones were reaching the end of their 3-month time limit, so they needed to be replaced soon. He had also decided to use the plus 20 intelligence boost while in the safety of his basement. If his intelligence stat accidentally broke past 80 points while out on a mission and it caused him to miss the opportunity of using that boost, it would be unacceptable. While technically, he could use the boost outside, he didn't want to risk an unexpected situation or distraction. Safety first. He also had another objective, and that was finally securing his Jonin promotion. Ren had already far surpassed the qualification threshold, so unless politics got in the way, he should have no trouble attaining the rank. Not that he cared either way. If nasty business was required to get that promotion, he'd do it. The system would likely reward him for the advancement, and since he was still technically within the Jonin power band, now was the perfect time. Whether the intelligence boost came first or the promotion did, it didn't matter. As long as both got done. With that decision made, Ren shifted his weight forward and began sprinting in the direction of the Leaf Village, trees and hills whipping past in a blur as he ran. With his full-speed run, it didn't take Ren more than a day to return to the village. By the time he arrived, the rising sun was already casting its golden light over the hidden Leaf Village. Before entering, he paused just outside the gates to wait for Kimura, who was still struggling to keep up. When Kimura finally arrived, exhausted and barely standing, Ren healed him with a touch of his hand. As he worked, he gave clear instructions. "I'm going to the commander first. You return to my house and hide." He spoke in a calm but firm tone. "Though Yora's seal isn't dangerous to you, it still wouldn't be wise to take any risks. So just stay hidden there." Kimura nodded silently, offering no protest. He flickered away the next second, disappearing toward the residential districts. Once he was gone, Ren turned and took one of the Umbu entry routes into the village, bypassing the main gates entirely, and made his way directly to Yora's office. It was time to report in and, perhaps, have a little fun messing with his boss. The soft creak of the hidden Umbu corridor echoed beneath Ren's feet as he walked with his usual lazy swagger. He rolled his shoulders once, popping a joint back into place with a satisfying click. 3 months of missions, 3 months of blood and bandages, of endless travel and awkward field meals. But right now, he was back. And that meant one thing. Time to annoy the hell out of Yora. He reached the familiar steel-plated door, paused, and ran a hand through his hair. "Gotta look fresh for the commander." Then, with all the subtlety of a marching band, Ren raised his fist and knocked 3 times, once hard, twice light. The voice from inside came with its usual flatness. "Enter." Sliding the door open with dramatic slowness, Ren peeked his head in like a mischievous academy student. "Did you miss me, boss?" Yora didn't even glance up from the scroll in his hand. "I missed the silence." Ren stepped in, both masks clipped to his belt, posture loose, expression smug. "That's a very roundabout way of saying you cried when I left." Yora dipped his brush into the ink calmly. "No, that was relief." "Ouch." Ren clutched his chest like he'd been struck. 3 whole months away, and this is the welcome I get? I bet even that grumpy patrol guard at Gate 3 would have offered a handshake. I did consider celebrating. Ren brightened. "You did?" Yora continued. "Then I remembered I'd probably have to deal with your paperwork backlog when you got back." "That's cold, boss man," Ren said, walking in and flopping into the chair across from the desk like he owned the place. "You're lucky I'm emotionally resilient." Yora raised a brow. "You threw a tantrum the last time someone accidentally ruined your butterscotch ice cream." "That was emotional sabotage," Ren said defensively. "You wouldn't understand." Finally, Yora set his brush down, folded the scroll, and gave Ren a proper look. His eyes flicked once over Ren's form, noting the faint fading bruises along his forearms, the tan from too many hours in the sun, and the fact that he looked calmer. "Report," Yora said simply. Ren leaned back in the chair, resting his boots on the desk without permission. "Let's see, you assigned all of the missions, so let's skip the boring stuff. I did do a lot of rouge hunting though, like a lot." He handed Yora a scroll, who stored it without even looking at it, so he complained, "Hey, your star employee is giving you some juicy details about how many kills he did and you didn't even glance at it." Yora grunted. "You're not even 5th on my star employee list. You should keep your expectations grounded, that's how you get hurt." Ren asked in all seriousness, "Then who is your star employee? The one you like the most, the one I should finish before he could grow?" He added the last part lightly, but of course Yora was meant to hear it. Yora didn't dignify him with a response, which caused Ren to keep guessing, and his guessing game worked as he listed all of the numbers one by one. Then he began to name different kind of animals starting from letter A. He kept on going and going when Yora finally snapped at letter M and shouted, "Shut up." Ren pumped his fist as he exclaimed, "Yes. You finally said it." He laughed loudly and even made a clone to pat his back as if he has done something so incredibly great. Yora heaved a sigh and a second passed and he asked in his usual dry tone, "Any problems?" Ren stared at him for a bit, a little bothered how he was able to recover so quickly. Maybe my game dipped in the while I wasn't there to annoy him, or is there someone else? He gasped loudly, you cheater. You two-timing bastard? How could you do that to me? Yoru just stared at him and didn't deem him qualified for a response. The stare match continued for a while when Ren finally sat down and began once again. I worked with many different squads, Ren began, ticking off with his fingers. Some Umbu teams, 4 Jonin-led units, and a few mixed with Chinin and Genin. Most were decent. Some were stubborn. Yoru made a quiet noise of acknowledgement. Any problems? Ren shrugged. Not really. Older clan shinobi kept trying to pull rank, but nothing a little physical persuasion couldn't fix. Meaning. Ren gave a nonchalant grin. I embarrassed them. Politely. Yoru didn't stop writing. Define politely. I only dislocated one shoulder. And I fixed it after. That's polite, right? Yoru didn't even glance up as he spoke. You are lucky that they were too embarrassed to report it further, otherwise a disciplinary committee would have been formed by now for you alone. Ren beamed. Isn't that good? I'll make sure those guys stay employed for years to come. Maybe they could even start a separate department for me. Yoru agreed surprisingly quickly. Yes. That might actually happen, and I don't think you would have to wait very long. A few more missions and you'd get one allotted to you. Ren gave a laugh as he spoke. But I don't want anyone to represent me. I'll do that on my own. Yoru gave yet another response. I highly doubt someone would even be willing to represent you. Ren gave an exaggerated pout. Harsh. So very harsh. Stop fishing, Yoru said, pulling another folder from his drawer. 3 months out. What did you learn? Ren sat up a bit, the playfulness giving way to a more thoughtful tone. Learned that information networks make or break a mission. Used the butterflies a lot more. Clean kills are only half the job, making sure no ripples remain is the real challenge. Also learned that dealing with civilians is worse than any rogue ninja. Yoru nodded slowly. And your squad leadership. It was mostly annoying, but sometimes fun too, Ren said, tone still casual, but more serious now. Got used to giving orders. I didn't micromanage unless I had to. Only one casualty across all missions, and that was a rogue clone decoy, not an actual shinobi, and get this. He leaned forward. I actually one-read that idiot 3 times before that, but he ignored all that and still went ahead. That made Yoru pause for half a second. Acceptable, he said. Ren raised an eyebrow. That's it. Acceptable? I managed to avoid a full squad wipe in a rigged camp ambush with a potential liability in the midst. You're a cage candidate, Yoru replied. That's expected. Ren gave a slow clap. Commander of the year, everyone. Let's give it up. Yoru ignored him and pulled out a different, thin, blood-red folder. He placed it on the desk between them. Ren's brows arched. Oh, fancy. You're being considered for Jonin promotion, Yoru said flatly. Hokage's discretion. They asked for a recommendation from the Umbu commander since you are an Umbu. Ren blinked. Then smirked. Let me guess. You recommended me but added a disclaimer. I added, strategically valuable. Utterly insufferable. Ren beamed. You really do care. I also included a warning about potential insubordination. Ren gave him a thumbs up. Can't blame you. I'm a free spirit. Yoru stood and moved toward the shelf behind his desk, shifting a few scrolls. Your free spirit is one bad joke away from being sent to scrub blood out of the interrogation rooms. Tempting, Ren replied. Sounds quieter than working with some of those Jonin squads. Yoru looked over his shoulder. You're not getting out of missions just because you're back. You've got 48 hours. Then back to active schedule. Ren leaned forward, resting his elbows on the desk. Will you miss me again when I leave? No. Are you sure? Yes. Ren tilted his head. What if I bribed you with butterscotch ice cream? Yoru paused for a beat too long. Huh? Gotcha. I knew you had a weakness. Yoru turned slowly. I also have replacement missions. 28 C-rank escort duties. All assigned to you. One wrong word. Ren sat upright instantly. Nope. I'm good. Totally respectful. Very obedient. You're the best, boss. Yoru stared. Ren saluted. I'll be back in 48 hours. Maybe with butterscotch ice cream. Maybe not. Yoru said nothing as Ren stood and stretched. As Ren turned to leave, he paused at the door. Hey, Commander. Yoru looked up. I'm glad to be back. Even if you're still an old man with no taste in code names. Yoru narrowed his eyes. Blue menace suits you. Ren groaned. I still think Sapphire Storm had a better ring. You're not a weather report. Ren grinned. Yet. With a two-fingered wave, he slipped out the door and vanished down the hallway. Yoru watched the empty doorway for a moment, then returned to his paperwork. Insufferable headache. Chapter 158, When your basement looks like Tobirama's garage sale. Once Ren was done annoying Yoru, he returned to his basement. With the Jonin promotion already underway, not that he could do anything about it since it was already under consideration, he could finally focus on the real reason for his return. Something more important. His clones had already vanished by the time he got back. The timer was up, but they had done exactly what he needed. Fuinjutsu Mastery, 75%, Advanced. Space Release Mastery, 51%, Intermediate. The two most important elements he'd need. These numbers increasing weren't a coincidence. Over the last month, while he'd been out completing missions, every clone he made had been under strict orders to drop everything else and focus only on Fuinjutsu and space release. That was the foundation. And now, it was time to use it. Ren had already decided to spend the +20 intelligence boost on Flying Thunder God. There wasn't anything else worth it right now. As for the flow, it was too obscure, too intangible. He doubted even near-perfect intelligence could crack that puzzle in 10 minutes. FTG was manageable. It was more practical and infinitely better choice than something he wasn't even sure about right now. Once decided, he got to work. Hundreds of shadow clones popped into existence around him, each created with bare minimum chakra, which was just enough to function, focus, and draw. Their shared objective was the chakra anchoring seal. Ren hadn't completed a full spatial anchor seal before. He'd only managed the first layer, the chakra signature lock layer, the inner circle of the seal, the part that attuned the seal to his personal chakra. And most of the second layer, the spatial binding array, was already within reach. So, they started there. It went faster than expected. The first and second layers, which had taken weeks to research and refine, were now effortless. In fact, with their combined progress and Ren's real-time corrections, it felt mechanical. The second layer was the most complex structurally. It involved drawing the spatial symbols for dimensional locking, anchoring the seal's location in the physical layer of space. Ren and the clones carved the symbols for cardinal directions, north, east, south, west, then followed up with the secondary axes, northeast, southeast, northwest, southwest. This gave the seal full spatial reference in every orientation. It was necessary. If it couldn't lock its own orientation in space, then there was no guarantee Ren could teleport to it from any direction. He might misalign or split himself. Once all 8 directional symbols were drawn and placed in the correct sequence, they were connected. A tight lattice formed around the core seal, completing the second layer. Without pausing, they moved on to the third and final layer, the pulse reception layer. This one was the easiest, almost deceptively so. Its function was simple. It received chakra and distributed it across the seal, activating it on contact. The only thing to watch out for was leakage. The seal could only contain his chakra. If chakra flowed out or let ambient energy in, it would collapse. Worst case scenario? It would allow enemies to hijack the anchor, not like there were any, alive, who could do that, but it was better to take all measures into consideration. So, they refined it. One by one, the final lines were drawn. With the last stroke, the spatial anchor seal was complete, fully and properly, for the first time. Ren stepped back and looked at it. It was ugly. An absolute hodgepodge mess of layers, runes, directional symbols, micro-engraved chakra paths, and pulse funnels. The entire thing pulsed faintly with stabilized space-aligned chakra, but aesthetically it looked chaotic. He sighed. Well, it's not a masterpiece. But that was expected. This was likely the basic model Tobirama had developed, not the one Minato perfected. What Minato used was fast, elegant, and fine-tuned to his personal style. This one was more raw, which showed how great the effort was put in to create a jutsu like this. Still, Ren didn't mind. After all, the foundation Tobirama built was likely designed around his own senju body. A body like Ren's. So, what worked for Tobirama could work for him. That was enough for now. His goal was simple, get it working once. After that, it would just be a matter of grinding the jutsu until it became his own. He dispelled all the clones, collecting their seals before they vanished. He stored them all carefully, each one finalized, tuned, and ready. Before I use the boost, he thought, let's try everything I can without it. He picked one of the seals and tossed it 10 meters away. The rest were packed up and sealed off as he didn't want unnecessary interference. If this worked, he didn't want to be pulled in 7 directions. He stood up straight, hands at his sides, and exhaled. Then, slowly and deliberately, he released a wave of spatial chakra. He'd been able to do this for a while now, send out a spatial pulse. It was like a normal chakra field but not normal chakra, spatial chakra. It wasn't as useful for regular detection since it took a lot of chakra, but it had one distinct advantage that normal sensory types couldn't sense it back unless they were also attuned to space. As the wave rippled outward, it touched the seal instantly. Something clicked. A soft pull. His body shifted involuntarily, just slightly. Not enough to teleport, not even enough to stumble. But he felt it, a tug on his chakra core, the anchor trying to drag him across the room. He grinned. That was it. That was proof. Just to be sure, he repeated the test. This time, he scattered multiple completed seals across the basement, each one synced to his chakra. Then he pulsed again. However, he regretted it immediately. His entire body lit up with competing pulls. Arms, legs, spine, each anchor tried to claim him simultaneously. His breath hitched as he felt himself being pulled in several directions at once. Without hesitation, he cut the chakra flow. The tension vanished in an instant. There was no backlash, but it had been close. Still, this confirmed it. All the seals worked. Each one had successfully connected and attempted to pull him through space. That alone proved the formula was correct, and that was more than enough for now. Ren moved through the room, collecting all the seals except for one. He left it on the floor 10 meters away from him for later tests. He'd only use a single active anchor point lest something goes wrong. But more importantly, he was ready now. The seals were done, his thoughts were proven right, and the intelligence boost was still untouched. Ren let a slow grin creep onto his face as he looked down at the lone seal on the floor. He once again sent out a wave of spatial chakra to further observe the seal, to see what exactly happened when his chakra connected to it. Just like before, the moment his chakra touched the seal, he felt that same pull. It wasn't strong. He tried to act on it, but nothing happened. It was just a slight tug, not enough to move him, not even enough to shift his stance. If he had to describe it, it would be like standing in front of a powerful vacuum, but from several meters away. The force was real, he could feel it, but the distance was too great, so it only succeeded in slightly pulling him toward itself. Which meant one thing. He needed something to bridge the gap. Something that would create a direct pathway between him and the seal. The obvious answer was chakra. Aside from that, nothing else would work. But then came the next problem, how to create that pathway. The first thing that came to mind was to connect his chakra to the seal directly, but that's what he was already doing. His chakra pulses were scanning the seal and making contact through his chakra signature locked into the seal's first layer. Still, maybe that wasn't how it was supposed to go? Even though his chakra was technically connected to the seal, it wasn't forming a direct route, a link from point A to point B. Right now, his chakra was simply surrounding the seal, brushing against it, tethered only through the passive signature match. That kind of weak connection obviously wasn't enough to trigger a space-time transition. To use Flying Thunder God, he needed something far more concentrated. A denser link. Something that didn't just connect to the seal, it had to inject into it. Specifically, into the second layer, the spatial binding array where he'd drawn the directional symbols. That layer was the one responsible for dimensional locking, the map, the axis, the orientation. If any part of the seal was meant to act as a target location, that was it. He raised his hand. A thin strand of chakra extended from his fingertip, a glowing filament, alive with his own energy. This was the answer. The only thing that could inject itself into the seal and be made entirely of his own chakra threads. However, normal chakra threads wouldn't be enough. If that were the case, there'd be no shortage of Flying Thunder God users in Konoha, or anywhere else in the world. Everyone knew chakra threads, even freshly made shinin. No, what he needed now was something much rarer. A spatial chakra thread. However, a spatial chakra thread was not something that could be made easily. Even with intermediate level mastery, Ren had only been able to use space chakra for basic sensing, and even those techniques required a lot of chakra, which was why he didn't usually use them. They drained too much for too little utility in combat situations. Still, he didn't think much before starting. He began needing the space chakra like normal chakra to form chakra threads. But space itself was abstract. Though it existed everywhere, it was still incredibly difficult to understand. With his current mastery, he was able to attune to it, sense its rhythm, feel its layers, but actively manipulating the element for more advanced purposes remained elusive. Every time he tried to mold space chakra into a stable thread, it would dissipate after leaving his body, scattered before it could form. That left him stumped. Not wanting to waste time, he didn't hesitate. He immediately invested 3 intermediate level mastery points into his space release mastery, raising it to 74%. Then, he added 1 advanced level mastery point, bringing it to 76%, directly pushing his space release into the advanced mastery category. In that moment, knowledge related to the space element began shuffling through his mind in pieces, layers, diagrams, sensations, and at the same time, he could feel his ability to mold space chakra rise to another level. But even then he still couldn't create something like the spatial chakra thread. Ren frowned, deep in thought. Am I doing something wrong? But that's the only way I can think of to connect myself to the seal for the Flying Thunder God Jutsu, a space jutsu to work. Or, is it possible that spatial chakra thread isn't even a thing? He decided to try the next most obvious thing. He moved closer to the seal, placed his hand on it, and stimulated it with spatial chakra. That familiar pull came again, but this time, it was a bit stronger than before. However, there still wasn't any real difference. Nothing suggested that he was being teleported from one point to another. Which meant one thing, the pathway was still missing, and without that, no matter how strong the seal or his chakra connection, it would be impossible to go from point A to point B. Just like physical movement, if someone wanted to go from one house to another, there had to be a path, roads, air, water, something that would allow the body to move from one place to the next. That path was the one thing he was missing right now, which also meant, now was the best time to use the boost. But before that, he used the 2 points he had left to raise his intelligence stat to 79. Then he asked the system, do I have to use the whole 10 minutes in one go, or can I stop the timer midway? If he could pause the timer, that would be ideal, as he could use any remaining time for other purposes. The system's response came instantly. Affirmative. The host can use the 10 minutes intelligence boost as long as his intelligence is at 79 points. Ren's eyes lit up. This meant he could use the boost for Flying Thunder God now, and if he succeeded before 10 minutes were up, he could stop the timer and use the rest later for something else. He took a deep breath and gave the command. System, use the boost. The system responded. Use plus 20 intelligence for 10 minutes. Ren nodded. Yes. A soft pulse went through his mind and a timer appeared in the corner of his vision. 10 o'clock. Chapter 159. When you're so smart, even the laws of nature back off. The moment Ren confirmed with the system, the timer 10 o'clock started ticking. It was strange. The second the boost activated, his thoughts sharpened like a blade. His eyes didn't move faster, his body didn't suddenly become quicker, but inside his head, everything just clicked. He could feel it. Ideas started lining up, like soldiers forming ranks. Concepts that once floated in vague corners of his mind snapped into place like puzzle pieces. There was no confusion anymore, just a focused clarity. Every single thought had a path, and every path had a conclusion. He looked down at the spatial seal in front of him. So this is what 99 intelligence feels like, he thought, thoroughly impressed. He felt like he could solve every single thing could be solved with just one glance, which was almost true because 99 intelligence was the limits of humans in this world. Since the system had highest limit of level 100, it means that intelligence was also limited at 100 points, so that means 99 points should be the limit of anything that is humanly possible. He crouched beside the seal again. His fingers ran along the three-layer structure he had drawn: chakra lock, directional bind, pulse reception. First problem, he thought quietly, I'm not being teleported. He closed his eyes and visualized everything that had happened earlier. The pull, the chakra, the way he stimulated the seal and felt that suction sensation, like something was trying to drag him across reality, but failing halfway through. Right now, I'm like a balloon caught in a breeze, he murmured. It tugs at me, but there's no road to follow, no force to carry me through. So the question became, how does one create a road between 2 points using space chakra? The answer came to him immediately. Space chakra, unlike normal chakra natures, isn't something I can actually control. The only reason I was even able to use space chakra before was because I could sense the existence of space itself within a certain range. Even the jutsu I was using, or thought I was using, were only possible because I manipulated space within that limited range using normal chakra. He continued the thought without pause. The reason those jutsu consumed so much chakra is because even a subtle manipulation of space requires a huge amount of force to act upon it, something only chakra can provide. But even then, only a tiny portion of space actually gets altered. The rest stays untouched, masking the chakra usage, which is why people who aren't attuned to space chakra can't even detect its presence. That understanding shifted something in his thinking. Which means, to create a pathway between myself and the seal, to link the anchor to my core, I need to build a passageway made of space itself. A tube-shaped passage. A direct channel that space is forced to flow through. With that realization, his basic understanding of the connection mechanism was finally complete. He glanced at the timer. 6:57. 3 minutes had passed just for him to reach this level of insight. Without wasting any more time, Ren made his next move. He immediately invested the one remaining advanced level mastery point into chakra control, raising it to 89%, then used 4 master level points to push it further to 93%. He cursed his lower intelligence self. Chakra control is the basis of everything in the shinobi world, he muttered. If I'd raised it earlier, I could have learned all other things faster. That lower intelligence self had been hoarding mastery points for things like yin release, when in reality, high chakra control would have allowed him to train yin release properly using clones. He did have a few rough ideas for training yin, like capturing rogue shinobi and experimenting on their brains and minds, but he quickly shoved that thought into a corner of his head. Now wasn't the time. He focused back on the task at hand and quickly checked the system's reward for reaching 90% chakra control. Congratulations user for reaching 90% mastery of chakra control. Reward, chakra stability. The user can now perfectly maintain jutsu form or chakra-based abilities in environments with severe chakra interference and pressure, such as explosions, storms, unstable terrain, or disrupted gravity. Exactly what I needed, Ren muttered. He was a bit suspicious about how perfectly timed the reward was, but he didn't dwell on it. Wasting time now would be no better than his lower intelligence self. He tested his enhanced chakra control for about 10 seconds, which was just enough to get a feel for it. Confident that it was sufficient, he got to work. He expanded his space sense once again and, as expected, instantly felt the familiar connection to the seal. But this time, he ignored it. Instead, he concentrated fully on the space itself. Space was everywhere. That much he already knew. But now that his mastery had reached advanced, he could sense the individual particles and elements of space within the entire basement, a level of detail he couldn't perceive before. Now came the hard part. He began projecting chakra outward, and this time, he truly felt the pressure of space pushing back against his chakra. But thanks to the newly acquired chakra stability, his chakra remained steady and unfazed. With a moment of thought, he understood the correct structure. A cylinder would be the most stable shape for the kind of passageway he needed. It would contain the flow and guide it directly from him to the seal, like a wire supplying electricity. So he started molding his chakra into a cylindrical shape, long, hollow, and precise. The role of this chakra cylinder was clear: contain space and create a stable passage for spatial flow between his body and the anchor seal. He completed the chakra tube with care, then began pushing the space particles, those tiny bits he could now sense clearly, into the cylinder. As expected, there was resistance. The space inside didn't want to be confined. But with his stable chakra control, he was able to contain it. He forced the flow, compressing the space particles into the chakra tube and sealing them in place. After several seconds of work, he finally completed the structure. A space-filled chakra cylinder, a controlled link between him and the anchor seal. Though the space inside the tube kept trying to escape from both ends, the structure held, and most importantly, the goal was achieved. The pathway now existed as a proper link between his core and the spatial anchor. He wasn't completely sure it would work until he tested it, but now there was a real chance. The core theory was now functional, and Ren, standing calmly in the center of his basement with that quiet look of focus on his face, knew the most difficult step had just been taken. The rest would follow. He looked at the chakra-formed cylinder still floating between him and the seal. It wasn't perfect. The space inside it kept pushing outward. But the basic shape was intact, and more importantly, it was stable. That was enough. He took a deep breath, then placed his hand back onto the seal. He didn't inject chakra like before. Instead, he gently extended the front end of the chakra cylinder until it touched the seal's second layer, the directional binding part. The moment they made contact, something shifted. The pull was no longer gentle. He felt his body being yanked forward, not physically, but through that thin tunnel he had just made. His senses stretched toward the seal, and for the first time, it didn't just feel like a pull. It felt like a path. Still, he didn't teleport yet. He could tell this wasn't enough. The link was unstable, and if he attempted to move through it now, his body might be shredded between two incomplete spatial points. His chakra had to wrap the link from both ends, not just from him to the seal, but also from the seal back to him. He extended the chakra tube a bit more. Using both hands this time, he reinforced both ends. He placed his left hand on his chest, focusing on his core, the origin point of his chakra. His right hand stayed on the seal. He imagined the cylinder as something stretching from the seal to his very core, and then he began feeding chakra from both ends. Immediately, the space inside the tube stabilized further. The ends stopped leaking and the resistance vanished. He glanced at the timer. 5:11. Still plenty of time left, so with no hesitation left, Ren focused completely. He wrapped the tube with another thin layer of chakra to prevent spatial drift. Then, he pumped a final burst of chakra from his core, directing it through the tunnel toward the anchor seal. The response was immediate. He felt something shift in his body, like every cell had been temporarily unhooked from reality. Then, he vanished. And reappeared. Just like that. He stood at the far side of the basement, right next to the seal he'd placed earlier. The moment he arrived, his body stumbled slightly, not out of pain or strain, but from sheer disorientation. His heartbeat was steady. His chakra was steady, but his mind took a moment to catch up. He blinked and looked around. Everything was the same, yet different. He was 10 meters away from his previous location. He hadn't moved, he hadn't even walked. No flicker, no blur, no trail. He had just skipped. He turned around and stared at the place he had been standing seconds ago. That worked. His voice came out calm, but inside he was stunned. It wasn't smooth. The teleport had a strange lurch to it, like jumping into a river from too high, but he had done it. He had used the Flying Thunder God technique. Not with perfect form. Not yet. But it worked. A genuine teleport. He didn't even celebrate. He was already moving again. He went back to the center of the basement and picked another seal. This time, he placed it behind a pillar, out of his direct sight. He formed the space tube again. It was faster this time and much more easier as the understanding was locked in. He reinforced the cylinder, locked the ends, created the spatial link, and pushed his chakra through it. He vanished again. This time, there was no stumble. He was behind the pillar, hand already resting on the cold stone wall to balance himself, but he didn't need it. He felt stable. A little winded, but not unsteady. He glanced at the timer again. 3:42. It was still more than enough. Now came the real test. He threw one of the anchor seals into the air, just straight up for 20 meters. It reached the top of the basement dome. While it was midair, he shot his chakra pulse toward it, and the moment it connected, he created a quick spatial cylinder. It wasn't as strong, but it didn't need to last long. He triggered the chakra flow, aiming for teleport before the seal hit the ground, and he vanished again. This time, he reappeared midair, right above the seal, and his eyes went wide for a split second as gravity yanked him back down. He landed on his feet with a roll and stood up again. Holy shit! Midair teleport. He was grinning wide now, but he didn't stop. He threw 3 seals in different corners of the room, one on the ceiling support, one behind the central pipe structure, one next to the exit door. He formed spatial cylinders to all 3, one after the other. Teleport, teleport, teleport. Each time, a short delay, about a full second between chakra flow and jump. It wasn't instant yet, but it actually happened. He moved across the room in near silence. No hand seals. No flash of light. Just clean whoosh and swoosh. He glanced at the timer. 2:51. Without wasting a second, he immediately paused the boost and a system prompt appeared and he sat down on the floor. Timer paused, 2:51 remaining. As soon as he sat down, he began taking deep breaths, trying to recover his chakra from using the jutsu so many times. His body felt slightly heavy and drained, not in pain or something like that, but definitely worn out. That was when he realized something odd. He hadn't actually used the Flying Thunder God technique that many times, and yet, his chakra was already down to less than half. There was only nearly 20% remaining. This was despite the fact that his chakra reserves were already at S rank, having gone through both qualitative and quantitative enhancements. He did the mental math quickly. If he had attempted all of this back when his chakra was still within a Jonin level range, he probably would have been able to use the jutsu only 2 or 3 times, maximum, before running dry. Now that the intelligence boost had ended, his thoughts no longer moved at lightning speed. He couldn't make instant deductions like before. Even so, he didn't immediately move again. He just sat there in silence, slowly going over everything he'd just experienced. Bit by bit, he replayed the feeling of activating the jutsu, the sensation of space folding, the pull of the anchor, and how much chakra each attempt consumed. Even without the boost, he was determined to analyze it all, piece by piece, until he understood everything that had just happened, because this wasn't something normal, this was the Flying Thunder God Jutsu. Chapter 160, When in doubt, lie on the floor and pretend you're a genius. First off, my speed is too slow. That was the first thought that came to Ren's mind. Even though the Flying Thunder God was the fastest jutsu known in the world, he wasn't referring to the speed of the technique itself, he was talking about the activation time. Right now, he had to locate the seal, create the spatial pathway, and only after that could he actually teleport. The entire process of locating the seal and forming the spatial conduit took about a second or a bit more. That kind of delay wasn't acceptable in a real combat situation. Although he wasn't planning to reveal his use of Flying Thunder God unless absolutely necessary, he still wanted it to be combat ready. In its current state, it wasn't. That brought him to the second problem. This version of the jutsu wasn't feasible for battle. If there ever came a time when he was forced to use Flying Thunder God, that would mean his chakra was already low and his condition would be bad. And in that state, if he had to spend that much chakra just to escape, he simply couldn't. I either need to find Minato's version of the FTG or improve it on my own, he thought. The base concept would be the same, but I have to do something to eliminate the two biggest drawbacks, activation time and chakra cost. He paused, narrowing his eyes. I'll check with Utakata-sensei first. He and Dad were Minato's teammates, so there's a chance he knows something about it. Even a small piece of information could help. If not, I'll just keep using clones to think and think until I figure out a feasible solution. With his plan set, he shifted focus to the jutsu itself. That higher intelligence bastard cursed me out a bit, Ren thought to himself, but he was right, I really shouldn't have hoarded those chakra control points. It's literally the foundation of every jutsu in the shinobi world. Flying Thunder God had required way more chakra control than he had expected. Though he had been able to create the chakra tube and hold space particles inside it, to form what he now mentally called a space pipe, he hadn't actually felt what happened inside that tunnel, or how the teleportation took place. Still, he made an educated guess. If I had to describe it, it'd be something like a transit channel. A sealed space pathway used for teleportation. And the reason I was thrown out the other end so fast was because the space particles rejected my presence. Since I am not a space particle, they pushed me out of their structure. He frowned. No, that makes it sound like they were ejecting me like I'm some kind of virus. He shook his head, correcting his own interpretation. It's more like, the tube only allows one-way passage. That's why I was sent from point A to point B so quickly. The structure of the conduit is a compressed space, so the only way I could travel was by using those space particles, which boosted my travel speed to the level of teleportation. Still, that was all speculation. He couldn't truly understand what happened inside the conduit unless he became more proficient in the jutsu or tested it on someone else. He stood up and created a clone, giving it 90% of his remaining chakra. That should be enough for 2 teleportations. Then he handed it one of the completed seals. There was another problem too. The seal platform. The current seal was drawn on standard Fuinjutsu paper, but it couldn't hold up during teleportation. Every time he used the jutsu, the seal would get ripped apart by the force of the technique. He needed to find a better material, or a way to embed the seal more permanently. While that thought remained in the back of his mind, the clone got ready to use the jutsu. A moment later, poof. Ren dropped to his knees with a jolt of pain, eyes wide and hand clutching his chest. Without thinking, he activated a healing jutsu, though there was no actual injury. The pain wasn't physical. It came from the feedback of what the clone had experienced. Shaky breaths left his lungs as he steadied himself on the floor, sweat clinging to his back. As I thought, clones can't survive inside the spatial conduit, he muttered. The feedback had confirmed it. The clone was compressed until it exploded inside the teleportation tube. The pressure had crushed it almost instantly. It seems only actual physical bodies with real flesh can enter the tube and survive. And that lined up perfectly with what the higher intelligence Ren had predicted earlier. That was also the reason why he hadn't tested the jutsu using clones. Not only would it waste precious time if the clone failed, but he also had absolute confidence in his process. Still, Ren had wanted to test it just once, just to be sure. Now he had an answer, and a head-splitting pain. The clone hadn't even made it fully through. As soon as it entered the spatial tube, an unimaginable pressure crushed it from all directions, and it detonated like a balloon under vacuum pressure. Only a true physical body can withstand that force. That tube must naturally reject anything that is not completely solid. Even though the shadow clone is solid, it doesn't have enough flesh which could resist the pressure. His chakra was completely drained now. Even if he wanted to continue testing or refining the technique, there was nothing left to work with. His body was sore, his head was heavy, and the aftershock of the clone's destruction still echoed through his nerves. So Ren did the only reasonable thing. He laid down on the basement floor, arms spread out, letting the cool surface numb his skin. I'll fix all of it later, he mumbled. Then, without another thought, he closed his eyes and fell asleep, resting both his chakra and his brain. He didn't know how long he had been asleep, but the exact time didn't matter. What mattered was that his mind was clearer now. It felt like the intense mental activity from earlier had left behind a residue, something that had settled in slowly as he slept. His thoughts now flowed more like the ones he had while the intelligence boost was active. Not quite as fast, not quite as sharp, but still more refined than usual. That higher level of thinking had left a mark, and he could feel himself processing things differently, bit by bit. He sat up slowly in the basement, still feeling a little drained, but functional. As he started going over the FTG experiment again, a few things clicked into place, thoughts that had begun forming before sleep but only fully took shape now. The reason only a physical body can move through the space tube is probably because of the kind of pressure inside it, he thought. That compressed space is so dense and high pressure that only a real body, with its own internal durability and a continuous source of vitality, can endure it. He remembered how the clone had tried the same thing and instantly burst apart. That wasn't surprising anymore. It matched what he knew about clones: one strong impact, one serious disruption to the form, and they vanish. The tube wasn't something that damaged the clone like a punch or a blast, it just applied overwhelming, consistent force. Constant compression from all directions, a pressure that didn't break bones or rupture organs but instead broke the very idea of existence in that space. It made him frown. The clones have the same physical stats as me, but that wasn't enough. Why? He thought for a few more seconds, then answered himself. The only real difference is that I have something they don't. A steady supply of vitality. Chakra that constantly refreshes my body. Even if my muscles strain or break, the energy running through them patches things back together before collapse. The clone doesn't have that kind of buffer, it only has what it started with. Once that's pushed past, it's over. He leaned his back against the wall, sighing slightly. It was logical. The clones mimic the body's strength and even its jutsu, but they don't share its biology. They don't regenerate. They don't have real organs or a blood system. They're stable enough for combat, but not enough for a space-based pressure system that threatens to crush the user down to atoms. That kind of stress required more than just good stats. Still, something didn't quite sit right with him. He narrowed his eyes. But the clones now have the restoration skill, he reminded himself. That should have helped. The restoration skill was meant to regenerate the chakra of the clone, and chakra was the power source for all techniques and stamina. If a clone could regenerate its chakra, shouldn't it also be able to restore its physical stability, even in compressed space? Unless he paused, then considered another possibility. Unless the space inside that tube doesn't have chakra at all, like a vacuum? Or maybe it disrupts the chakra network so completely that restoration isn't possible once inside. That might be why I didn't feel that pressure the same way. It only targeted what couldn't sustain itself in that space. But then, how was he able to survive and continue inside it? That thought hovered in his mind for a while as he stared at the ceiling. He didn't try to answer it now. He'd reached the limit of what he could figure out at this level of clarity. But he wasn't worried. Answers like that would come naturally over time, once he kept practicing and getting more used to the way FTG actually worked. He'd already taken the first major step, and the fine-tuning could wait. For now, there was one more thing that needed attention. The timer. He pulled up the floating interface and checked the countdown for the intelligence boost. 251. Still the same. It hadn't gone down while he slept. That was good, as the system kept its promise. As long as his base intelligence stayed at 79, the boost wouldn't decay over time. It was an active tool, not a passive buff, and now that his mind had adjusted to the side effects of being at 99 intelligence for 7 straight minutes, something else was happening inside him. He could feel it. That high-level thinking he experienced earlier hadn't vanished after the boost wore off. It had just slowed down. The thoughts he'd formed were still there, buried in his brain, and as he revisited them, they started making more sense. Not instantly or cleanly, but they were still coming to him slowly. That was why he could now think more clearly than before. That was why, even without the boost, he was making connections faster. There was a kind of lingering momentum in his thought process that hadn't existed before. His brain, exposed to a higher cognitive level, was now pushing itself to catch up. He felt like his base intelligence might cross the 80-point threshold soon, purely from this indirect training effect. It's like my brain's trying to replicate what it experienced earlier, he thought. And that made sense too. His chakra system had long adapted to pressure, weight, heat, and damage. It had adapted to training. So why not his brain? The mind was made of chakra as well, especially for a shinobi like him, who used it to fight, plan, and learn too much stuff. As he leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, he let the thoughts drift for a while. This was the kind of analysis that his lower intelligence self could never do. That version of him would have hoarded chakra control points out of caution or some vague plan to use them for yin release experiments later. And that had nearly slowed everything down. Now, he was starting to see things clearly. Chakra control really was the foundation of everything. Even Flying Thunder God, one of the most powerful techniques in the world, came down to extremely refined chakra work. Without that, it wouldn't even be possible to hold space particles inside a shaped chakra tube. He'd never actually expected the FTG to work that way. But now that it had, he understood that everything about the jutsu, every function of it relied on tight control and deep understanding of both chakra and space. And the tube, he still needed a proper name for it. Calling it a tube of chakra that holds compressed space wasn't exactly helpful, but he'd worry about that later. For now, he just called it the space tunnel. Simple enough to work with. His eyes drifted to the scattered papers and half-used seal tags on the floor. He'd need to figure out something else for marking. Fuinjutsu paper wasn't good enough, the seal was torn apart each time he teleported. If the seal got destroyed with every use, it couldn't function as a reliable anchor. There was a huge risk of the seal breaking midway and him getting stuck in the space tube. He might need a metal surface or specialized reinforced parchment. Something more durable which is capable of withstanding space compression bursts like Minato's three-pronged kunai. I need to talk with Dad or Yudakata-sensei about this. I really hope they have that kunai, he thought. But all of that could come later. Right now, he needed to fully use the timer before his intelligence involuntarily broke through to 80 points. That would mean wasting almost 3 minutes of highest level of intelligence possible, and if he really did that he might curse himself to death. Chapter 161, Kimura's left hand triggered my villain arc. Once he decided to use the remaining time on the intelligence boost, Ren opened up his mastery panel again. He had 3 minutes left on the timer, and if he wanted to make full use of them, he couldn't afford to waste the boost on something too obscure or overly complex. At the same time, using it on something too basic would be just as pointless. His eyes scanned the panel, looking for the next best options. Eventually, they landed on two things: elemental releases and Yang Chakra. His Yang Chakra was already sitting at 84%, the highest among all his releases. If he didn't use the boost on that, then he'd be an idiot, and probably get mentally cursed by that higher intelligence version of himself again. As he kept running through different ideas and potential benefits, his gaze drifted to the 81% mastery of Earth release. Steel release, he thought. But then he shook his head. No, steel release, even if not explained in detail, probably uses yin release, not yang. Yin release governed form, shape, and conceptual transformation. That meant it could refine or reshape Earth into something like steel, not just physically, but through a kind of spiritual or mental manipulation. In other words, turning Earth into steel would require altering its fundamental nature, and that was Yin's domain. But what if I don't change its basic form? His eyes brightened slightly as the idea took shape. What if instead of using Yin to refine it, I just use Yang Chakra to strengthen it? Not to transform it, just enhance its inherent property, which is durability. That made sense. If Earth Chakra represented solidity and endurance, then Yang could be used to enhance those traits internally, within his own body, and if he combined those two properly, then perhaps he could harden his body using Earth and Yang Chakra in a similar way to how Kirishima's quirk worked in the MHA world. Since I already rely on Taijutsu in combat, he reasoned, a body hardening technique like that would be insanely useful. But there was a catch. The only problem is, would less than 3 minutes be enough? It wasn't a complex Kekii Jinkai like lava release or scorch release. It didn't require working with multiple natures or external elements. This was something he'd be doing purely to his own body, using 2 releases he already had good mastery over. That made it more manageable. But even then, combining elements with precision inside the body wasn't easy. It required extreme control over both Earth and Yang Chakra. He exhaled slowly, thinking it through again. Compared to FTG, this body hardening idea is much simpler. I already spent 7 minutes just understanding the basics of Flying Thunder God, so improving it further would probably take more than the 2 minutes I have left. Hardening, on the other hand, might actually be achievable in that time, or at least partially. Even if he failed, he knew the attempt alone would give a good boost to both Earth release and Yang release mastery. It wasn't a total loss either way, but he still couldn't decide. Part of him argued that any progress on FTG, even minor, could be useful right now, but another part of him knew that he wouldn't be using FTG in public anytime soon, while hardening would have real and immediate combat benefits. Plus, no one would be surprised if a Taijutsu-based genius like him suddenly developed a new defensive technique. In fact, most would expect it. He was already known for being durable in close combat. It wouldn't be out of character at all. Still unable to come to a decision, he pulled out the sacred stick from his belt and placed it at the intersection of 4 tiles on the floor. If it falls to the right side, I'll use the 3 minutes for FTG, he thought. If it falls to the left, I'll go with hardening. He whispered the sacred prayer, let go of the stick, and watched as it landed in a straight line. Neither left nor right. He stared at it in silence. You little bitch. In a fit of annoyance, he snapped the stick in half and tossed it aside. Still frustrated, he stormed out of the basement, eyes darting around until he spotted Kimura lounging nearby. Without wasting a second, he closed the distance and shouted, Kimura, one of your hands is yes, and the other is no. Kimura blinked in confusion, sitting up as Ren rushed him. Ren didn't wait for a response. Should I use the 3 minutes for hardening, yes or no, he thought, reaching out and grabbing Kimura's left hand. That was the subconscious trick, right? Left hand means no, doesn't it? But then Kimura spoke, still puzzled. This was the yes hand. Ren froze, stared at him, and slowly backed away. Then, without another word, he turned and marched back toward the basement. Just before disappearing through the door, he shot Kimura a final glare. Why are you sitting around doing nothing? Go train or something. Strength doesn't come for free. He gave a dramatic humph and slammed the basement door shut behind him. Kimura sat there blinking, still trying to process what had just happened. A while ago, Ren had told him to stay hidden and lay low so he wouldn't get exposed. Now he was yelling at him for not training. Didn't he ask me to stay in the house so I don't get spotted? Kimura mumbled. But then he shrugged. If he wants me to train, I'll train. And with that, he went off to do just that. Now that Ren had returned to the basement and the signs had pointed for him to choose hardening over FTG, he would do just that. His mind moved to the thought that had struck him earlier, hardening. It wasn't the earth armor jutsu or the earth spear jutsu which Kakuzu used, no, it was actual reinforcement of the flesh and bone using chakra from inside the body, something that could be maintained in motion, under stress, and ideally in sync with taijutsu. He didn't activate the boost yet. First, he went over his reasoning again to confirm it. Steel release probably required yin to redefine the nature of the material to alter the concept of earth into a harder substance, like converting it mentally and spiritually into steel. But he didn't need that. He didn't want transformation. What he wanted was amplification and reinforcement. If earth chakra represented solidity and structure, and yin represented vitality and the physical body, then their combination inside his own flesh should, in theory, make his body denser and more resistant. If it worked. He tapped his finger on the ground a few times, checking his chakra levels. He'd recovered all of his chakra, and this wasn't going to be a flashy jutsu, it was going to be small-scale, internal, and heavily reliant on chakra control. His hyperfocus also improved both his control and his perception of chakra, and what he wanted to achieve was exactly the kind of thing the intelligence boost would help with most. He gave another command, system, begin the boost. Immediately, the timer appeared again, 2:51, and began ticking down. Once again, the effects were immediate, like a set of weights being lifted from his mind. He breathed in, hardening. He closed his eyes and visualized his own muscle structure, mapping out the chakra flow that ran through it. His knowledge of anatomy was strong due to how advanced his medical nin training was, but with 93% chakra control and 99 intelligence, he could now map and simulate the major pathways like water mapping the grooves in earth. The first step was obvious, infuse chakra into the muscle tissue, but not just any chakra. Yang chakra. His first goal was simple. Find a way to thread yang chakra through his muscular system and see what happens. He started with a small portion, sending it through his arms, wrapping it around the muscle fibers gently. As it circulated, he noticed his arm temperature rising slightly, and there was a faint tension building under the skin. There was nothing dangerous yet, but it meant the chakra was stimulating activity. Just like how Tsunade's chakra enhanced strength relied on precise control over physical energy, he was now applying a similar technique, but without external burst. He was just reinforcing instead of amplifying outward, but instead of normal chakra he was using yang chakra. The yang chakra moved smoothly, which was good, and his control was enough to keep it from overheating or tearing anything. All right, he thought, flexing his fingers slightly and observing the way his muscles responded. They're a bit tighter and denser, though the difference is not huge, at least there is still a change. Now came the more complex part. He opened his eyes and looked at his hand. It looked normal, but felt heavier. It was time to test what happened when he introduced earth chakra into the system. He exhaled and brought his focus to his right forearm. Slowly, carefully, he began to layer earth nature chakra into the muscle, right along the same path the yang chakra had taken. Almost immediately, he felt resistance. Not rejection, but structural feedback. Earth chakra was naturally sluggish, and it resisted being moved through something as soft and flexible as muscle. But his body had already been prepped by the yang chakra. The tissue was denser now, more resistant, and in a strange way, slightly more compatible with the sluggish movement of earth chakra. He slowed the flow rate and let the chakra settle gradually, layer by layer. His muscles tensed again, but differently this time. The feedback was like sand being poured into slime. It was gritty, heavy, but not entirely hostile. He had to adjust the flow constantly to prevent clogging or chakra bleeding, but the structure held. And as the chakra settled into place, Ren finally began to understand the basic principle he'd been chasing. He wasn't trying to coat his body in earth. He wasn't trying to wear armor. He was embedding chakra into his physical structure using earth chakra to give that structure density and hardness, and yang chakra to bind it to the living tissue. The effect was internal, not external, and somehow, it was working. He flexed his arm again. Still no visible change. But the resistance in the motion was slightly higher. The weight of his limb slightly increased. He tapped the forearm against the floor lightly, and heard a duller thud than before. The feeling of that dull thud when he tapped his arm against the floor stayed with him. It was not sharp or crisp like normal, it was just heavy and weighted like a hammer striking a surface. The muscle hadn't become rock, but it definitely wasn't soft tissue anymore either. Ren adjusted his breathing. The second step was to confirm the chakra integration. Right now, earth and yang were both inside his muscle structure, but they weren't exactly cooperating. They were stacked and layered one after the another, but they were not merged. He could feel the earth chakra lying in the muscle like embedded grit, and the yang chakra trying to keep it from pushing out or damaging the fibers. It was working, technically, but it wasn't fluid. Not yet. He needed to find a way to combine the two more cleanly. Right now they were existing next to each other, but they needed to function as a single unit, like an alloy, not a sandwich. He ran a chakra pulse through his right arm again, slowly this time. The earth chakra clung stubbornly to the tissues it had been forced into, heavy and resistant. The yang chakra remained more active, flowing and stabilizing, but only within the muscle lines. It wasn't pushing into the membrane or skin yet, and that meant the structure remained disconnected across layers. If he wanted this to be combat usable, the durability had to cover not just muscle but the outer body too. Maybe I'm doing this backward, a thought came to him. He paused his chakra flow and instead focused on creating a mixed chakra stream first. Not earth and yang, separately, but a mixed current. His previous experience with chakra combinations told him this wouldn't be an actual elemental fusion. This wasn't a Kekii Genkai like lava release or ice release required advanced genetic traits, but mixing two natures without fusing them was something that could still work, like combining wind chakra with fire in sequence to increase the damage output of the fire. Maybe the same applied here. So, he focused on the ratio. Earth chakra first, slow and steady. A thick current, which was more heavy and grounding. Then, he added yang chakra, its quantity slightly more than before, and allowed it to flow into the earth chakra's stream gradually. The effect wasn't immediate, but it was different. The earth chakra didn't break apart the moment it met yang chakra now. It shifted slightly, softened at the edges, almost as if the yang chakra was lubricating, no, binding it. It was making it more malleable. Instead of trying to force earth chakra into the muscle, he let the mixed current flow through the tissues in one go. The difference was clear. There was no scraping or tearing sensation. The chakra flow was smooth and it actually moved. He traced this new mixed chakra into his right bicep, watching carefully for any signs of strain. None. The flow was steady. He pulsed it slowly into the upper arm, around the elbow joint, then into the forearm again. When he flexed, the motion felt heavier but natural, like moving with a training weight, but one fused into the body. Then he tried something different. He punched downward with just a simple impact against the floor. The sound was deeper, a bit more forceful than he expected for the amount of motion. And there was a noticeable shock up his arm. It wasn't painful, it was like hitting something with reinforced gloves on. That's it, he murmured. Now the idea was clearer. By mixing the chakra beforehand and guiding it through the tissues as a single infused stream, he could avoid the layering problem. Earth alone made the body stiff. Yang alone just strengthened without durability. But together, in proper ratio and timing, they made the tissues dense, reactive, and semi-armored. The next step would be reinforcing the outer layer, the skin. Chapter 162, Now Testing My Body is a Weapon Hypothesis. Ren shifted focus again and traced a small current of mixed earth-yang chakra toward the underside of his forearm, specifically to the subdermal layer. It was more sensitive there, so any mistake would cause chakra backlash, or worse, numbness. But with his current control and boosted intelligence, he was confident enough to test it. The chakra passed into the membrane layer beneath the skin. Instantly, the sensation changed. It was like applying pressure between a tight glove and the hand wearing it. His skin didn't react at first, but after a second, he began to feel a slight firmness like an undercurrent just beneath the surface. He flexed his fingers and the skin stretched with the movement, but felt tougher, more rigid. That was good. Very good. Still, it wasn't stable yet, as after about 10 seconds, the chakra started to disperse. His skin lost that firmness and returned to normal. Not continuous, he noted. It needs a loop or seal. He wasn't wrong. Full body jutsu like the Raikage's lightning cloak, Tsunade's strength enhancement, and even the sand shield of the Kaze cage, they all relied on stable chakra loop systems to remain active under motion and stress. He glanced at the timer. 1:29. There was enough time. He started thinking about how to create a loop, a chakra pattern not formed using hand seals but formed using tenketsu connection points and constant low-frequency chakra pulses, which should be just enough to keep the earth-yang mixture circulating without disrupting the body's own natural chakra flow. The pieces were coming together, but creating the loop would be much more trickier. Ren knew that building a chakra loop system inside the body wasn't something most shinobi did casually. Usually, seals were external, written onto surfaces, activated by hand signs or infused with chakra beforehand. But this was different. This wasn't a scroll or a trap, it was something that needed to remain stable inside his moving body while he fought. That meant no funjutsu scripts can be used like he did with the 8 gates. With the 8 gates, he only needed to subtly move the chakra, but this required extremely precise chakra control, which meant it couldn't be done by funjutsu, at least not at his current level. The structure had to be created directly using chakra and his tenketsu points. A living feedback system. It wasn't exactly a new concept. After all, the Raikage with his lightning cloak used similar ideas, but Ren didn't have a reference, only a hypothesis. He took a breath, then sat back slightly and let his chakra circulate naturally. He needed to feel out the points along his arm, elbow, shoulder, and wrist, where the chakra naturally pulsed with stronger flow. Not quite tenketsu gates in the traditional sense, but the major circulation nodes. Once identified, those would serve as the chakra loop anchors. 3 points per limb should be enough, he noted, tapping his bicep, forearm, and wrist. He began to shape the mixed earth-yang chakra into a looping stream between those 3 anchor points. He didn't push it too fast, letting the chakra flow steadily like a warm pulse. A slow ring that moved under his skin, spreading back and forth, reinforcing the hardened layer he just experimented with. Immediately, he noticed a change. The earlier problem of chakra dispersing from the subdermal layer no longer happened. The layer now held its density longer, and it even felt more responsive. He flicked a finger against his arm. The knock produced a solid tap which was dull and deep. Not normal skin, definitely not rock, but something between, something like an inbuilt armor. And more importantly, it stayed active while he moved, which means the loop system worked. He repeated the process with his other arm, carefully forming the 3-point circuit and feeding the earth-yang stream through it. It was faster this time, since he had done it before, and that was enough to create a muscle memory for him. Once it stabilized, he stood up and did a quick test, 10 short punches with each arm, alternating like shadow boxing. The sensation was different. The weight behind the strikes had changed. It wasn't just about strength, it was more about the impact of the delivery. It felt like hitting with something denser than fists. There was strain, though. He could feel his chakra being used up slowly. Not rapidly, not dangerously, but enough to note that the hardened state had a drain. He could keep it active for a while, but not indefinitely. However, there wasn't much problem in that regard. He couldn't say he had too much chakra, but he still had a lot of it, and his main combat system didn't use huge amount of chakra, which means he could use this hardening at almost all times. Once he created a whole loop and kept it active at all times, it would slowly become a normal thing for him, and he would even be able to use it without even actively thinking about it. Then came the next step of increasing the coverage. So far, he'd only worked on his arms. But if he wanted this technique to be usable in real fights, it needed to cover more than that. At least the upper torso, chest, shoulders, maybe parts of the neck. He sat back down and closed his eyes, focusing on his breathing again. He let his chakra settle and expand evenly across the upper body. With the boost still active, his control and clarity were high, and each flow was visible in his mind like strands of light spreading from his core. First, he extended the existing loop system upward, from shoulders to collarbone, then down toward the chest. He adjusted the flow slightly, forming a hexagonal ring of chakra points around his upper torso. This would serve as the main reinforcement loop. 6 points feeding into each other, all circulating the same earth-yang blend. It took a bit more time to stabilize. The chest area had more movement, and controlling chakra between the lungs and the outer skin was more delicate. He had to avoid pressing too much earth chakra toward the center to keep his breathing smooth. But eventually, it held. Once it locked into place, he tried movement again. He pushed off the ground and moved into basic taijutsu footwork like slips, weaves, and bursts forward. They were not fast or aggressive, but were just enough to test balance, resistance, and flexibility. There was stiffness in the first few steps, but it eased quickly. The earth chakra did add resistance, but the yang chakra offset that with internal flexibility. The result was manageable. His movements didn't feel natural exactly, but they weren't restricted either. The armor moved with him. Then he checked the chakra drain again. It was barely even drained, which meant just normal use like this wouldn't drain much chakra, and that's when something clicked in his mind. The loop isn't just keeping it stable, it was also creating a pressure buffer. Because the chakra wasn't being pushed constantly into the hardened tissue. Instead, it circulated in a loop, passing through each anchor point, refreshing the layer but not flooding it. That meant the chakra cost wasn't based on maintaining the armor through brute force, but on keeping the loop going more efficiently and sustainably. That also explained why earth release techniques like Earth Spear weren't sustainable long-term. Those were brute force transformations. This wasn't. This was internal and integrated reinforcement. Ren lowered himself slowly, stretching his legs out as he sat on the floor again. His focus shifted from his upper body to his legs. The Earth-Yang loop system had worked well so far, but extending it to the lower body wasn't just about replication, as it involved a different chakra dynamic. Legs had more muscle mass, more kinetic output, and much more responsibility for movement and balance. If the chakra density was too high or misaligned, it could throw off his coordination completely. He tapped his right thigh lightly with 2 fingers, then began expanding his chakra sense again, using the boosted clarity while it still lasted. The pathways were slightly different here. More chakra passed through the hips and hamstrings compared to the arms. The movement in the legs was more explosive and not precise like the arms, so the chakra flow needed to account for bursts and recoil. He started with one leg, his dominant right. Just like before, he decided to go with 3 anchor points. One at the upper thigh, one near the knee, and one around the ankle. With slow breaths, he threaded his chakra into these points and began forming the loop. Just like before, it wasn't about brute force. He allowed the loop to circulate at a calm, even pace, keeping his control steady. When the loop stabilized, he pushed earth chakra into the muscle structure, carefully embedding it around the large muscle groups. It felt heavier than the arms immediately, and the chakra drain was slightly higher too, but it still wasn't a big problem. Then came the yang chakra, threaded into the hardened muscle, woven carefully to keep flexibility and prevent locking. As he finished binding the outer membrane layer under the skin, he gently bent the knee, testing the tension. The result was promising, a hardened outer leg structure that moved with him. There was no resistance, no tearing, and no chakra backlash. He repeated the process for his left leg, and it barely took 5 seconds before he was done weaving chakra and doing another stabilization loop, for both legs for safety's sake. He stood up, rolling his shoulders and testing his stance. With his arms, torso, and legs done, his whole body was now covered in the hardening structure, so he braced himself for a full mobility test. He took 1 step forward and the feedback was immediate. It wasn't like his normal strikes at all, it was a lot heavy. It was similar to when he attacked while he training seal was still in effect, but even more heavier, since earth chakra was inherently heavier, and even with yang offsetting some it still retained some properties, but that was the original plan, so that means his idea worked. He moved again, this time adding more speed, sidestep, step in, lean back. Then he added punches, low kicks, evasive slips, forward bursts. The hardened layers responded. It was a little stiff at first, but the moment he adjusted the chakra rhythm in the loops, it smoothed out. He continued adjusting the earth-yang balance in his lower body, focusing more on yang chakra this time. Too much earth would lead to rigidity, which he couldn't afford during footwork. Gradually, he found the correct ratio, roughly 65% Yang to 35% Earth for the legs. A higher Yang ratio allowed enough movement while maintaining defense. For arms and torso, the ratio was closer to 50 to 50, since mobility was less critical and durability more useful. He could always change the ratio depending on the need, like if he ever fell from a high place he would use higher Earth chakra to increase durability and so on. It was all trial and error, but with the enhanced mental clarity still active, the feedback loop was fast. He didn't need to guess for long. His body was quick to respond to each minor adjustment, and his chakra control let him feel every detail. Once satisfied, he shifted to combat drills. 5 punches, 3 kicks, a shoulder ram, a leg sweep and even his favorite move, the ball breaker, everything worked. But each strike felt heavier than normal and way more impactful. But at the same time, it was also costlier. Every motion consumed a little more chakra than usual, not from the strikes themselves, but from maintaining the internal armor while moving at speed. Though it was still manageable, it meant that if he ever used higher forms of this, way more chakra would be consumed. He ran through the sequence twice more before stopping. Sweat was starting to form on his forehead. Not from physical fatigue, he was used to far worse, but from the intensity of chakra shaping. The whole loop required extremely high amount of concentration which was supported by his perfected hyperfocus, but at the same time, since this was his first test, he was a bit experimental which was pushing his chakra control to an even more extreme level. The timer on the system flashed again. 0019. Less than 20 seconds left. Now came the part that mattered the most, storing this configuration. Keeping the muscle memory. It was important to lock the concept into his own practice so he could replicate it without the boost. He sat back down, straightened his spine, and cleared his thoughts. The configuration of chakra loops. The ratio of Yang to Earth. The depth of the hardened layer, dermal embedding just below the skin, not inside the muscle. The anchor points. All of it had to be memorized. He began noting each section in his mind, dividing them into patterns, left arm, chest, back, right leg, left leg. What worked, what didn't, and how much chakra each section consumed individually and as a whole. Slowly, the seconds passed and eventually, the timer turned to midnight. Chapter 163, I didn't choose taijutsu. It jumped me in the alley. As the timer faded, Ren's body relaxed automatically, it was like a subconscious release of pressure. The clarity he had grown used to over the past few minutes was gone, and he could feel the difference immediately. Thoughts that had snapped together now took more effort. Pathways that had been obvious a second ago became layered, foggy, and uncertain. But despite the mental slowdown, the knowledge he had gained during the boost didn't just vanish, it remained stored and embedded within him. He took a few steady breaths and slowly ran his hands over his arms, his legs, pressing lightly. There were no physical signs of hardening left. The internal chakra armor had fully dispersed. There was no pain or any residual stiffness. It was as if nothing had happened, yet the memory of each movement, each layer of chakra control, remained etched into his nervous system. Ren didn't move for a while. He just lay down on the basement floor, arms wide, mentally retracing the steps he'd just taken. Not every part of the technique had been perfectly smooth. The ratios he found worked for now, but that didn't mean they were optimal in every situation. A higher amount of earth chakra provided more defense but reduced speed. The yang chakra was necessary for biological binding and movement, but it consumed more stamina if overused. That kind of balancing would need refinement depending on the battle situation, defensive stance, aggressive rushdown, high-speed combat, long-duration brawls. All of them would need slightly different chakra flows. But still, he did actually create a technique, a watered-down version of Kekkei Genkai, but even that was a huge deal. He had created a method to layer chakra under his skin, reinforcing both muscle and dermal tissue, using internal chakra control rather than relying on outward jutsu or armor, and that was important. Hardening didn't rely on casting anything external. It was part of his body now, pure internal chakra structuring. That alone made it suitable for stealth combat and fast deployment. There were no hand signs and no visible chakra buildup. It was much more efficient and dangerous since even seal-less jutsu had a chakra buildup which would be easily sensed by high-level shinobi, but with the hardening, the chakra movement was so subtle that he had to use his perfected hyperfocus to keep track of it. Hardening would be a great boost, especially in combination with his taijutsu. He'd already reached a level where few could match him in raw hand-to-hand combat. With this, his durability and striking power were going to rise sharply. A single punch from him at full strength while in a hardened state wouldn't just break bone, it might shatter reinforced weapons, crush defenses, or even bypass elemental barriers with enough momentum. He moved his right arm slightly and imagined forming the loop again. Even without the intelligence boost, he could still recall the path of the chakra, the way it circulated around the elbow and locked into the muscle fibers with a slight tension at each rotation. That meant the configuration was locked in and he could easily use it again after retracing the loops. The next thing to consider was the chakra cost and maintenance. He tapped his chest lightly and considered chakra cost again. It hadn't been too bad. For full-body hardening, with high chakra control, he was burning through chakra at a relatively slow rate. He could easily keep it active passively for a long time, since by the time hardening consumed his chakra by a large margin he would have already recovered most of it, so there was no issue with that. However, the advanced stages he had planned would likely take much more chakra. There was room for efficiency improvements, like maybe localizing the technique, for example hardening just the forearms for blocking, or just the torso for defensive taijutsu counters. If he could isolate regions with preformed loops and activate them separately, he could preserve chakra and extend duration. He mentally filed that under next steps. He thought through a few more things, then glanced at his system panel, and there were a few changes. As expected, his intelligence had broken through the 80-point mark and was now sitting at 81. It was likely to rise further once all the thoughts from the intelligence boost had fully settled in. That was the residual effect of 99 intelligence. The clarity faded, but the structural impact lingered. The next change was in his Earth Release and Yang Release masteries, both now at 89%, just one step away from the master level. Again, expected. What he had just attempted required an extremely high degree of control and precision with both these chakra types, so the increase made sense. Unfortunately, both his advanced and master level mastery points were now gone. 0. But he couldn't complain as he did receive a substantial benefit from using them. Still, it was a little painful as mastery points were rare. The last time he'd received some was when he learned his first S-rank jutsu, and after that, he couldn't recall gaining any. That was something he'd need to address soon. Maybe there was a way to generate or earn them beyond just learning high-level techniques. Another change he noticed was that his taijutsu stat had increased from 81 to 84, pushing it solidly into S-rank territory. There was a clear reason for that. It's said that the jump from Jonin level to S-rank is only achieved when the shinobi has something that distinguishes them, a unique ability entirely their own, he thought. Then could this be my unique ability? Hardening, even in its base form, gave him a platform to elevate his physical capability far beyond the norm, and if he developed more advanced forms of it later, it could easily become something dangerous on a completely different level. Right now, there were 3 things supporting the claim that his taijutsu had reached S-rank. The modified 8 gates, up to the 4th gate. Since his base physical stats were already at the peak of Jonin level, activating the 4th gate pushed them cleanly into the S-rank zone. Chakra enhanced strength, which was another enormous boost to raw taijutsu output, and now, hardening, a permanent passive reinforcement that increased his defense and offensive impact with every strike. These were all things that worked because his base stats were already so high. If he had tried them with average Jonin stats, they wouldn't have pushed him this far. He exhaled lightly. When I started out, I thought I'd become an elemental S-ranker, but somehow, I turned into a taijutsu S-ranker instead, he thought. Though I can't complain about power, I'll definitely push my elemental power to S-rank level 2. Just later. For now, I can finally relax a bit. It had been a long stretch of stress. Ever since his encounter with Obito after becoming a genin, he had been training without rest, convinced that his current strength was never enough. That meeting shattered whatever confidence he'd had and forced him back into a brutal training loop. But now, finally, he had power that could be considered S-rank. Not complete, but close enough that he could allow himself to breathe again. Then, another memory came to the surface. The Uchiha massacre. That event was still to come, and it would definitely shake the shinobi world, even more so because there would be definite changes. He already had plans in place to deal with Danzo when that time came. But Danzo wasn't the main issue, he was just a cockroach which could live multiple times. The real problems were Obito and possibly Zetsu. Those two would definitely be involved in some way, and Ren knew they were still beyond him. Even with Flying Thunder God, in its current form, he couldn't deal with Obito. His version of FTG was still rudimentary, it was more theory than field weapon. He gritted his teeth. That bastard. When I have enough power, I'll finish him inside his Kamui dimension, he thought bitterly. That way, he'll understand he shouldn't go around giving people PTSD. Ren exhaled again, forcing himself to calm down. There was still over a year left before that time. If his pace of improvement continued, he would likely have a significantly stronger base by then, strong enough that even a Kamui level threat wouldn't be untouchable. Once his thoughts were settled, he checked his chakra levels. They were almost fully recovered. Without hesitation, he created a clone with 95% of his total chakra. This had become much easier now that both his shadow clone jutsu and chakra control had crossed into master level, above 90%. The clone he just made could now last for up to 3 months, assuming it didn't get dispelled due to reasons, and the reason he chose to make the clone now, and with that much chakra, was because of something he had figured out in the last 3 months. The restoration skill that his clones possessed did not allow them to increase their chakra beyond the amount they were created with. In simpler terms, if a clone was made with 95% chakra, then for that clone, that 95% was its 100%. Even with the ability to regenerate chakra, it could never exceed the limit it started with, and there had been another problem, one that his clones had figured out on their own. Initially, Ren's clones would make another clone with 99% of their chakra to transfer newly gained mastery and then dispel. But that created waste. The 1% of chakra not used was effectively lost each time. Over time, this would add up. As each clone repeated the process, they would steadily decrease in available chakra, eventually reaching a point where the original clone would just collapse from lack of chakra. Fortunately, the clones were also smart since they were his clones. They changed the approach. Now, instead of creating clones with 99%, they used just 1% of their chakra to make a temporary transfer clone. That mini-clone would then dispel, transferring mastery to Ren. Since the original clone was still active, it would receive the chakra back just like recovering chakra after using a jutsu. This way, the chakra loop remained efficient, and the clone never lost its reserve. Here's how it worked. Ren makes a clone with 95 chakra units. That clone sees 95 units as its 100%. It makes a transfer clone with 1 unit. After the transfer, that 1 unit returns to the original clone, minus a negligible chakra cost. This was because the clones only returned chakra back to the ones who made them. The result was that the clone keeps its full chakra over time, avoiding degradation. Ren planned to keep making such clones during his stay here. Not only would they passively train his mastery, they would also become his emergency chakra reservoirs. If he were ever in danger and burned through his own chakra, he could simply dispel one of these high-capacity clones and restore his chakra instantly. Usually what happens is that, if Ren made a clone and his own chakra recovered before the clone dispelled, then the chakra with which the clone was made from would be released in the world. There was no way of stacking the chakra twice. But if Ren still had room in his reserves, then the dispelled clone's chakra would return to him, fully intact. It was a methodical, loophole-free system that existed to prevent chakra abuse. But Ren had found a legitimate way to use it in his favor. Since there would be so many of his clones with almost as much chakra as him, then doesn't that mean he would have near inexhaustible amount of chakra? That way, in the future if he ever encountered a truly dangerous enemy who forced his chakra level to dangerously low level, he would just dispel one of his clone and poof, chakra recovered. Not many could do this since the clones didn't have a long life, but that wasn't a problem for Ren. He had clones that lived for 3 months, which means no shortage of chakra for 3 months. He grinned. If I have 10 such clones at all times, then I practically have an inexhaustible chakra supply. Just pop one when I'm low. He remembered something Yujao had once said. Pig, tiger something. Right. Pig eating the tiger. He frowned. No, I'm not a pig. I'm cute. I can't be a pig. He thought about it again, then nodded. Let's go with sheep. Sure, they're herbivores, but I can be the exception. He pointed to himself and declared internally, from now on, I'll be the sheep that eats a tiger. With his plan set, and his clone system in place, Ren left the basement. He hadn't eaten a proper meal since he returned and now, he was starving. Chapter 164, Getting Pegged by an Old Man, Meat Edition. Once out of the basement, Ren initially thought of cooking something himself, but then changed his mind. It would be better to just go out and eat. This time, however, his destination wouldn't be Ichiraku Ramen. Instead, he headed toward Yakiniku-Q. There were 2 reasons. First, he had only been to the place once with his dad and never again after that. Second, he had seen a poster on the streets of Konoha that mentioned an eating competition being held there. It sounded like a good way to unwind after the grueling schedule he had followed for the past 3 months. Once the plan was decided, he didn't waste any time and marched straight to Yakiniku-Q. The place was bustling with people. It looked like there might be some kind of reward for winning the competition, though Ren didn't know the exact details. Not that it mattered, he was here to eat, and that's what he was going to do. Inside, a waiter approached him and asked, "Are you here to participate in the competition? If so, it's better if you sit this round out." Ren raised a brow. "Why so?" The waiter replied, "In this round, the boss is participating, and a few other members of the Akimichi clan are competing too. That's why not many people are signing up since the odds aren't great. But because of that, the rewards have been increased, so you can try your luck." Ren glanced ahead and saw tables being set up for the competition. At the center seat sat none other than Choza Akimichi, the head of the Akimichi clan, ready to demolish everything in front of him. Around him were a few more Akimichi members. Even with just 6 of them, the entire table already looked full. Ren's eyes lit up in excitement. "All right, let's go. I'll take your boss down in this round." The waiter blinked, stunned at Ren's words. And since Ren didn't bother to lower his voice, a number of people in the restaurant heard him. The whole place quieted until a hearty laugh echoed from the table. "Ha ha ha ha, we've got a little challenger." Choza bellowed with amusement. "Jin, let him come. It's rare to get participants like this." The waiter, Jin, quickly led Ren to the main table. Ren took a seat right next to Choza, grinning at the large man. "You're strong, big man," he said immediately. Even though Choza's level was displayed as 79, the man made Ren's senses tingle. That meant he was strong, likely far stronger than what the number alone implied. Choza laughed again and patted Ren's small frame. "And so are you, little man." He could feel the pressure Ren gave off, and it wasn't ordinary. Choza had a vague guess about who the boy was just from the blue hair. He figured he'd need to talk to his smart friend soon. Shortly after, the competition was announced, and the feast began. A little distance away, 2 men were standing among the crowd, watching the face-off between the Akimichi clan leader and the small boy. One of them had spiky black hair shaped like a pineapple, the other had light blonde hair tied in a ponytail. Inoichi spoke first, eyes fixed on Ren as he devoured meat. "I don't think I can contend with him any longer, and he gives off an even more dangerous feeling than Choza." Shikaku gave a lazy in response before adding, "Yoro gave his word that the boy would reach S rank within the year. It's not impossible you're feeling threatened. He could already be at the limit of Jonin level." Inoichi's eyes narrowed slightly as he watched Ren's small frame tear through trays of grilled meat like it was nothing. An 11-year-old S ranker. As if reading his thoughts, Shikaku continued, "Whenever the village is in danger, the Senju blood shall save it. That old saying isn't just a saying. It's the truth, Inoichi." He continued, his voice steady and low. The village can't survive without either of the founding clans. Both are needed to maintain the balance. The Uchiha give the sword to the village and the Senju give the wielder. One cannot function without the other. It was important that this boy gained strength or both the Senju and the Uchiha would have truly been finished. Inoichi glanced at him. Isn't Lady Tsunade also great? Why is the boy needed so necessarily? Shikaku yawned. Lady Tsunade is strong, yes, but not in the way people think. Anyone in her situation might not have had the courage to remain standing at all, so maybe I'm wrong, and she is strong. But she wouldn't be enough to tame the sword that is, the Uchiha. Inoichi sighed. There were parts of Shikaku's words that he didn't quite understand. But he knew better than to dismiss them. Even the Hokage wouldn't want to ignore the words of this man, that was how serious Shikaku's assessments were. Shikaku ignored his friend's sigh and continued with a more serious tone. Choza is likely aware of Ren's strength too. I'll ask him to write a recommendation letter for Ren's Jonin promotion. You do the same. I've already spoken to most of the other clan leaders, and except for the Inuzuka clan, every other clan has agreed to support it. Inoichi was mildly surprised. You mean, the Abarame aren't supporting the Hyaga anymore? That was surprising. Since the founding of the village, the Hyaga, Inuzuka, and Abarame clans had almost always worked together. To hear that the Abarame had backed off was unexpected. Shikaku replied, their alliance status is still unclear, but at least the Abarame won't be opposing Ren's promotion. That leaves only the Hyaga, Inuzuka, and Shimura and the Holy Trinity. They can be overwhelmed easily, now that the rest of the clans are on board. Inoichi sighed again. Who would have thought a Jonin promotion would involve so many clan leaders? Shikaku didn't respond immediately. He just turned to leave. But as he walked away, he called back one last reminder. Make sure you write the recommendation letter in the name of Ren Senju. It was evening by the time the competition finally ended, and as expected, Choza Akimichi emerged as the winner. But no one belittled the young participant who had dared to challenge him. After all, Ren had managed to defeat 5 Akimichi clan members and even contend with the head of the clan himself. That alone was enough to earn the respect of everyone present. It was a tale worth telling on its own. Now walking through the streets of Konoha, Ren held a coupon in his hand, the official reward for coming in second place. It granted him free dining for 10 years, usable 5 times a year for a maximum of 4 people per use. He wasn't short on money by any means, but free stuff, especially free food, it was always welcome. Smiling to himself, he carefully tucked the coupon into the important section of his storage belt, where he kept a few important items. A photo with his father from his first day at the academy. The Team 1 formation photo. A few compact, tightly sealed scrolls, and that was it. Everything else, even more important, was kept in the safest place possible, his mind. Once he returned home, Ren made one more clone, this time with 99% of his chakra, since his reserves had fully recovered. He left it to train while he quietly headed to his room. As he lay down, a light sigh escaped him. This would be his first proper sleep in his own bed after such a long, exhausting stretch of training and combat. He sank into the mattress, pulled the blanket over himself, and within moments, sleep claimed him. The next day arrived earlier than Ren would have liked. It felt like he had just pulled the blanket over himself when, somehow, morning had already come. Still, he didn't complain. He got up without delay, created a clone with 99% of his chakra, and headed out to train. By the time he reached the village gate, the morning was still fresh. The guards on duty greeted him casually, one of them was even accepting money from another one, looking a little too excited. Ren was confused by the scene but didn't think too much about it, as Rendo was the weird one. He had been training early mornings at the gate for years now and had gotten to know almost all the gate guards, at least the ones on the morning shifts. The rotations happened yearly and shift changed twice a day, 2 guards for the morning, 2 for the night. Only a few antisocial ones remained unfamiliar to him, but that never bothered him. He stretched his body out and activated his training seal, setting it to nearly 1,000 kilograms of weighted pressure, and then began his daily run, scaling the village walls. Along the way, he ran into Might Guy, who greeted him with the usual bright grin and a firm thumbs up. Ren returned it with the same wide grin and thumbs up, which was their established routine and the one they hadn't shared in nearly 3 months. His morning run lasted around 3 hours, as always. When it was over, he returned home for a bath and food, created another full chakra clone, and went out again for more physical training. During this second round, he realized something interesting. When his chakra was nearly depleted, the physical strain on his body increased significantly, and that was a good thing. It made him decide that from now on, he would always deplete his chakra before beginning physical training. It wasn't considered safe with near zero chakra and an already fatigued body. Most shinobi would be vulnerable to ambush, but Ren didn't see a problem. He didn't truly get tired, his clones could instantly replenish his chakra, and his perfected hyperfocus made sneak attacks nearly impossible. With all that combined, it was a viable and highly effective training method for him. After another 3 hours, he returned home for food again. He was just about to create another clone when an Umbu agent appeared at his house. Ren Takahashi, you are being summoned by the Hokage. The Umbu didn't waste a second and flickered away instantly. As Ren heard this, he paused briefly to think, looks like they're ready for my Jonin promotion. Good. At least they're not dragging it out. If some pointless delay happened, I'd be bothered, and nobody would like that. He shrugged and continued toward the Hokage building. On the way, he passed the same Umbu who had summoned him. Ren clicked his tongue. Man, you need to train more. Even with a head start and a body flicker, I already passed you. If I were the enemy, you'd be dead. The Umbu was left blinking behind him as Ren picked up speed, vanishing ahead. When he arrived at the Hokage building, Ren's eyes casually scanned the ceiling patterns around it. He noticed more of them than before, more complex, denser layers, and for a moment, his fingers twitched at the thought of tearing them down. Then, without turning, he said aloud, I'm really not planning on destroying the seals, sensei. Believe me. Behind him stood Utakata, mouth slightly open, as if he'd been just about to say the same thing. Utakata stared at him, then said in his usual flat tone, like I'd even believe that claim. Ren grinned and turned. That's pure slander, sensei. If someone heard you, they'd think I'm a war criminal. Utakata raised an eyebrow. You were planning to destroy the seals on the Hokage Tower. I think that qualifies as a war crime. Ren kept up the denial, completely unfazed. Sensei, that's character defamation. I can sue you for this. Commander, you heard that, right? Be my witness. He looked over his shoulder and spoke to one of the shadows surrounding the building. Utakata narrowed his eyes and tried to locate Yoro, but couldn't pinpoint him. A voice came from the shadows, stop wasting time. The council has already gathered and don't cause too much chaos. Ren walked into the building, casually calling back, Boss man, you know I love messing with people who are too stiff, and if the whole damn council's gathered, then chaos is bound to happen. Utakata sighed. He was used to this by now. Still, a small smile pulled at the corner of his lips as he watched Ren's small figure walk ahead. He could feel it. Ren had already surpassed him in strength. That realization, far from wounding his pride, filled him with quiet pride. Grow up to be the strongest, he thought, just like you dream of. Chapter 165. Yes, I sat on the table. What are you going to do, Danzo? As they continued moving toward the Hokage's office, Ren kept talking. It was mostly one-sided chatter, with Utakata giving short, dry responses that didn't exactly count as a conversation, but that didn't bother Ren at all. He was used to it by now, so he carried on without pause. When they arrived, they were informed that the meeting was being held in the council chamber instead. They redirected accordingly. On the way, Ren glanced sideways and asked, Sensei, do you know why they're making such a big deal out of this? He had a hunch it was Yoru's doing, but still asked just in case. Utakata gave a thoughtful hum. I wonder why. Have you done something weird again? Ren briefly thought over recent events as they reached the meeting hall. Before he could try anything strange after walking in ahead of Utakata, his teacher knocked on the door first. Come in, Hiruzen's voice called from inside. Utakata opened the door and led Ren in. What came into view looked less like a meeting and more like a battlefield. A large, rectangular table stretched across the hall, surrounded by a full assembly, all the clan heads, the Hokage's advisors, some high-ranking officials Ren didn't recognize, and of course, at the head of the table, sat Hiruzen Sarutobi. The old man wore his usual gentle smile and greeted him with a light chuckle. Ho ho, I hope you are in good health, Ren. Ren raised a peace sign. Same to you, Gramps. You need good health more than I do, though. A few muffled chuckles escaped from the room, though the atmosphere remained mostly serious. Hiruzen's lips twitched at the response. Utakata quickly took Ren by the collar and guided him to the opposite end of the table, directly across from Hiruzen so they could see eye to eye. He himself took a seat among the group of random officials. Then came another problem. The table was enormous. From where Ren stood, only his head was visible, which made for a mildly comical sight, though not to him. His height, or the lack of it, was the one thing that actually bothered him. What if I don't grow past 5 feet 5 inches? What if I just stay short forever? These were recurring thoughts. Hiruzen, too, noticed the issue. He had assumed Ren would have grown more by now, at least enough to see over the table comfortably, but with only his head visible, and it looked ridiculous. Before the Hokage could suggest a chair or a platform, Ren jumped up and sat on the table itself, legs crossed. Then he casually scanned the room to see if anyone dared laugh. Before the meeting could proceed, a cold voice cut through the silence. Danzo, seated on Hiruzen's right, spoke up. What is this tomfoolery? This is the council hall where important decisions are made. And you expect to be promoted to Jonin while making jokes and treating this as entertainment. Ren looked at Danzo for a moment, assessing. When he first arrived in this world, he had been extremely cautious around the man, like every transmigrator is, by default, but over time, that caution had faded. Danzo's only real threat was to his loved ones, but once Ren realized how strong his father truly was, even that worry had mostly evaporated. Now, he didn't fear Danzo. If anything, he welcomed him. The root shinobi made for excellent live target practice. He tilted his head, staring directly at the old war hawk. I don't understand, Ren said flatly. Would you rather have spoken to what looked like a floating head, or a full person sitting at your level? Danzo snorted. You think you're someone who can sit at my level? Ren shook his head. No, but that's your job, isn't it? As one of the Hokage's advisors, you're supposed to ensure these meetings run smoothly, but that didn't happen, and now look at this. I'm literally above your level. To prove his point, he raised a hand and generated a thin chakra string, which floated just above Danzo's head. Then he traced it visually and added, see, I'm above you? He removed his sunglasses, his bright blue eyes locking directly onto Danzo, or more precisely, onto the bandages covering the man's right eye. Then, with no concern for the rising tension, Ren continued, you know, there are a lot of good medics in the village. You should really get your eye checked out. And that arm too. It's not a good look if one of the village's elders seems weak, right? He leaned forward, voice soft but audible, I dabble in medical ninjutsu. I could take a look. Or maybe Yudakata-sensei can. Then he snapped his fingers lightly. Oh, right. I met Lady Tsunade not long ago. Amazing healer, that one. I was almost dead, and she pulled me back. She could definitely heal you. He dropped his voice to a whisper. Or maybe you don't want to be healed. Got any secrets? Tell me. I'm great at keeping secrets. A wave of killing intent swept from Danzo's direction, heavy and cold. Before it could escalate further, Hiruzen coughed into his hand. That's enough, young Ren. Elder Danzo is an elder of the village and your senior. He has served it loyally for many years. He deserves your respect. The old man's voice was calm, but his tone was serious. Ren stood up, still on the table, and gave an overly dramatic bow, bending low as he looked down at Danzo from his high perch. His voice was apologetic, but his eyes carried just the right amount of mockery. Oh my, I'm so sorry if my words hurt you, Elder Danzo. I just wanted to show that I'm capable of speaking clearly and confidently. I was also able to rile up an experienced elder like Elder Danzo with words alone. I was taught that's a valuable skill for a jonin, after all. Danzo said nothing, but the pressure of his killing intent didn't fade. Not that it mattered, Ren remained completely unaffected. At that moment, Shikaku Nara stood up with a tired yawn and scratched the back of his head. I think that's enough for the opening act. Let's begin the actual discussion regarding the jonin promotion of Chunin Ren. As the topic was formally brought up, Ren raised a hand and interjected first. So, I got a question. He glanced at Hiruzen as he spoke, and the old man gave him a patient nod, signaling him to continue. I know I'm great, Ren began, tone casual, but I don't really understand the fuss about so many of you showing up. Is it really that big of a deal to be promoted to jonin at 11? Wasn't Kakashi-kun promoted around the same age? As he said that, his eyes shifted to one of the ceiling corners where Kakashi was concealed. The moment Ren's gaze landed on him, Kakashi flinched slightly, like a reflexive memory had just kicked him in the gut. Hiruzen chuckled lightly, then corrected him. First off, he's Kakashi-senpai to you, and second, how do you know there wasn't just as much fuss back then? Ren shrugged. Because the village wasn't in a position to throw a big fuss at the time. The Third Shinobi War was at its peak. No way the village could afford to gather this many high-ranking, army captain-level shinobi in one room. Hiruzen gave a pleased smile. Then don't you have your answer? It's peacetime now, and during peace, promoting an 11-year-old to jonin, an age where most don't even pass the academy, is a notable event. It's worth making a fuss. With that, he gave a small nod to Shikaku, who rubbed his eyes and began his formal address. Chunin Ren participated in the most recent Chunin exams held in Konoha and not only passed, but broke multiple records and secured first place overall. Shikaku yawned mid-sentence but carried on lazily. Following the exam, he was inducted into the Umbu and has been on active duty ever since. During his time as a shinobi, Ren has completed 38 B rank missions, 73 A rank missions, and 4 S rank missions. A few quiet murmurs broke out across the table at the numbers. It wasn't uncommon for shinobi to reach those counts during wartime. But now, in peacetime, each mission was carefully evaluated. No handouts, no inflated records. An S rank in peace was earned, and 4 of them? That made heads turn. Only a handful of those present knew that 2 of those S rank missions were related to Ren's confrontation with Obito Uchiha. If the rest of the council had known that, the murmurs would have turned into outright disbelief. Hayashi Hayaga raised a hand and calmly interjected, as far as I recall, the number of missions alone isn't sufficient for a jonin promotion. Shikaku gave a tired sigh, rubbing the back of his neck. Yeah, don't be so impatient. I didn't sleep well last night, so I might be slow. If that's too much trouble, I'm happy to dump my work on you. Ren snickered at that. Hayashi's face turned cold, but he didn't reply. Unbothered, Shikaku continued, the second factor is leadership ability. During his time as a shinobi, aside from serving as deputy for his genin team, Ren has led 15 different squads on various missions. Some unimpressed faces around the table didn't react much, so Shikaku added, I know the number may seem low, but every squad he led was a jonin-level unit tasked with A-rank missions. And this, he held up a folder, is their evaluation. He passed the reports forward. Each person at the table received a copy. Meanwhile, Ren casually scooted towards Fugaku, who was seated nearby, hoping to glance at his copy. But the Uchiha patriarch immediately pulled the paper away, narrowing his eyes. Ren reached out, tried to tug the report from his grasp. Fugaku didn't let go. Soon, the two were silently locked in a miniature tug-of-war, each subtly reinforcing the paper with chakra. Yudakata, trying to stay focused on reading his own report, looked up and froze. The spectacle before him nearly made him drop his page. Ren and Fugaku were glaring at each other, locked in an absurd chakra-fueled battle over a single sheet of paper like schoolchildren fighting over a lunchbox. Eventually, both of them paused, silently nodded at each other in apparent truce, and looked down to read together. Then, without warning, Ren snatched the paper and scooted back to his original position, grinning smugly. Fugaku's three-tomo Sharinon spun into view as he half rose from his chair, ready to leap onto the table, only to immediately sit back down when Hiruzen lowered his own report and glanced his way. Ren stuck out his tongue. Fugaku looked ready to burn the council chamber down with sheer frustration. Utakata quickly reached out and pulled Ren closer to himself, creating a safe buffer zone between the two and defusing the momentary chaos. Peace was momentarily restored. Shikaku, who had also witnessed the little tug-of-war earlier, cleared his throat and spoke once the attention returned to him. As you've read, he began, all the Jonin who served under Chunin Ren have consistently praised his leadership and mission performance. Many reports emphasize his information-gathering skills. In fact, some even said his intel made difficult missions feel like mere formalities. There isn't a single complaint or disciplinary issue recorded. Before the momentum could build further, Danzo interjected, voice cold and steady. If his information gathering is so exceptional, he said, then he should share his methods with the village. Everyone would benefit from such an asset. It was clear he was trying to put Ren on the defensive. The comment itself wasn't about intel, it was a veiled jab, and only a few at the table knew exactly what Danzo was really referring to. Ren, however, didn't even glance his way. He casually continued reading his evaluation sheet before responding in a casual tone. You're overpraising me, Elder Danzo. My skills aren't that great. I mean, he finally looked up, locking eyes with the old warhawk. I was attacked by a dozen black-cloaked, masked men, and I still haven't found out who sent them. He smiled lightly, but his voice had gone sharp with undertone. Once I do find them, I'd really like to ask why they sent such weaklings to die. It's almost like whoever gave the order didn't care whether their subordinates lived or died, wouldn't you agree, Elder Danzo? The atmosphere in the room changed immediately. Several of the older clan heads tensed. Danzo met Ren's stare and gave a slow, measured nod. If you couldn't even trace your own would-be assassins, he said, voice dry, then your so-called information-gathering skills shouldn't be considered reliable. And without those skills, what kind of Jonin could you possibly be? Ren shook his head slightly, almost like he pitied him. Oh, it's not like I don't have any leads. I killed them all, remember. He said this with a light smile and too calmly for the words he was saying. I already sent their bodies to the commander. He told me there was a really advanced seal on them, probably crafted by a level 6 Funjutsu master, which is rare everywhere in the whole world. As he spoke, Ren reached into his pocket, pulled out a pencil, and began sketching something on the piece of paper. I'm still studying it, trying to break it down. Once I do, it should be pretty easy to trace whoever ordered my assassination. But hey, Elder Danzo, if you want to help, I'd be really grateful. He held up the sketch so everyone could see it, an exact replica of Root's seal. Here, look at this. This part blocks memory reading jutsu. This section here reflects the seal to anyone who tries to tamper with the mind. He pointed to a section with casual precision, and this little guy right here? This one detonates instantly if the seal bearer speaks about anything they aren't supposed to. Boom. No questions asked. He leaned back and smiled. A really well-made seal. Truly elite craftsmanship. The room had fallen dead silent. Many of the clan heads and elders were now quietly staring at Danzo. Nobody said his name aloud, but they didn't need to. Everyone knew who Ren was pointing at. The tension was thick enough to cut with a kunao, but, as expected, Hiruzen intervened before it went any further. His voice was even, but held just enough weight to remind the room of where they were. You should have brought this matter to me sooner, young Ren, the Hokage said. I'll have personnel look into it immediately, and I'll personally examine the seal myself. He didn't look at Danzo. No one did anymore. Now then, Hiruzen continued, tone shifting slightly, let's move on to the next requirement, shall we? Chapter 166, The Child Who Sat on the Table and Took Over the Room. Shikako was clearly enjoying the back and forth between Ren and Danzo. His eyes kept bouncing between the two, like he was watching a live drama unfold. So much so that he didn't hear Hiruzen telling to continue until the Hokage began clearing his throat repeatedly. Finally, Shikaku turned, looking slightly annoyed, as if he was the one being interrupted. But since he was still technically a subordinate, all he could do was sigh in exaggerated resignation and get to his feet. All right, he began, tone reluctant, we'll move on to the third and most important criterion for Jonin promotion, strength. He paused dramatically before continuing. I've cleared out training ground 44 for today. Let's all head there. Koharu, who had remained quiet the entire time, finally spoke up. Is it really necessary for everyone to go? Wouldn't it be fine if only a few checked it out? Shikaku, as if anticipating the question, replied smoothly, Elder Koharu, as Lord Hokage himself said, we don't often see 11-year-old Jonin candidates, especially during peacetime. So it's necessary to verify every step properly and transparently. As he heard this, Hiruzen quietly glanced at a few key individuals, Shikako, Fugaku, who was still glaring at Ren, Utakata, who had his hand on Ren's shoulder to keep him from doing something reckless, and Yoro, hidden in the shadows but definitely listening. A quiet thought passed through the Hokage's mind, so it's already come to this. He stood, posture straight. Let's go, he said. Shikaku is right. You all should see this with your own eyes. With that, he flickered away, and the rest followed. At the edge of the forest of death, Hiruzen was the first to arrive. He was speaking with Old Man Yoshido when Ren caught up and greeted the older man cheerfully. Hey, Old Man Yoshido. How's your back? Maybe I should burn all your weeds today. He pointed at the suspiciously well-maintained plants along the boundary, so pristine they hardly deserve to be called weeds anymore. Honestly, if I ever find out you've been nurturing these things just to torment Genin, I'll give you a great gift. Yoshido scoffed, clutching his lower back dramatically. Who needs a gift from a brat like you? Humph. I still remember the first time you came here, trying to act cool, spinning around like a top, only to almost slip in the mud and roll like a potato. Imagine if the younger generation finds out when you get famous. Ren froze for a second, speechless. Hiruzen stood nearby, clearly enjoying the exchange. Thankfully, others began arriving soon, and the growing crowd forced the conversation to end. As Ren turned to follow the others, Hiruzen gave Yoshido a quiet warning. If you ever tell that story again, I'll burn your weeds myself. Yoshido only grinned, way too widely for Ren's comfort, so he quickly glared at him and jogged to join the others, standing right next to Fugaku, who looked visibly annoyed by the proximity. Shikaku spoke again, taking the lead as the evaluators formed a loose semicircle. The most important aspect of Jonin promotion, he began, is of course, strength. A base requirement is that the candidate must be proficient in at least 2 elemental releases. He turned toward Ren. Shinin Ren, please demonstrate your abilities to the fullest. Show us everything you've got. Ren gave a sideways glance to Shikaku and immediately understood what the man wanted. Heh, you want me to impress people? I'm great at that. He grinned. Alright. But, Gramps, you'll have to be ready to save them. If I go all out, I'm not sure anyone here can handle it. His tone was playful, but several of the clan leaders frowned, especially the Inuzuka head, Hayashi, and of course, Fugaku. Hiruzen's expression, however, turned serious. He remembered Ren's Raisin Shuriken. If Ren really did go all out, then he might be the only one fast enough to save everyone else. Ren leapt backward, creating a wide distance between himself and the observers. As he stretched his arms, he thought with a grin. Alright. It's been a fun day, but the last blow should leave a mark. Let's make sure Danzo dreams about this tonight. He inhaled deeply and began forming hand signs. Fast. Extremely fast. This was a jutsu Tsunade had given him along with a few others. This was one he hadn't tried yet even with the clones, so he didn't have it memorized and still needed all the signs, but he executed them with clinical speed. Then, he formed the REM seal and exhaled. Water release, great exploding water colliding wave. A titanic surge of water burst from his mouth. To call it massive would be an understatement. He just burned nearly 40% of his chakra to summon what looked like an ocean. The entire landscape warped with the sudden flood. But Ren wasn't done. Raising both hands to the sky, lightning began to crackle in his palms. Lightning release, thunder current. A blinding surge of electricity lanced across the massive body of water, crackling, jumping, charging every molecule of the artificial ocean with violent energy. To the audience, it looked like death was racing toward them. No one moved, because their eyes weren't even on the jutsu anymore. They were on what stood behind Ren. Hiruzen's breath caught. His eyes widened as he stared not at the boy but at the illusion forming behind him. A spectral figure, tall, robed, white-haired, staring at him with piercing red eyes full of judgment and anger. Tobirama Senju. Of course, it was a genjutsu. Hiruzen knew that instantly. But that didn't stop the emotional reaction. The guilt towards his predecessor and teacher was too great for him, so he froze for a while. Ren had targeted his audience precisely and it had worked. Fortunately, Yoro wasn't paralyzed. He moved immediately, forming hand seals in a flash. 3 shadow clones slammed their palms to the ground in perfect sync. Boom, boom, boom. Massive, triple walls of earth erupted, stretching wide and high, just in time to absorb the entire blast of Ren's technique. Water crashed violently against it, lightning dancing across the top, but the wall held. And more importantly, so did the stunned audience behind it. Most of them had the same thought. If Yoro hadn't moved, we'd be dead. And in that moment, they realized, this boy, this 11-year-old, was already someone they had to be saved from. However, just as some of the spectators began to relax, a deep cracking sound echoed through the air. Boom, crack crack. The massive triple-layered earth wall that Yoro had erected shattered in an instant. But it wasn't the flood or the lightning that broke through, it was Ren. His fist was still extended from the punch, steam rising from his knuckles as he stepped through the broken wall and spoke casually, almost like he was scolding someone. Come on, boss man. You didn't have to do that. I'm sure the clan leaders were strong enough to handle it. He deliberately glanced toward the Inuzuka and Hyuga clan leaders, the two who were the most visibly dissatisfied figures in the crowd earlier. Hayashi's expression had turned unreadable, but his brow was furrowed as though he was deep in thought, connecting dots he hadn't before. Meanwhile, the Inuzuka clan head was grinning wildly, eyes gleaming as if sizing Ren up for something far beyond a political evaluation. Ren had expected dissatisfaction. What he got instead was something else entirely. Yoro, who had taken no part in the conversation, didn't respond. He simply flickered away, disappearing in the blink of an eye. Now that the dust had settled, literally and figuratively, many of the observers turned their attention fully back to Ren. Not just for the raw power he had displayed, which was considerable, but for what had appeared behind him. The phantom. The unmistakable visage of Tobirama Senju, second Hokage, the man who helped mold the village, a legend, and, more importantly, Ren's grandfather. They had all known since they were all close to the village's political heart, but the official stance had always been that Ren himself didn't know. that his lineage was being kept secret, even from him. So then why would Tobirama's image appear behind him in a genjutsu? Was it symbolic? A coincidence? Or something more deliberate? The clan heads exchanged glances. Wordless, measured looks passed across the group like a silent wave of questions. Eyes turned toward the Hokage for clarity. But Hiruzen Sarutobi wasn't looking at them. He had his eyes closed, head bowed faintly. It took a while before Hiruzen finally opened his eyes. He looked at Ren for a moment, then slowly turned his gaze toward the others. His voice was soft as he spoke. Let's go. We have a meeting to conclude. With that, he flickered away. The others followed shortly after, though not before throwing one final glance at Ren, who had placed a seal over the water still present on the training field. The seal activated and absorbed the entire body of water in an instant, sealing it away before vanishing with a small puff. Ren flickered after them. Soon, everyone was once again gathered in the council meeting hall. The room was quiet, too quiet. Sensing the tension, Shikaku took the lead. I don't believe there should be any objections, but let's go through the proper process. He continued in his usual lazy tone. To all those supporting Shinin Ren's promotion to the Jonin rank, please submit your recommendation letter. One by one, letters were handed over. Except for Tsum Inuzuka, Hayashi Hayaga, and the village elders, every single clan head and senior official submitted their letter to the Hokage. Even Fugaku Uchiha handed his in, though he looked visibly irritated by Ren's teasing grin from across the table. At one point, he even looked like he was debating whether to set the paper on fire. Hiruzen glanced over the stack of letters in front of him. One detail immediately caught his eye. Every single letter was signed not for Ren Takahashi, but for the name Ren Senju. He let out a faint exhale and glanced at Shikaku. It was all part of his plan. The Hokage couldn't prove it, but he understood enough. His own Anbu commander, the Jonin commander, and many of the most influential clan leaders had begun to move behind this narrative. He looked toward Danzo out of the corner of his eye. I'm left with no other choice, my old friend. Sighing internally, Hiruzen straightened in his seat. His eyes sharpened with authority as he looked across the room and spoke clearly. It appears there is no need to seek negative votes. Therefore, I hereby declare, effective immediately, Shinin Ren Takahashi has been promoted to the rank of Jonin. His official duties and position shall be determined at a later date. Shikaku frowned slightly at the phrasing, but his expression relaxed again. He had already anticipated what was coming next. As expected, Hiruzen continued. Also, from this moment forward, the Senju clan's seat on the council shall be reinstated. With the emergence of a confirmed heir, and the hope for the clan's growth renewed, the Senju's vote will once again hold weight in village affairs. He paused for a breath before continuing. The official head of the clan shall remain Tsunade Senju. However, as she is currently absent from the village, her responsibilities and vote shall be passed to the heir, Ren Senju. In the event that both are unavailable. Before he could finish, Yoro flickered into the room and silently stood behind Ren. Hiruzen took the cue and continued. Then the Senju clan shall be represented by Anbu Commander Yoro. Hayashi was the first to interject. Lord Hokage, just 2 individuals are not enough to formally revive a clan. While I acknowledge the heir status, I propose that we wait at least 4 years before reinstating the Senju's voting rights. He is, after all, still only 11. Before Hiruzen could reply, Ren stepped forward, his previous playfulness completely gone. If you want clan members, I could shout from here and half the village would show up, and can you guess how many of your own clan would be among them? Hayaga clan leader. His tone was sharp, every word deliberate. The Senju have always been one with the village. The only reason our vote was abstained was because there was no one to speak for us. Now that I'm here, it makes no sense to continue that exclusion. Isn't that right, Uchiha clan leader? Fugaku nodded slightly, then spoke without hesitation. I agree with the Senju heir. As one of the founding clans, the Senju should never have been barred from voting on matters that affect the village. This practice should never have been allowed to continue. He gave Hayashi a pointed look as he added, I say we end this farce. The Senju have every right to reclaim their seat on the council. Chapter 167, Hashirama was dumb, Hayashi is mad, Ren is petty. A Konoha story. Many who didn't know the full story were genuinely shocked at Fugaku's blatant support of Ren. But most of the room was smart enough to understand that this was really a feud between the noble clans, Senju, Uchiha, and Hayaga, and that it wouldn't touch them directly. So they stayed quiet, letting the tension simmer. Hayashi didn't miss a beat as he snapped back at Fugaku. If you've conveniently forgotten, let me remind you, it was the previous Uchiha clan leader who pushed for the Senju vote to be put on hold in the first place, not anyone else. The council only accepted it after your clan rallied behind it and now you're the one pushing for that vote to be reinstated? The Uchiha really are playing a clever game. His eyes narrowed as he pressed further, voice cold. How can the village be certain the Uchiha aren't controlling the Senju heir? That's your specialty, isn't it? I don't think I need to remind anyone here what your genjutsu can do. Or do we all conveniently forget the night a few years ago? Fugaku's Sharinon spun lazily, but his voice was ice. It seems the Hayaga clan leader has let the birth of his second daughter muddle his mind if he's dredging up an unproven rumor in front of this entire council. Hayashi looked ready to erupt, but Ren cut in smoothly. Now, calm down. This is the council hall, try to act your age, not my age, alright. A few muffled snickers broke the tension, and both Fugaku and Hayashi's faces went red, whether from anger or embarrassment was anyone's guess. Ren leaned back, still smiling. And if anyone's worried about me being controlled by a genjutsu, don't be. I'm not some big dumb fox you can puppeteer with a pretty illusion. But hey, if you don't believe me, we can test it. Elder Danzo, why don't you do the honors? He shot Danzo a grin. The old warhawk didn't so much as twitch, but Hayashi pounced immediately. The Senju heir may have some capabilities, but claiming complete immunity to genjutsu is pure delusion. And that delusion only proves my point. He's too young and naive to wield the Senju vote responsibly. A few nods of agreement rippled through the room. After all, no one here had ever heard of someone being truly immune to genjutsu. Even the Byakugan couldn't claim that. Ren shot Hayashi a pitying look. You must have never had a Senju friend growing up, huh? Then again, with your personality, you probably didn't have many friends at all. Before Hayashi could snap back, Ren smoothly turned to Hiruzen. Anyway, Gramps can back me up on this, can't you? Hiruzen met Ren's gaze. For a moment, he seemed to weigh something. Then he nodded. Both the first and the second Hokage and Tsunade as well were functionally impervious to genjutsu. I can't say much about Hashirama-sama, but by the end of his life, Tobirama-sensei was effectively immune to every genjutsu we knew of. The room fell silent at that. Senju blood granted that? Whispers stirred. Even some veteran clan heads looked rattled by the implication. But Hayashi didn't back down. He leaned forward slightly, pressing the point. While the three individuals you mentioned may have had such resistance, isn't it possible, likely even that they developed it over years as their strength grew? Even you, Lord Hokage, how many genjutsu are there now that could truly affect you? Hiruzen gave a small nod. He didn't speak, but the meaning was clear. It could indeed be an acquired trait. Ren shrugged at the comment. Alright, then let's talk strength. If you say the resistance comes with strength, then don't you think it's reasonable to believe I've already reached that level? Hayashi's lips curved into an uncharacteristic smile, one that made Ren's stomach drop a little as he realized what happened. The Hyuga clan head turned back to the room. And there it is. The Senju heir doesn't even know whether his own abilities are inherent or acquired. He can't distinguish his bloodline from his training. How can someone so unaware be trusted to cast the Senju vote responsibly? Hayashi's tone was calm and measured, but each word struck with pinpoint precision. Once again, I submit that the Senju vote must remain on hold until the heir has matured, 4 years at minimum. For a moment, the chamber fell into silence again, but this time the murmur of agreement was louder and closer. Ren could see it clearly, some heads were nodding, even among the neutral clan leaders. Before Hayashi could press further, Ren's voice cut clean through the tension. Well, I'll give you that round, but doesn't that mean you accept that I might not be affected by genjutsu because of my strength? He leaned forward, eyes glinting. And it seems the Hyuga leader thinks I alone need to be smart enough to make decisions for the Senju clan. But this isn't the Hyuga clan. He looked straight at Hayashi's proudly exposed forehead, his tone turning sharper. Unlike the Hyuga, the Senju always built their strength around community. That means there are always many voices, not one tyrant. I read some files big sister Tsunade gave me about the Senju's glory days. Did you know it's said that granduncle Hashirama was kind of dumb? He always needed grandfather Tobirama to help him reach decisions even as Hokage and clan head before that. The silence that followed was heavy, but Ren pressed on. The Senju didn't build this village by silencing people. They built it by listening to everyone, which is why all of you are even here today, representing your clans, growing together. So don't stand there and pretend we'd make a mistake that would hurt this village. That's never been who we are. His words landed as he made some continuous strikes. First, he made a mistake, which he accepted. Then he reiterated his strength, which he had just shown to them. Third, he accentuated Senju beliefs, which everyone knew. Then he described his relation with some big names, little cousin of Tsunade Senju, grandnephew of Hashirama Senju, and grandson of Tobirama Senju. However, that wasn't enough, as he even focused on the fact that Senju indeed accepted everyone's words, which is why the village even formed. All these factors collectively validated Ren's argument for obtaining the Senju vote. Hiruzen closed his eyes for a moment, thoughts turning inward. Tsunanos? Meanwhile, Danzo's lone visible eye narrowed, suspicion coiling behind it. All Senju records should be in the village's vaults. Does Tsunade still has files, or is this brat bluffing? If there are indeed some, then what else is hidden? If Ren knew Danzo's thoughts, he would have definitely laughed at the man's paranoia. There were, of course, no documents or files, but the others didn't know that, and since ninjas are inherently paranoid, they would keep thinking about it, even more so if they were guilty of something. Fugaku crossed his arms and felt a flicker of reluctant approval. We can work together, it seems. But how I wish I could strangle him sometimes. Hayashi drew in a breath, ready to argue, but Hiruzen's voice cut through the room before his. Enough. If we keep arguing, no decision will be made. We'll settle this properly by a show of hands. One by one, hands began to rise. Shikaku raised his first, and as if on cue, Inoichi and Chosa followed. Fugaku's hand lifted next, despite Ren's mocking grin, then Yudakata's, then 3 of the 5 civilian counselors aligned with him. Shibuya Barame glanced at Ren for a moment before raising his hand as well. From the minor clans, nearly 70% voted in favor. The few who didn't were the ones who stood to lose if the Senju regained their voice. Hiruzen let the room settle before he, too, raised his hand, sealing the outcome. Hayashi's face turned an ugly shade as he saw the final tally, but he could do nothing when Hiruzen stood. his voice steady as he made the decision. The council has spoken. The Senju vote is hereby reinstated. In addition, all Senju businesses that have been managed by the village will return to clan's hands. The Senju ancestral home will also be open to the clan leader, heir, and representative, and anyone they deem worthy of welcoming. Hiruzen's eyes drifted across the room to Yoro, to Shikako, and Danzo. Before he finished, this meeting is concluded. The official duties of Jonin Ren shall be determined and announced at a later date. Dismissed. He turned and left with Danzo and the other elders close behind, their robes spreading across the stone floor. The chamber slowly emptied, but Fugaku, Hayashi, Utakata, and Yoro remained while Ren still sat cross-legged on the table, as if the whole affair were a picnic. Ren tilted his head, looked at Hayashi, then deliberately raised his voice. Hey, boss man, I fought so hard for this vote, but what's it even good for? Hayashi's eye twitched. For a second, it looked like he'd fly at Ren then and there, but he forced himself calm, his lips formed a thin line, and turned to leave. He'd nearly reached the door when Ren's voice rang out again, sweetly mocking as he spoke to Yoro. Hey, let's give up the vote again sometime. Yeah, I didn't realize fighting with words was this fun. We should do it again. The door handle groaned under Hayashi's grip, but he still managed to hold his temper barely and slammed the door so hard the echo rattled the ceiling. Ren gave a soft sigh, swinging his legs as he looked at Fugaku. He's so boring, he pouted. I thought he'd be more fun to mess with, but he's not even as good as Itaka's dad. Fugaku's eye twitched. I am Itaka's dad. Ren just grinned. Hey, leader of the Angry Birds, how's Itaki? It's been ages since I saw him. Fugaku's Sherry-non flickered alive, then immediately died down. He realized if he lost his temper now, Ren would be proven right. He settled for a dangerous glare instead. Before it could escalate, Yoro's voice cut through like cold steel. Stop wasting time. Meet me in the office in a minute. Ren let out an exaggerated sigh as he stood on the table, walking over to Utakata's side. The older shinobi lifted him by the waist and set him down on the floor without a second thought, only for Ren to giggle and lean up and speak. Hehe. That was fun. Let's do it again sometime, sensei. Bye. He skipped out the door but not before poking his head back in, grinning wide at Fugaku. Oh, hey, Mr. Always Frowning. You shouldn't frown so much. I heard people who frown too much end up being hated by their sons. Before Fugaku could even sputter a retort, Ren was gone in a flicker. Fugaku just stood there for a moment, jaw tight, then slowly, almost awkwardly, he raised his hand to his forehead and tried to ease the frown from his brow. A moment later, his eyes hardened. He vanished without another word. Utakata, left alone in the room, just shook his head then flickered away too, already preparing to brief Juaki on everything that had just happened. Chapter 168, From Genocide Politics to Domestic Violence in Seconds. Once Ren left the meeting hall, he went straight to Yora's office as he'd been called before. At the Umbu command, he didn't stop as he headed straight to Yora's door and knocked. Knock knock knock. Commander. Come in. Knock knock knock. Commander. Silence. Knock no crack. A kunao embedded itself exactly where Ren was about to knock next. He paused, then pushed the door open and stepped in, greeting cheerfully. Hey boss man? That was rude, you know. What if someone not as good as me was on the other side? Wouldn't that unfortunate soul just die? Yora's response was dry as ever. I don't recall anyone ever having as much guts as you, so rest assured, you would be the only one to die by my hand for such reasons. Ren plopped into a chair and waved him off casually. Boss, you're my representative. And as far as I recall, a representative is technically a subordinate of the person they represent. So, he leaned forward with a mischievous grin. Should you really talk to your boss like dash? But the words caught in his throat as he suddenly felt death. That was the only word for it. He laughed it off immediately, sitting back. Haha, just kidding. You can talk to me however you want. After all, I'm your subordinate, not the other way around. Haha. A nervous laugh trailed off as Yoro eyed him, but instead of pushing further, Yoro sounded almost surprised. Looks like your perfected hyperfocus is helping you more than I imagined. Good. His tone turned serious in an instant. Now, let's talk about the meeting. Ren nodded, tilting his head. I asked before as a joke, but I really want to know, what good is having a vote in the council? I mean, it's not like voting would make any difference if they put forward a motion to kill Danzo, would it? Yoro started explaining without missing a beat. If Danzo's death really were put to a vote, it would pass without a second of hesitation from anyone. But that isn't how it works. He continued, there are 3 types of votes in the council meetings, the Hokage's vote, the special vote, and the general vote. The normal clan leaders each have 1 general vote. The civilian council comprises 6 people. If more than 3 of them vote for something, that makes up another general vote. Aside from that, the 2 elders each hold 1 general vote as well. These are used for standard decisions, things like how many students should be admitted to the academy this year, how many can pass for advanced studies, stuff like this. That's all decided by general votes. He paused to make sure Ren was following, then went on. Above that is the special vote, held by the Uchiha clan, Hyuga clan, and Danzo. Now that the Senju vote has been reinstated, the Senju clan also has a special vote. These are used for more significant matters, like shinin promotions and other decisions at that level. The holders of the special votes decide the ultimate outcome if something passes through general votes. Ren spoke thoughtfully. So, to suppress the Uchiha, the Hyuga, and Danzo have always formed a majority, tilting everything in their favor. But now that the Senju have their vote back, it'll always be 2 against 2, so the matter gets pushed to the Hokage. Yoru nodded. Exactly. When a special matter is tied, the Hokage's vote decides the result. The only way the Hokage's vote doesn't work is if the entire council, minus the elders, is against him, which can't happen. So any matter the Hokage votes for is generally the final result. That's why the Hyuga leader had no choice but to accept the reinstatement of the Senju seat. Ren nodded slowly but pressed again. But I still don't see the significance. The Hokage would he suddenly exclaimed, realization hitting him. The Hokage has the ultimate power over the decision, which means he can't just support Danzo arbitrarily anymore. If he does, then even his supporters will start to feel dissatisfaction. If he keeps doing it, it'll create turmoil in the village. But then, why would he agree to the Senju vote being re-established? Yoru stayed silent for a moment, then answered flatly, because of Princess Tsunade. Ren scoffed at that. Do you honestly believe that old man is so sentimental? I refuse to believe he'd make such a big decision just because of some emotions. If this were the Hiruzen from the anime, Ren might have believed it, but this version wasn't that soft. Yoru saw Ren's refusal and let out an audible sigh, leaning back in his seat, which actually shocked Ren. It was the first time he'd seen Yoru look so tired. Without waiting for Ren to speak, Yoru began. Sarutobi is strong, yes, and ruthless enough to abandon emotions when needed. But he's still human. He's holding a scale right now, on one side, his student and the village, on the other, his best friend. He wants to balance both sides. He looked Ren square in the eye. You know everything about your birth. Ren nodded, so Yoru continued. Then you'd know why he would try to appease Princess Tsunade. Re-establishing the vote and giving back the businesses, that's just one way to atone for the things he's done. But since he still has to look out for his friend, he'll definitely make the wrong decisions later on, which we can use. Ren frowned slightly. I still don't think making an enemy of that old man is a good idea. Yoru nodded in agreement. We're not trying to make the old man an enemy. We just have to show that Sarutobi is getting on in age, that he can't make decisions with only the village's best interest in mind anymore. Once that seed takes root, it'll be easier for a new Hokage to take over when everything's finished. Otherwise, if there's a sudden change after a major conflict, the common people will think one thing. Ren finished the thought for him, that it was a rebellion from the new Hokage to take the position from the old man. Yoru hummed in agreement. Exactly. Though the ultimate decision always comes down to strength, we're not living in the Warring States period anymore. That means, aside from strength, we also need people, otherwise the daimyo system would have been eliminated already. The new Hokage, whoever it shall be, will need the support of the people. Without that, there's a high chance another rebellion would follow. If that happens, it would be better for the Leaf to just give up its status as one of the 5 great villages, lest it be completely eliminated by the others. Ren stayed quiet for a long moment, then sighed. It doesn't sound easy in words, so imagine how difficult it'll really be. Yoru didn't soften his tone at all. It won't be easy. There are many things that need to be done before the real action can begin. The most important thing, though, is for you to increase your strength. That's the only way I can start putting my plan into motion. Ren stared straight at him, then asked bluntly, then give me the Flying Thunder God Jutsu. The complete version. Yoru shook his head without even hesitating. Nobody has it. It was removed from the Scroll of Seals after Sarutobi took over again after Minato's death. You'll have to work it out on your own. But he opened a drawer and tossed a scroll across the desk. Ren caught it reflexively. Yoru explained, this scroll contains every single elemental jutsu the village has except for the forbidden ones. It also has all the recorded genjutsu and sensing techniques, plus some unique jutsu that were developed over time. His tone was so casual it almost sounded like he was handing Ren a grocery list. But Ren's eyes widened. So many jutsu. If he learned them all, wouldn't his ninjutsu practically hit 99 out of 100? Seeing Ren's awestruck expression, Yoru spoke, don't look so shocked. Most of those were developed by Lord Tobirama himself. If you'd had the complete Senju lineage from the start, you'd have had them much earlier. So go ahead and learn them all. But I want you proficient in every single one. If even one is lacking, I'll hang you by your ankles from the village gates for a month. Ren just grinned and flashed him a peace sign. Don't worry, boss man, I'll make sure to get them all down. Yoru nodded and said, all right, go on, I'll handle the Senju affairs with Princess Tsunade until you return to the village for good. Ren nodded then, without another word, he bolted for the door, not even bothering with his usual banter. Yoru watched him go, a bit surprised, and muttered under his breath. Is this the way to tame him? Once Ren got the scroll, he happily hopped along the streets of Konoha, humming a cheerful tune. He was about to head home but changed direction at the last second as he needed to talk about a few things with Utakata. Utakata's house was a bit far from his own, though unlike Ren's place near the busy market, Utakata had a whole courtyard-style house to himself on the quieter edge of town. Ren didn't come here often as there was no real reason to, but his chakra signature was still registered in the barrier, so he didn't bother with the front gate. He just hopped over the wall, crossed the yard, and pushed the sliding door open, calling out, "Hey sensei, you ho dash." He didn't get to finish. Standing in the hall was someone who very clearly wasn't Utakata. It was a tall, orange-haired woman he'd never seen before. On reflex, Ren flickered forward, kunao in hand, pressing the cold blade to her neck as he asked casually, "Who are you, lady?" The woman's eyes went wide and instead of answering, she screamed so loud the walls practically shook. Kai. Utakata appeared an instant later, dropping into the hallway like he'd teleported. He froze when he saw the scene, his fiancée shrieking at the top of her lungs, and his student trying to calm her down but still holding the kunai way too close. Utakata closed his eyes and prayed to whatever sage was listening, "Give me strength." Ren, Utakata sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose, "This is Nami, my fiancé. And Nami, you already know who Ren is, so why are you shrieking?" Ren slowly turned his head to look at the woman. She was gorgeous, very tall, with striking orange hair like tangerine, and all of her screamed a certain navigator. Nami pouted at Utakata as if Ren wasn't there at all. "That's how this is supposed to go, right? A stranger breaks in, pulls a kunai on me, I scream, then you appear like a hero to save me." Utakata stared at her flatly. "Yes, that could happen. But this isn't a stranger. This is my student. Shouldn't you adapt to the scenario?" Nami's eyes brightened like someone had just gifted her a new idea. "You're right. I should have adapted. Thanks, dear." She leaned in for a kiss but Ren jumped in, horrified. "You witch? How did you do that? Sensei never agreed to play with us like this." The temperature dropped. Ren felt death for the second time the same day, so he jumped straight to the ceiling beam just in time as the floor below cracked from Nami's sudden punch. She turned her head, smiling sweetly up at him. "What did you just call me?" Ren's sweat dripped onto the floor as he scrambled for his words. Ma'am, how did you get Sensei to play with you? He always just stares at us with that blank you're all idiots face." Nami looked smug as she dusted her knuckles. "Well, I have my ways." Ren dropped from the ceiling and landed lightly, bowing dramatically. "Hello, my name is Ren Takahashi or Senjo, whichever you prefer. But you can call me Ren." Nami gave him a sly grin and returned the bow with a teasing curtsy. "My name is Nami Narana. You can call me ma'am or Sensei's wife, whichever you prefer." They both flashed the same mischievous grin at each other. Then as if on cue they spoke in perfect sync. "Do you remember any of Yuta-chan's embarrassing incidents you can tell me? Do you have any of Sensei's embarrassing incidents you can discuss?" Chapter 169, Thank you Sensei. "Absolutely not." Utakata's voice cut right through Ren and Nami's conspiratorial chatter. Both of them turned to look at him, pouting like scolded children. Nami complained first, "What's the matter, Yuta-chan? I'm just having a conversation with your student." Ren chimed in immediately, "That's right, Sensei. We're just talking, no need to be offended." Utakata gave them both a blank stare, completely unmoved by their attempt to play innocent. "A conversation that happens at the expense of my dignity is not something I want you two to have." Ren huffed, leaning back with his arms crossed. "Well, that's your stand. We're the ones having the conversation, so it's up to us what topic we choose." He turned back to Nami, grinning. "Ma'am, I don't really have any embarrassing stories. He's always been like a block of ice with us. But don't worry, I'll make sure you meet my dad. He'll definitely have many things to share." Nami's eyes turned into crescent moons with how wide she was smiling. She nodded conspiratorially, "All right then, remember your promise. And when that happens, I'll make sure you get some very satisfying information in return." Utakata, standing to the side, just stared at the two of them, numb to their plotting. Honestly, he'd expected their first meeting to go exactly like this, so he wasn't even surprised. As for embarrassing moments, as long as he threatened Juaki properly, his secrets would stay buried forever. He was sure of that much. He cleared his throat and turned to Ren. "Why are you here?" Ren stopped playing around and spoke more seriously. "I want the third book." Utakata stared at him for a moment, then nodded. "Come to my study." He glanced at Nami as he walked away. "He'll be leaving soon, so there's no need for snacks or tea." Ren threw up a hand in protest. "I want snacks." Utakata turned his blank stare on him, voice flat. "You don't? Really?" Something in his tone made Ren hesitate. He glanced at Nami and she looked just as confused as he was, and then he just nodded, falling in step behind his sensei. The study was larger than Utakata's office in the hospital but had the same neat, restrained feel. Unlike the hospital, though, there were a few personal touches photos on the shelves and walls. There was a Genin team picture of Team Jiraiya and Genin team photo of Team 1 was besides that, another of Team Jiraiya grown up, then one with all of them together at Minato's wedding. One showed them all standing together again, but this time Minato wore the ceremonial Hokage robes. One photo, in the corner, made Ren freeze. It was a wedding group shot of Juaki and Sayaka, with Jiraiya, Utakata, Minato, Kushina, and Tsunade in it. Ren picked it up slowly, eyes drawn to one face in particular. It was the first time he'd actually seen his mother. There hadn't been a single photo of her in his entire house. Before his memories returned, he'd been too young to care about something like that, and after he'd regained them, he just hadn't bothered. She was gone. What did it matter what she looked like? But now, staring at the photo, he understood why everyone said he was the spitting image of her. The same blue hair but longer, the same light blue eyes, that same grin that made it look like she didn't have a single worry in the world. Utakata stayed silent, watching him. He knew what was going through Ren's mind, so he sat down and let him have his moment. After a few seconds, Ren set the photo back down. His expression was calm, almost indifferent. He knew now what had really happened when he was born. Sayaka had died because of him. He didn't know if the ability to own the flow was his or the original Ren's, but either way, that was why she'd faced the wrath of the world when she gave birth. That was why she'd died. He wouldn't let it slow him down, but he'd remember it. When he made the world his bitch, he'd make sure to collect that debt with interest. He took a seat across from Utakata, who finally spoke. Do you know what happened at the time of your birth? Ren nodded. Utakata sighed, rubbing his temple. I only learned the whole truth a little while ago myself. Originally, I thought Tsunade-sama knew about your birth but didn't care, that she just left. There were some doubts, but I couldn't voice them. Even Juaki refused to tell me anything, so I figured it must involve something bigger. Ren shook his head. Sensei, I get it. It's not your fault. The blame lies with the third and Danzo. I understand the old man's desire to keep Lady Tsunade on the sand front, but he shouldn't have told her I died. That probably broke her too much, and then they made her hold a fake cremation for us. They twisted the story so everyone believed it. It's no wonder you couldn't do anything. He leaned back. Also, don't worry too much. Lady Tsunade will probably want to deal with the third herself. They've been student and teacher for so many years, it's better to leave that to them. Utakata nodded, his expression turning serious as he spoke. What you did today in the meeting with Danzo was very dangerous. Although I don't understand your reason for being so vindictive toward him, such openly hostile interaction at such an early stage isn't good. Ren leaned back in his chair, replying casually, it wasn't without reason though. He sent 3 squads of root operatives to assassinate me, 5 elite Jonin level fighters. Fortunately, I'm awesome and came out on top, but it still annoyed me a bit, so I played with him a little. Utakata countered sharply, yes, and that playing is exactly what's dangerous. Danzo is a very, very petty man. His ego is that of a child. You repeatedly put him down today, and he'll surely retaliate somehow. I know, and he knows that he can't do anything to you or Juaki for now unless he acts on his own. But what about Yujao and Hitachi? What if he sends someone after them? They don't have your strength, both of them just have the strength of a normal Jonin right now. If an elite Jonin attacks them, they'd surely die. Ren nodded thoughtfully, I know, sensei. But it was also necessary. The clan leaders have long grown used to the third covering for Danzo, that's what allowed him to go wild in the first place. What they needed was proof that someone could stand against him, even with the third present. A lot of people knew I'm the grandson of the second, but they weren't sure if Danzo would care or if the third would back him up in front of me. But today, the clan leaders saw that I could speak out against Danzo openly. Even when the third stepped in and I apologized, I still kept taking digs at him, and the third let it go. That alone will boost the clan leader's confidence. He leaned forward, voice calm, that makes whatever plan you and Commander Yoro are plotting much easier, right? If you have the support of the other clan leaders too, it becomes easier, right? This is exactly in line with what Commander told me. He asked me to be the light, right? That's what I did. Danzo is the darkness, and I was the light. A proof was needed that the light can contest the darkness, and that proof was given today. A lot of the small clan leaders are only afraid of Danzo because they think no one can go against the man backed by the Hokage. But after today, they'll have some confidence. It'll make it easier for the commander to use that when the time comes. He looked Utakata in the eye. As for Yujao and Hitachi, I'm not worried about Yujao. She's in Kakashi's squad and has Itaki alongside her. So they're in the same situation as me. Unless Danzo acts himself, they can either win or get away. As for Hitachi, the deterrence of the Abarame clan might not stop Danzo if he really wants to act, so I'll ask the commander to make some preparations for him too since he's in the Umbu. Utakata thought for a while, then nodded and pulled out a small book from his desk drawer, sliding it across the table toward Ren. Ren picked it up and flipped through the pages of Funjutsu for Barbarians, Volume 3. This one was thicker than the previous volumes, so he figured it must contain new, advanced aspects he hadn't tackled yet. He tucked the book into his storage belt and nodded at Utakata. Thank you, sensei. Utakata waved him off and asked, anything else? Ren nodded, tapping his fingers lightly on the table. A ceiling formula spread across the room in an instant. Utakata glanced at the table and there was a brief spark of approval in his eyes. I was a bit skeptical whether you were truly at the level to need that third volume, but if you can hijack my ceiling formula like this, it seems you've really crossed the threshold. You're a real level 5 Funjutsu master now. Ren couldn't help but smile at the compliment, but his expression turned serious as he asked, Sensei, do you have anything related to the flying thunder god from Minato-san? Utakata paused, staring at him for a moment. Something seemed to click for him and he nodded, stood up, and moved toward one of the walls. Ren watched as Utakata removed a hidden section of the wall to reveal a massive vault built right into the house. He opened it, stepped inside, and disappeared from view for a minute while Ren waited quietly outside. Soon enough, Utakata returned, closed the vault, and replaced the wall section as if it had never been touched. Sitting back down, he pushed 2 things across the desk to Ren, a thick stack of research papers and a bundle of 4 3-pronged kunao. Utakata spoke evenly as Ren picked up one of the kunao, inspecting its unique design. It's not much, but this is all I have left related to the FTG. Everything else was ordered to be handed over to the village. These kunao were the conduits Minato used to place his sealing formula. The documents contain our research and analysis, what kinds of materials could hold the marker, how the seals could be engraved, and other details about the anchors. They might help you a lot as they also have some notes from the three of us, me, Minato, and Kushina, who was, unarguably, the best funjutsu user the village has ever seen. Study them well. Ren carefully stored the kunao and the documents in his storage belt, then looked at Udakata and gave him a respectful nod. Thank you, sensei. Udakata just waved him toward the door. All right, go now. Ren got up and turned to leave, genuinely relieved that Udakata hadn't pressed him with questions. He knew that even with Udakata, some information wasn't safe to share yet. Just as he reached the door, Udakata's voice called out behind him a random comment, yet strangely thoughtful. There was a time when Minato excitedly reached a conclusion. He said, space isn't an obstacle. It doesn't actually hinder you. I never understood what he meant, but maybe it'll help you. Ren paused at the doorway, turning the words over in his mind. He didn't fully understand either, but maybe once he learned Minato's seal, it would click into place. He glanced back. Thank you, sensei. Once Udakata saw Ren going, he returned to Nami, who was feeding a few toads in the backyard. Seeing Udakata stand beside her, she smiled softly as she asked, is your student gone? Udakata nodded and didn't speak much, but Nami continued talking, about how cute Ren was, how he'll be a lady killer in the future, how the two of them would get along really well. Seeing this, Udakata just sighed but got startled a bit when he heard Nami's next words. I remember you had a female student, right? I really want to meet her too. Udakata imagined Nami and Ujo together, and what he imagined wasn't good for his mental health, so he erased it and just nodded. Nami also fell quiet for a while, then asked, Uta-chan, why didn't you let me prepare snacks for your student? For everyone I've cooked till now said my cooking is divine. She spoke a bit smugly, but Udakata's response made her blush. Udakata spoke, yes, that is why I didn't want him to taste your cooking. As far as I know him, he would start coming here regularly and disturb our time together. Nami shyly fluttered her eyebrows as she leaned closer to Udakata and spoke, oh, your sugary mouth, although you don't speak much when you do, it practically drips honey, doesn't it? The two of them stayed locked in their position for a bit, letting their eyes do the talking. Then Udakata picked Nami up as she let out a yelp, but she let her continue. He carried her like this to their room, touched the door a few times as he activated a few seals, and went in as the door closes behind them. Chapter 170. Goodbye politics, hello punching S-rank shinobi. After returning from Udakata's house, the rest of the day passed in a blur. As soon as his chakra recovered, Ren made the maximum number of chakra clones and assigned them work. Now that he had access to every elemental jutsu the village possessed, the clones for elemental practice could grind mastery at full speed. The funjutsu clones would have one sole task, study Minato's seal and make it his own. As for himself, he focused on hardening, keeping it active constantly so the base form would improve naturally. He still needed to think about advanced applications, but with Kiri's Hima as a solid reference point, he could start developing derivative techniques first. The next day, early in the morning, Ren was standing in Yora's office, pestering him about S-rank missions. Come on, boss man, you know I can easily do them? My record is so bleak right now, no one would believe it's the great me if it doesn't have at least 100 S-rank missions. Yoru didn't even bother to look up as he countered him, you've got a twisted imagination. If a common shinobi heard you'd done 4 S-rank missions already, they'd freak out. Hold your horses. Ren whined dramatically, but A-rank missions have become so boring, they don't give me the slightest challenge anymore, so doesn't it make sense to do S-rank missions instead? Surprisingly, Yoru actually agreed. Alright then, I'll give you one. Near Kenshi town, there's Tsukoma village, a minor settlement that used to have an elite jonin as their strongest fighter. Lately they've been acting bolder than anyone at that level should. There's suspicion an S-rank combatant has emerged there, but Tsukoma village keeps denying it. Your mission is to determine whether there really is an S-rank in that village. If there is, eliminate them. Ren's eyes practically sparkled. Really, boss? You're giving me such a great mission. This checked every box, an S-rank mission and a chance to fight another S-rank shinobi. Yora's tone stayed flat. Yes, but make absolutely sure the leaf doesn't get implicated, not even slightly. And if you fail to complete the mission, or if the leaf's name gets out, he paused for effect. I'll have you do D-rank missions for the rest of your life. Ren immediately nodded, practically vibrating with excitement. He'd complete this mission perfectly if it meant avoiding that threat. Yoru added one more thing. Also, you won't be handling any standard jonin duties for now, so focus on improving first, and after that you'll be assigned some official duties. Ren nodded and Yoru waved him off, and Ren left the office grinning. Once Ren was gone, the room fell into its usual quiet. After a while, there was a soft knock on one of the hidden doors. Yoru raised his head slightly, considered for a moment, then spoke, come in. The hidden door slid open, revealing a figure whose ghostly white eyes and prominent forehead veins left no doubt about his clan. The newcomer stepped inside and spoke, let's talk. Yoru's voice didn't change as he motioned for him to sit and replied, yes, let's. After leaving Yoru's office, Ren had practically teleported back to the forest on the way to Kenshi town. The S-rank mission was one thing, but the other was to check the rewards he had received. That's right, he didn't just get a single reward but 2. One of them was obviously for his jonin promotion, and the other was for becoming a council member, authorized representative. The second reward had surprised him slightly, and the authorized representative in brackets even more, because if there was a reward for becoming an authorized representative, didn't that mean he'd get an even bigger reward for becoming a full council member in the future? He created more distance between himself and the village before he finally opened the first reward. Congratulations, user, for reaching the Jonin rank. Rewards: 3 S rank points, 5 intermediate level mastery points, 4 advanced level mastery points, 2 master level mastery points. Random talent upgrade. Ren grinned so wide that it hurt his cheeks. 3 S rank points were good, but the mastery points were even better. These could practically solve all his problems related to mastery progress. Still, he had his suspicions, so he asked the system. Hey buddy, do you I don't know, like me? Because even earlier the reward I got for 90% chakra control was exactly what I needed, and now this time too. The system's response came before even a second passed. The host is requested to let go of these delusions. The mastery points were rewarded because the Jonin level is more focused on polishing one's skills, which is why an appropriate reward has been generated. Ren mentally labeled the system as Tsundere and looked at the last reward. 1 talent upgrade. This was obvious, but he still looked at the description. The user can upgrade one of his talents after a wheel is spun to determine the talent. Of course you couldn't let me just enjoy it, could you? Ren complained, but he was still happy. Right now, he had 5 talents: improved chakra control, enhanced reflexes, X, genjutsu resistance, S+, funjutsu, minor uzumaki, and space release talent, X, and he'd be happy if any one of them got upgraded. He happily spun the wheel but noticed there were only 3 options: chakra control, genjutsu, and funjutsu. That meant either his X rank talents were the limit or this upgrade was only applicable to those below X rank. The wheel spun and after a few clicks, it stopped at funjutsu, and a system notification rang. Funjutsu talent upgraded, minor uzumaki extreme uzumaki. As soon as he received this talent, there was no pain or dramatic indicator, but when he thought of any funjutsu problems that he didn't understand before, he could now easily solve it and understand it on a deeper level. He immediately made a clone and dispelled it to refresh the clone network working on Minato's seal. Now the funjutsu clones in his basement would be able to study it even better. He didn't use the stat points for now and instead opened the next reward. Congratulations, user, for becoming a council member, authorized representative. Rewards: observe upgrade. Observe emotions, new feature. The user can now see brief thoughts of targets. These thoughts will only represent the target's emotions toward the user. Ren felt he should just remove his mouth so that it could grin alone without hurting his cheeks because this reward was just that good. With his observe chain, he could already check the last 4 people his target had met, but now he could even read their surface thoughts. That was perfect for someone who'd have to play mind games in the council. He stopped in his tracks and waited for Kimura, who soon arrived huffing and panting since Ren had increased his speed more. Kimura had to work harder to catch up. Ren used observe on Kimura. Kimura, level 59. Thoughts, improved to serve my liege better. Ren immediately closed observe and rushed ahead. Though he was happy that someone had this level of dedication for him, it still felt weird now that he could actually see it spelled out. But this also proved exactly how the new function worked and it was absolutely perfect. Ren was very satisfied and used the S rank points he had just got and invested them all in his vitality, raising it to 88. This also caused his chakra to increase by 2 points surprisingly. He opened his full status page and observed the changes. Name: Ren Takahashi. Level: 76, 75, 76. Attributes: Strength: 76, 75, 76. Agility: 79, 75, 79. Intelligence: 81, 79, 81. Vitality: 88, 85, 88. Chakra: 82, 80, 82. Available stat points. Talents: improved chakra control, enhanced reflexes, X, genjutsu resistance, S+, funjutsu, X uzumaki, space release talent, X. Mastery panel: chakra control, 93%, 8793, master. Shadow clone mastery, 90%, master. Funjutsu mastery, 75%, 6975, advanced. Yang release mastery, 89%, 8489, advanced. Wind style mastery, 79%, 6879, advanced. Earth style mastery, 89%, 8189, advanced. Fire release mastery, 69%, 5969, intermediate. Space release mastery, 51%, 4651, intermediate. Iryujutsu mastery 66%, 6066, intermediate. Bukaijutsu, weaponry, 72%, 3872, intermediate. Lightning release mastery, 40%, 2540, basic. Yin release mastery, 41%, basic. Water release mastery, 18%, beginner. Mastery points: 10 intermediate level points, 5 plus 5. 4 advanced level points, plus 4. 2 master level points, plus 2. Ninja panel. Ninjutsu, 77/100, 6777. Taijutsu, 84/100, 8184. Genjutsu, 66/100, 5066. Funjutsu, 75/100, 6975. Special stats. Charisma, 72, 5572. Perception, 93. His level was still 76, and he didn't plan to change that anytime soon. If he invested points in it now, it would soon reach level 80, which meant that A-rank missions would stop giving him rewards, and that was absolutely unacceptable to him. After all, even mosquito meat was meat to a starving person, and he'd already confirmed with the system that 10 Jonin level points could be exchanged for 1 S-rank point. That meant completing 100 A-rank missions could net him a full S-rank point, and that was much more sustainable than begging to take continuous S-rank missions from Euro, which wouldn't be possible in the long run. With the addition of the new mastery points, his status page looked a bit richer now, and that made him quite happy. His charisma had also increased a lot. It was almost a full 20 points higher than before. Is it because of what I did in the council hall? Ren wondered. That was the only logical reason he could think of. After all, standing there and openly taking shots at Danzo while making some of the strongest people in the village listen to him would definitely require a whole lot of charisma. If that didn't qualify, he couldn't imagine what would. He closed his system panel with a satisfied nod, then finally took out the map and checked his current location. If he traveled while training, it'd take him about 2 days to reach Sukoma village, so he decided to do exactly that. Before setting off, he made a clone with most of his chakra, and only then did he activate the training seal and begin his run through the trees, pace picking up to a blur. Behind him, poor Kimura could only grit his teeth and push his pace even more, forced to keep up with his outrageously fast master. Ren just grinned, humming happily to himself as the wind rushed past. Chapter 171, Next time, just stay a backwater nobody. Kenshi Town was one of the few major towns in the Land of Fire, and Ren's next stop on his mission. The Zukoma village, his true target, was one of the many small villages clustered around Kenshi Town. There were countless such villages scattered throughout the Land of Fire. Usually, the strongest person in these villages was only at the level of an elite Jonin, which was exactly why they were called small villages. But if a village managed to produce a true S-rank shinobi, then the status changed. Villages with an S-rank shinobi at the top were known as minor villages, and these minor villages often had their own cage or shadow leader, although their strength obviously wasn't on par with the cages of the 5 great nations. The true great villages were those with multiple S-rank shinobi and at least one real cage level combatant. Each major country in the shinobi world had exactly one such village, and for the Land of Fire, that was the Hidden Leaf Village. In a way, the Leaf Village held the power of the fist, but they were still technically subordinate to the Fire Daimyo. Of course, the daimyo had to give the Hokage enough leeway to act freely, because a cage wasn't someone a mere daimyo could truly control. How much authority the daimyo had over a village depended entirely on how much freedom the cage chose to allow. Just as the Fire Daimyo had the leaf under his rule, he also governed all the small villages scattered throughout the Land of Fire. But since these small villages usually only had elite jonin at best, neither the leaf nor the daimyo paid them much mind beyond what was necessary. However, if one of these villages suddenly produced an S-rank shinobi, the entire balance shifted. An S-rank shinobi could carve out their own minor village, claim a slice of territory, and even be recognized by a new daimyo, splitting the Land of Fire's control and drawing the interest of other great villages. And that was exactly what the other villages and daimyo would prefer. Any fracture in the Land of Fire's power was an advantage to them. But, this situation could also happen with others, so, while on the surface, all the great villages allowed shinobi from small villages to grow, the moment they crossed a certain line, they were left with only 2 options: merge completely with the great village or die. The leaf must have done this countless times before, and now, it was Ren's turn to eliminate the next potential problem. From the perspective of a small village, it might seem cruel and unfair. But from the perspective of a future high-level leader of the leaf, it was just necessary maintenance. Who'd want an unstable component in their brand new, finely tuned machine? That was exactly why Ren had accepted this mission without hesitation, aside from the fact that he wanted to fight an S-rank shinobi, and now, roaming in the markets of Kenshi Town, he'd already spread out his butterflies, the silent scouts flitting through the forests and fields, combing the area for Sukoma village and its suspected S-rank shinobi. It took Ren about 2 days to gather all the information he needed, with his butterfly summons flitting tirelessly across the forests and narrow village paths around Sukoma village. Sukoma itself was about half a day's journey from Kenshi Town for the locals, which meant Ren could cover the distance in just a few hours at most. The situation in the village, though, was more interesting than he'd expected. On the surface, everything looked perfectly normal, almost too normal. From the information his butterflies gathered, this peaceful state had only begun a few days ago. Before that, Sukoma had behaved just like any other small village of its level, laid back, unguarded, largely unnoticed. But now they were trying very hard to look normal. The hints were subtle but clear if you knew what to look for: more disguised patrols at all times and even more at night, hidden entrances being sealed off, a full sensor network deployed after dark, and certain important people slipping in and out of the central building at odd hours. Any one of these changes alone wouldn't have raised much suspicion. But together they practically rang alarm bells. So the first part was confirmed: there was something brewing inside Sukoma village, definitely. The only thing left was to figure out what. Was there really an S-rank shinobi here, or was it something else? Fortunately, Ren already had a lead. One name had popped up the most during his information sweep: Roku Amai. He'd come up again and again, always hovering at the center of the village's new tension. If anyone was worth investigating, it was him. One last confirmation was all Ren needed. Once he got eyes on Roku and used observe, the truth would be clear. Was Roku really S rank, or just a convenient decoy, and after that, the rest of the mission would practically complete itself. But Ren wasn't reckless enough to just charge in blind, not when he had the tools to prepare properly. So the next step was obvious: gather more intel about Roku. His first stop was the local bounty center. A single bingo book couldn't possibly contain every active target, especially not A-rank bounties that were specific to certain regions. That's why each area usually kept its own local bingo book, with updated names and threat levels for that territory. With his plan in place, Ren changed his appearance completely, as he couldn't risk anyone recognizing him. This was because he'd already earned enough of a reputation in the bounty circles, and as per the directives he couldn't do anything that would leave any trails behind. When he arrived at the center, Ren paid the fee without a single complaint. It was a neat 1,000 ryo in exchange for the local bingo book. He flipped through its thin, slightly ragged pages, eyes scanning each entry as he searched for any local A-rank shinobi worth noting. Though his main target was obviously Rokuamai, it made sense to check every potential A-ranker in Zukoma village. After all, there was always a chance that the real threat was someone else hiding under the radar. But it turned out he'd been overthinking it. There were only 5 shinobi from Zukoma village with bounties high enough to be listed as A-rank, and 3 of those were barely Jonin level, their reputations inflated by local legends and nothing more. That left only 2 real possibilities: the current village leader, Kiyoruhomu, and the semi-retired former leader himself, Rokuamai. With his focus confirmed, Ren headed for his next stop, the underground information brokers. Unlike the bounty centers, which were semi-legitimate and sometimes even acknowledged by the great villages, but these brokers operated entirely in the shadows. Their sole business was to buy and sell information, no matter how sensitive. Ren had used them before too, selling carefully crafted half-truths about himself, the young genius of the leaf. It didn't hurt him at all, but the bait was good enough to draw out bounty hunters and wandering S-ranks who might come looking. That little stunt had earned him a VIP access pass since he sold information about Leaf's genius. This gave him a convenient 10% discount on any purchase he made. Still, for this job, he didn't use the pass. It might leave a trail that someone clever could follow, and Ren wasn't about to leave footprints in the dark. He had his butterflies locate the nearest broker, walked in with his disguised appearance, and bought a complete dossier on Rokuamai, from birth up until now. The price was a tidy 500,000 ryo, which was the usual rate for full information on an elite jonin. He schemed through the early pages quickly, which included birthplace, academy graduation age, first missions, and none of it mattered. The main points were what he wanted. Back when he was active, Roku had been the strongest shinobi in the area, a big fish in a small pond. But a few years ago, he'd all but retired. These days, he only ever emerged if Zukoma village was in true danger. His so-called retirement was odd too, as Roku had no missing limbs, no permanent, life-threatening injuries that would force him to step back. According to every report Ren could buy, Roku had simply decided he'd rather spend time with his family and train the village's young hopefuls, living quietly until the end of his days. The only thing that even hinted at trouble was an old rumor that a rogue shinobi had attacked the village a while back. Roku came out of retirement to handle him, but the fight left him with major injuries which were bad enough that he hadn't been seen in public since. Ren frowned slightly as he closed the last page. If all that was true, then the odds of Roku jumping from a slightly broken elite jonin to an S-rank threat were close to 0. His taijutsu, which was his main fighting style, would be the first thing to suffer from any serious injuries. Sure, there was always a chance he'd somehow recovered, but advanced to S-rank level on top of that was just absurd. Just to be sure, Ren also bought a file on Kiyoruhomu. But that turned out to be a dead end too. Kyoru was as ordinary as they came. His skills just barely placed him at elite jonin level here. In the Leaf or any other great village, he'd still be considered a regular jonin at best. But that was how it always was with these small villages. Once someone grew stronger than the other jonin around them, even if it was by a small margin, then they'd immediately be labeled an elite jonin, whether they actually measured up or not. All in all, Zukoma's so-called strength was barely holding up under the smallest bit of scrutiny. Ren snapped the folder shut and let out a quiet breath. If Roku really was the target, then this would be easier than he'd expected. But something still didn't sit right. Since the information he'd gathered was still too vague to draw any solid conclusions, Ren knew there was only one option left, and that was to see this Rokuamai for himself. Once the decision made, he flickered away like a ghost through the forest, crossing the distance in just over an hour until the quiet, isolated Zukoma village came into view. The place looked exactly like what you'd expect from a small, half-forgotten settlement clinging to the edges of a major town's influence. Rows of old wooden houses with sagging roofs, a scattering of concrete buildings that looked like they'd been dropped in from another century, and near the edges there were thatched huts so shabby they could barely keep out the rain. As for the village walls, that was a generous word. They were mostly just sturdy wooden fences patched here and there with stretches of proper stone walls, like someone had tried to upgrade but run out of cobblestones halfway through. The so-called defenses were laughable. One glance was enough for Ren's mind to start picking them apart. The funjutsu work on the outer barrier was passable at best, the signature of a level 4 funjutsu master, tops. For someone like Ren, dismantling it would be easier than breathing. The sensor network was marginally better but still wouldn't be able to spot him. After all, even one of the best sensors in the Leaf couldn't pin him down when he didn't want to be found. So, with that, he slipped inside. He roamed the village streets openly, blending in perfectly in the borrowed appearance of a local farmer. The poor man would wake up in a few hours with a headache and no memory of lending his face to an infiltration mission. A single butterscotch ice cream in hand completed the disguise. No one ever suspects an old, impoverished guy licking ice cream in broad daylight. While he strolled lazily, his butterflies kept feeding him bits and pieces. He already knew the general location of both Kiyoru and Rokuamai. Kiyoru was holed up in the central building, which was the hub of local bureaucracy, but Roku's position was trickier. The old man was tucked away in a sealed-off corner of the village, an area too sensitive to risk sending in bugs that could easily be detected. That meant he'd have to check it himself, and so he did. Ren flickered away from the bustling street so cleanly that the people around him didn't even register his disappearance. He stopped by the central building first to check on Kiyoru. One quick peek and an observe confirmed it. Kiyoru was just an ordinary jonin, level 67, but hailed as elite in this backwater village. It was all exactly as the reports had suggested. Zukoma's standards were a joke. Without wasting another second, Ren left not a trace behind as he headed for the far corner of the village. There, standing awkwardly alone, was a single squat building that looked more like a prison block than a house, just plain concrete, one door, and a lone grimy window. Ren landed silently on the window ledge and leaned forward, eyes narrowing to study the scene inside. The interior was stripped of any comfort, a single tatami mat, a low table pushed to the wall, and heavy metal rods driven deep into the concrete floor, forming a crude ceiling formation around a lone figure. Rokuamai sat cross-legged in the center, eyes closed, his posture rigid, like a man in eternal meditation or a monk serving out penance. The dim light cast sharp shadows across his gaunt face and wiry frame. But none of that mundane detail mattered. What mattered was the pulse of chakra Ren could feel humming faintly around the old man, different from the dry, fractured signature the dossier had led him to expect. A manic grin crept across Ren's lips as he pressed closer, pupils dilating with predatory interest. His fingers drummed once on the window frame, then he vanished again. Chapter 172, An Ocean of Rumors for a Drop of Blood. After leaving Roku's location, Ren didn't rush to act immediately. Instead, he found a small restaurant tucked away in a side street and ordered a simple meal. He ate slowly, each bite giving him time to sift through everything he'd seen. When he'd peeked through that grimy window, he'd confirmed something that even the underground info brokers hadn't been able to pin down. Rokuamai had indeed crossed the threshold to S rank, or at the very least, was right on its edge. At first glance, it shouldn't have made sense. Roku's displayed level was only 73, not even at the limit for a Jonin level fighter. But Ren trusted what he'd seen more. His perfected hyperfocus and that subtle feel for the flow let him read the hidden story in a shinobi's chakra. It was from the same trick he'd used before, that when he'd tested Choza during their little eating contest and seen the thick swirl of chakra around him. Strong fighters had that telltale convergence, a gathering of power that clung to them like gravity. He'd used that reference on other people too. Yoru, Fugaku, and Danzo all had chakra that pulled so tightly it felt like looking into the eye of a storm. Hiruzen, though, that old man was on another level entirely. Just glancing too deeply at the third Hokage's chakra flow made Ren's eyes sting as if he'd stared at the sun for too long. That was the first and last time he'd risked a close look at that monster. So, by comparison, Roku's situation painted a clear enough picture. The chakra convergence around the old man was stronger than Choza's but noticeably weaker than people like Yoru or Danzo, which meant one thing, that Roku really was an S-rank combatant, but he was likely at the lower end of the rank. The real question was why. S-rank shinobi didn't just get there by training the same old basics. They always had something unique, like a technique, a Kekkai Genkai, a specialization so extreme it pushed their power past the normal limits. Roku's known specialty was Taijutsu with lightning style as support. But judging by the scars and the rods embedded in that room, and the fact that his Taijutsu must have suffered after that injury that forced him to retire, an answer could begin to form. So where was his hidden ace? The clue was obvious if you knew where to look. The entire cell practically hummed with lightning chakra. It was so dense it almost clung to the walls. Roku wasn't just sitting there, he was likely creating some super advanced lightning technique, something strong enough to anchor his strength at S rank even with his crippled body. Ren tapped his chopsticks against the table, eyes flicking to the corner of the room as he molded over. Those rods were the only real clue he had right now. They weren't just for show, they had to be a part of whatever Roku was cultivating in that cell. So, the plan stayed the same: gather more pieces of the puzzle, figure out exactly what made Roku tick, and then find the cleanest way to eliminate him without leaving a trace of the leaf's involvement. He finished the last bite of his food, dropped a few ryo on the table, and stood up, a flicker of that same manic grin playing at the edge of his mouth before he quickly hid it as he thought. Hehe, don't you dare make it easy, old man. Ren stayed hidden in Zukoma village for about a week, which was just long enough to piece together a clearer picture of what he was dealing with. Roku had indeed developed an advanced lightning technique, at least that much was certain, but the exact nature of it was still murky. Every time Roku activated it, the entire concrete cell practically hummed with lightning chakra, crackling so thick Ren could almost taste the static in the air. But that alone wasn't the real problem. The danger lay in the subtle sensation Ren picked up every time he got too close. He was certain Roku could sense everything within that humming field. It wasn't ordinary chakra perception, either. That lightning acted like a web, expanding Roku's awareness through every metal rod embedded in the room. One slip, 1 second too long watching, and Ren would risk blowing his cover. Still, the bigger clue came from what that technique didn't do. If it were purely offensive, Ren would have seen a spike in Roku's chakra flow aimed outward, or signs of destructive output. Instead, the power just sat there, coiling around the rods in a tight formation, which left him with a few likely options, and they were either defensive, trapping, or sensing. Lightning wasn't much good for pure defense, unless you were the Raikage with that absurd lightning armor technique, and nobody sane would waste so much chakra just for a boosted sensing jutsu. So that only left one thing that made real tactical sense: trapping. Those rods probably formed the core of an advanced lightning barrier, a formation strong enough to pin down even an S-rank combatant if they weren't careful. It explained the constant hum, the seals hidden around the cell, and the fact that Roku hadn't left that concrete box for days on end. Oddly enough, Ren felt a flicker of relief. If Roku's ace had turned out to be some monstrous offensive lightning release, something along the kind that could tear apart entire squads in a heartbeat, then this mission would have been a headache and a half. He might even have swallowed his pride and asked Yoro to step in, because bragging about solo kills wasn't worth dying for. But this, a trap? That was manageable. From what Ren had gauged, Roku's actual combat strength still hinged on that formation. Without it, he'd be just another busted-up old shinobi with a scary amount of chakra and a reputation a decade out of date. Ren was confident he could take him down with a single punch, even without opening any of his 4 gates. If things did go sideways, he could always test out his prototype Flying Thunder God technique to slip away and try again from another angle. That only left with one thing to do, and that was luring Roku out of the village, and that might be even more difficult than actually dealing with Roku, but still, he already had a great plan in place. This plan would ensure that Roku came out of the village. However, if worst came to worst and Roku still didn't come out of the village, he still had a fallback: his butterfly summons. He could flood the entire village with them and blanket the place in a wide area genjutsu, pin Roku in place while he dealt the finishing blow inside the village. But this was risky, very risky, because a genjutsu of that scale would scream Uchiha to any half-competent shinobi and risk dragging the clan and the village into the mess, which the mission directive specifically forbade. So, that option stayed locked as a last resort. He leaned back against the creaking wooden chair of his rented room as he took one last glance in the direction of Roku's cell, and with that, he slipped out into the night, ready to set his plan in motion. For the past few days, Kenshi Town and the surrounding villages had been buzzing with rumors. Word had spread like wildfire about a traveling auction house named the Azure Dragon Auction House, which had supposedly come all the way from the Land of Lightning, making stops in every major region along the way. People swore that this mysterious auction had already sold all sorts of rare treasures, and one rumor in particular had caused a stir, that they'd once sold an S-rank jutsu to a minor village. Sure, that village had apparently been razed to the ground not long after, but that only made the rumor juicier. An auction that could sell something that powerful made sure that everyone wanted a piece. Now, word was that the Azure Dragon Auction House was traveling through the Land of Fire, and its next stop was Kenshi Town. According to chatter, this would be its final stop before moving on to the Land of Water. The morning sun had barely crested the rooftops when the entire region erupted into an uproar. Posters appeared overnight. They were plastered on walls, fences, and market stalls, announcing that the Azure Dragon Auction House would be holding a small-scale auction exclusively for the nearby villages. Some folks found it suspicious that an auction of this reputation would hold an event just for small fry, but for the villages around Kenshi Town, it was a once-in-a-lifetime chance, because if it was truly a huge auction, then it wouldn't be their turn to buy, would it? But just when the speculation reached a fever pitch, another wave of fresh posters swept through town the next day, and this one was even grander. These posters declared that, after this humble local auction, the Azure Dragon Auction House would host its grandest, final auction for the entire Land of Fire, before leaving for good. Excitement and envy spread in equal measure. Those in the small villages were thrilled they'd get first pick, while the town merchants and nobles were already fighting for seats at the so-called grand event. All of this, of course, was Ren's doing, or more precisely, his clone's doing. His original plan had been far simpler: spread rumors in Zukoma village and a handful of nearby settlements to bait Roku out. If word got around that rare items and maybe even forbidden techniques were up for grabs, how could a shinobi at the brink of S-rank power resist taking a peek, especially if it was a very special metal? But things had snowballed faster than Ren expected. Once the story hit Kenshi Town, merchants and curious nobles started cornering his disguised clones for details, demanding to know why the great auction was limited to tiny villages. Ren, seeing an opportunity, had his clones spin it into an even bigger spectacle. Why not feed the flames? This was his thought. After all, he'd be gone once Roku was dealt with. The Azure Dragon Auction House would vanish as quickly as it appeared, and anyone who tried to dig deeper would find nothing but rumors and gossip. He'd even prepared a neat final twist to tie up any loose ends. The entire auction story could be traced back to the Cloud Village. Rumors would point to the idea that the Azure Dragon Auction House had been selling stolen cloud secrets across the lands, including jutsu, relics, special ores, and even bloodline techniques. If the Cloud learned about this auction house, they'd come storming in to wipe it out and reclaim their lost property. A few stubborn buyers might even end up dead for trying to keep forbidden loot, but that would all be chalked up to the Cloud's retaliation. Ren chuckled to himself as he watched villagers scramble to read the posters from his vantage point on a nearby rooftop, hood drawn low over his eyes. This bait wasn't just a lure for Roku anymore, it was an entire stage play, complete with scapegoats and villains. By the time the curtain dropped, Ren would be halfway back to the leaf and the only thing left behind would be a rumor about a mythical auction that vanished overnight due to them doing something that offended the Cloud Village. Now, all that was left was to keep the act alive, pick the right moment, and draw Roku out from his concrete den and lightning traps, so they could settle this once and for all. For that Ren had even leaked a very special news. The last item in the small-scale auction held by the Azure Dragon auction house would be a thing that almost any lightning-style user needed. The lightning-conductive chakra metal ore.